The story opens in an icy land, where snow covers everything year-round the center of the world, where beasts dwell amid the frozen wastes. A white dragon kept flicking out its long tongue, and a white serpent swallowed the frozen peaks. A polar bear stood there baring its sharp teeth, while a gray bear caused the ground to quake. A giant rat couldn't help but join in a vile rodent defiling the ocean. Suddenly a king appeared with a terrified face, but an emperor who had survived the frozen wastes spoke up. Not only that, a mysterious figure also emerged here. The most frightening thing wasn't the monsters. In that place, where snow blanketed everything year-round, a terrible sound echoed through the frozen wastes. A girl didn't hesitate and leapt powerfully toward the crab before her. Moments later, a massive explosion erupted beneath the thick snow. A huge hand was gripping the black crab's claw tightly. The hand belonged to Greta, who was using all her strength to finish off the creature before her. Suddenly, a foot appeared in Kettle's view. His arrival made the crab tremble uncontrollably. His hand tightened continuously around the weapon he held. In the blink of an eye, Kettle dispatched the creature with a single slash. Immediately after, Kettle cheerfully carried his trophy elsewhere, remarking in astonishment that those spirit folk always wore their ignorance like a medal. Kettle subconsciously looked ahead and muttered how long he'd have to put up with these idiots. The nearby girl overheard and kept asking what idiot meant can you eat it, and he could only helplessly deny it, forget it. Moments later, the girl devoured the black crab with relish. Even Greta beside her matched her appetite. A cold voice rang out, halting their actions. "I told you eating that would kill you." Kettle stood with a stern expression, pressing the point. "It's not even been a week and you've already eaten it all." The girl stammered in response, "No, it's just..." But then a look of pleasure crossed her face, and she said it was an admirable challenge, which left Kettle stunned as he demanded, "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" Suddenly Greta turned pale, his eyes rolling back in a grotesque way. He began foaming at the mouth, eyes white, clutching his neck in pain. Kettle remained silent, while the girl beside him cried out in fear, "Greta, what's wrong with you? Wake up, wake up." Kettle's face grew increasingly dark and strange. Meanwhile, behind them, the girl kept calling out in distress, "Wake up, Greta, get up, hurry." But none of it seemed to concern him. He quietly turned his back and walked away, muttering that this wasn't what he wanted. All of this had happened long ago, when Kettle first stepped into the outside world he had yearned to set foot in, a wondrous realm, a world full of marvels and magic. He quit his job and traveled, climbing the highest mountain on Earth. He had gone alone to a place with a spectacular sunset and ventured to the Earth's core. He even visited places bathed in bright moonlight, setting foot at the southernmost point of the world. It seemed he had been praying for this for a long time, but of course nothing happened. Reality was utterly distant from fantasy. Every night he prayed that when he awakened he'd be in a wondrous world, and one day his prayer was answered. Somewhere on the frozen land, a group of people marched steadily forward when a gruff voice suddenly called out, "It's so cold." The authoritative voice belonged to a blond man, the group's captain. He warned, "If you don't want to die, put on another fur coat." Immediately the long-haired fellow beside him hurriedly replied with a strained expression, "I've already put on another one." Abruptly the short-haired youth nearby buted in, "Captain, no matter how generous the reward, this is suicide crossing the frozen wastes. You're insane." Facing his rebuke, the captain scolded sternly, "Order." Everyone already agreed to this. His words made the other man a bit awkward. He kept deflecting, "We didn't know it would be this bad, damn, it's freezing." Suddenly the white-haired man seated in the carriage made a soft sound. Then he drew himself up with solemn composure. The white-haired man quickly looked toward his mistress and spoke respectfully. "Are you all right, milady?" The girl before him courteously replied. The girl was a radiant maiden, Milena of the Akasha family. Her gentle voice said, "I'm fine," then a piercing scream drowned out her answer. "Damn, I'm freezing to death." Confronted with this rude scene, the white-haired man in the carriage kept shouting, "You coarse brutes." Milena's gaze turned outward. She calmly offered her view, "Don't be too harsh, they're the only ones who agreed to escort us across the frozen wastes." Her face fell as she spotted something, and her voice dropped. "Hey, shouldn't we bring her inside now? She's frozen solid." Meanwhile, outside people were battling gusting snow winds. Every face showed exhaustion. It seemed the white-haired man read Milena's mind. He waved his hand to stop her. "No, you know what's out on the frozen wastes." Hearing this, Milena bowed her head with a pitiful look and stammered, "Monsters, right. This brings to mind a high king. Legend says that long ago an emperor, eager to seize the world, set his mind on conquering the frozen wastes and led his mighty soldiers. A cavalry force, fully equipped and ready, set out in person for the frozen wastes. Though many left, when they returned only the king remained, now gaunt and ravaged. Years later the empire fell and was forgotten. The emperor was presumed lost forever. Then he returned with no soldiers left, only a broken body. He seemed filled with remorse, bitter tears streaming without end. He aged decades in appearance and spoke like a madman. There are monsters on the frozen wastes, but the most terrifying thing is not the monsters." Suddenly the image of Kettle flashed into the emperor's mind. Had he become the obsession in the man's memory? That of savage barbarians. He stood there cold and indifferent to the changing fortunes. They were here. Back in the present, the white-haired man kept reassuring them. It must be just a legend. His words still failed to convince Milena completely. She kept voicing her doubts. Yet the emperor's claims weren't baseless. Many of the creatures he described were later discovered. Facing her doubt, the white-haired man couldn't help but laugh. He said that no one had ever claimed to have seen the Mandy. No matter how much he tried to reassure her, Milena couldn't help feeling sad. She replied slowly, "That's true." At that moment, a single thought kept recurring in her mind. Despite countless adventure tailies, none mentioned the Mandy. Outside, a sudden voice rang out that made everyone's footsteps stop. They all froze. The voice belonged to the captain, whose face had grown unusually serious. Staring ahead with a worried look, he warned, "There's something over there," at his word's end. The long-haired youth beside him panicked and asked, "What is it?" The captain's brow furrowed as he looked forward, as if he were calculating something. In the misty snow, a shadow caught the captain's attention. He involuntarily said, "I can't make it out." Suddenly his eyes went wide in shock, and he hesitated for several beats before, in an uneasy voice, announcing, "I have good news and bad news." The remark terrified the long-haired youth, who muttered, "Damn, we're done for." Then the captain said coldly, "The good news is it's small, and the bad news is..." The shadow ahead kept moving closer to them, and the captain's voice grew agitated. "It's coming toward us." Those words sent everyone outside into a panic. Milena unconsciously looked up and stared out in a daze. Even the black-haired man couldn't hide his shock and whipped his head around. The captain's hand reflexively tightened on the sword at his hip. From the fear in his eyes, it seemed the shadow ahead was no ordinary threat. The captain kept muttering as Kettle stepped a little closer. "A human, huh?" Then Kettle's platinum hair fluttered in the gusts. His muscular body became gradually visible. Kettle's commanding presence now stood tall before them. The sight left the witnesses frozen in terror, and someone suddenly shouted the Mandy. Kettle's blazing, murderous gaze swept steadily forward. He stood arrogantly before the group and said slowly, "I couldn't stand seeing other Mandy, so I went out for a walk." Those words eased their burden and they breathed out. What a relief. A smug smile spread across Kettle's face. He then exclaimed excitedly that he hadn't expected to encounter outsiders in the frozen wastes. "Pleased to meet you all, Mandy Ashen, Kettle." But Kettle's gaze was drawn to their cargo crates. Surprised, he asked, "Are you merchants?" And received the reply, "Yes." Hearing that, Kettle narrowed his eyes and probed, "So you are mercenaries escorting the caravan?" The captain, as if struck, replied unconsciously, "That's right." The information made him thoughtful. He said slowly, "I advise you to turn back, though you probably won't listen." Kettle's icy words unnerved them, and the captain's face showed awkwardness. Suddenly he realized something and asked with curiosity, "Are your employers in that carriage?" Kettle's eyes were drawn to the luxurious carriage, which made Milena inside panic. For a moment she opened her eyes wide in terror. Meanwhile the captain outside seemed so angry he trembled, yet he gave no outward reaction. Their silence only made Kettle more excited. He eagerly offered, "I'd like to be hired too." The words he just spoke sent the people before him into a panic. The captain shouted in astonishment, "What?" Faced with his agitation, Kettle remained utterly calm and retorted, "Was I not clear? I want to help you cross the frozen wastes." The captain grew increasingly uneasy, his mind racing. Why would a legendary Mandy ask for a job? Does he simply want one? Yet outwardly he feigned composure and probed, "So you bear no hostility?" Kettle answered calmly, "If I were hostile, you'd all be dead already." The atmosphere dropped into a heavy silence in an instant. The faces of the captain and his men went dark. Then the long-haired youth stammered, "Captain." Meanwhile, the captain raised his arm slightly forward with a pensive air. Suddenly his authoritative voice rang out, drawing Milena's attention inside. "Have you heard?" She quickly replied, "I know." Meanwhile, the white-haired man sitting up front kept asking, "What's happening?" The captain outside kept his cold expression and spoke slowly. "He wants to be hired as a mercenary. What will you do?" Faced with this dangerous proposal, Milena's face darkened. She didn't know how to handle it properly. Her next words unleashed a fierce, murderous intent in Kettle. "If we fight, what will happen?" In his view, a moment later she received a firm reply from him, "I'm not encouraging that." His words left Milena momentarily silent. After a moment she regained her composure and said slowly, "I understand, tell him we accept." On hearing that decision, the captain quickly replied, "Understood, milady." However, his feet did not move an inch. But then the captain stepped up before Kettle and declared loudly, "You're hired." This made him unconsciously break into a satisfied smile. The smile quickly hardened into coldness. Kettle sneered sarcastically, "Well, that's very good news." His bizarre expression left the onlookers awkward and plainly terrified. The only one with the nerve to speak was the captain, who kept demanding what. Unluckily, Kettle just looked at him mockingly and replied, "Don't be afraid, you're only soldiers. I need to speak directly with your employer." His actions made the others more on edge, and one warned, "If you try anything." Kettle cut him off, "Careful now." At that he flashed a triumphant look across his handsome face and stepped past the captain. The scene terrified the long-haired youth. He blurted out, stammering, "Captain, is it okay to let him meet her?" The captain answered, "Our employer has accepted." Suddenly the fur-coated man spoke hesitantly, "Still, we're only mercenaries, shouldn't we?" Before he could finish, someone shot back him. Kettle was striding forward, his whole body radiating lethal intent. "What, are you kidding me?" At the same time, inside the luxurious carriage, the white-haired man cried out in fear, "Milady, what are you doing?" But contrary to his panic, Milena calmly urged, "Stay calm." Suddenly a deep male voice reached them, freezing her action. "Can I come in?" In an instant, the black-haired man was so terrified his face went pale. Meanwhile, Milena forced a smile and said, "Please come in." Outside, Kettle was thoroughly pleased to hear those words. The steward of House Akasha trembled from the cold. Kettle crossed his arms over his chest with a confident air. He even reassured their employer, "Both of you stay calm." Kettle insisted despite their doubts, "I don't intend to harm you." He didn't dare place fragile trust in him. "Don't lie, you monster." Milena was speechless as she beheld him, the legendary Mandy standing right before her. She offered a polite greeting to Kettle, "Nice to meet you." And Kettle replied softly, "Nice to meet you too." He glanced out the window and compared it to the temperature inside the carriage. It's pretty warm in here, hard to keep it this cozy out on the ice plains, even inside a carriage. Milena explained why there was such a big difference. Oh, that's thanks to magic. Kettle feigned surprise, though he actually knew it better than anyone. Oh, so it is magic, this world, you know. He never joked with people, so consider this a warning. As you know, this place is extremely dangerous. Even with mercenary escorts, your chances of crossing safely are slim, so I'll protect you. Milena listened closely to each word Kettle was about to say. However, I have one condition. The steward was so confused. He was sweating despite the freezing air. Her question was exactly what he needed right then. A condition? What do you want? Kettle got straight to the point. He hated beating around the bush. Knowledge of the world beyond the ice plains. That assessment alone showed he was sharp. The information you two have is exactly what I want. Milena stiffened at Kettle's question. Knowledge of the world beyond the ice plains. He felt this request would only benefit them. Right, they wouldn't lose anything. She was helpless to refuse. From the start, they hadn't had much choice. Milena had to accept his demand. I understand. He froze right in front of Kettle. Very well, what is your name? She introduced herself calmly. I am Milena of House Akasha. His face brightened like never before. I am Kettle, pleased to work with you. Kettle had always been passionate about gaming me. Someone who longed for a fantasy world. What shocked him was waking up one day to find himself a Mandy in the ice plains. He had no time to investigate why. The moment was fleeting but etched in Kettle's heart. All that existed there was biting cold and countless powerful monsters. He led a tribe across the snows, hunting to survive, gritting his teeth through each day. He fought with every ounce of strength to save himself. Time passed, years he couldn't count. He kept trying to escape that terrible ice wilderness. Kettle, furious, struck out with a heavy punch, but a system appeared before him. Mission incomplete, you can leave the ice plains once you finish the task. The caravan passing through gave Kettle renewed hope of survival. Some unseen force blocked his escape. And just when he was about to give up, he didn't understand why someone would volunteer to enter such a harsh place. Yet sometimes people from the outside world do appear. He was still stunned, and then he realized. Kettle imagined a beautiful scene. The harsh world beyond the ice plains was the magical, enchanted realm he had always longed for, a truly fantastical world. He switched to attacking monsters. From then on, he began to act with purpose, not just to survive task 295. Hunt the lizards within the time limit. He pushed himself to the limit, slaughtering monsters and completing assigned tasks to escape the ice plains. Task 295 complete. The next task appeared, with the thought that one day he would get out of there. Kettle pinned his remaining hopes on Milena's answer. He couldn't leave that damned snowfield. So any news from outsiders was priceless. He rejoiced inwardly compared to his dark past. Most humans he'd met either drew their swords in panic or were half mad. But this time, someone was finally willing to talk. When was the last time he'd had a civilized conversation? He'd lived among uncultured barbarians, so speaking with a civilized person felt like a healing balm. Kettle asked bluntly, "You're transporting weapons, right?" She flinched slightly but answered honestly, yes, how did you know? He explained he noticed a small detail. I heard the ring of steel inside your cart's hard to miss. Milena no longer questioned it and said, I see. Kettle boldly guessed, there's a war outside, isn't there? She was no longer as bright as before. Yes, the Empire and the Kingdom are at war. Kettle wasn't surprised. I see the outside world isn't entirely peaceful either. Milena spoke for those fighting. No, the Empire is pressing with overwhelming forces and numbers, but the Kingdom does not yield easily. Sword adepts and heroes defend the borderlands. He had long been curious. Heroes, sword adepts, what kind of power do they wield? She was surprised by such a basic question. You've never heard of Arcana, Kettle? Kettle felt helpless. I've never left this place. Milena hesitated to be definitive. I don't know all the details, but from what she knew, there exists a power called Arcana in this world. Only a very few can sense or use it, and they're assigned one of 5 power tiers. Starting with Tier 3, those who can sense the power of Arcana. Milena continued. Tier 2 and above are those who can actually wield Arcana's power. She carefully clarified so Kettle would understand. Tier 1 are those who can convert Arcana into mana or an aura, typically knights, mages, or spirits. Milena gave concrete examples. Beyond that, tiers become meaningless because those beings exceed human comprehension. If one must name them, they're transcendent tiers. Beings who can master Arcana at will and rend heaven and earth. Sword adepts belong to this level. She praised these ranks highly. And finally, there are heroes, creatures far beyond merely controlling Arcana, capable of influencing the world itself. A hero is a living legend. Milena spoke cautiously. In fact, having their powers ranked and named proves there might even a Tier 3 is considered a powerhouse in a small domain. He had a wish. I want to meet them. She didn't know how to say it, Kettle. The sunlight was right in front of him, but Kettle couldn't smile. He couldn't remember how long he'd been trapped here. He'd been desperate just to survive. He couldn't stop thinking. All he knew was that the ice plains lay within a fantastical world, and he couldn't escape. Outside was the enchanted world, and he desperately wanted out. Only now did Kettle smile. No. He vowed to himself, I must get out. Milena's voice carried from the carriage. Kettle, you're a Mandy, right? Kettle remained composed. You could say that judging by your expressions, you must know of my existence, right? She affirmed, yes, it's a legend. He had never heard of it, a legend about me. Milena couldn't help but be flustered. You don't know. Kettle finally recalled the old man he'd met, so that's it, the old Emperor. That name is Emperor. I thought he was a fool. He advised her, no, don't worry about it. That legend is real. It happened long ago. Milena, surprised, said, really? Kettle eyed her suspicious behavior, and then said, anyway, Judging by the number of wagons, it looks like you're transporting a large cache of weapons. Why risk crossing the ice plains? Milena dared not speak the full truth. She hesitated. We need a lot of money. He didn't understand Milena's meaning why. She told the whole story. Our family has traded for generations and accumulated considerable wealth, but rivals sabotaged us and now we're drowning in debt. This expedition is to prevent our house from collapsing. Kettle had no more questions, a trip to settle debts. So that's it, meaning you intend to sell weapons to the kingdom fighting the Empire, I see. Milena nodded before she could explain. Yes, what should we do? He only needed a moment of reasoning to reach the answer. You mentioned the Empire is pressing with overwhelming numbers, which means the Empire wouldn't lack arms. If not the Empire, then the kingdom must need weapons when supply is scarce and demand high. Prices naturally skyrocket. I don't know the going rates out there, but with that quantity, it's surely valuable enough to risk crossing the ice plains. Kettle could pinpoint their route. Without a map, looks like you had to endure the ice plains. There's probably no route to the kingdom that doesn't pass here, right? Your territory borders the Empire, doesn't it? She fully agreed with his assessment. Exactly. She pieced together outside reports to find the truth. Impossible, I've heard the legendary Mandy is just an uncultured barbarian. Who are you, really? Are you truly a Mandy? Milena flinched, startled though she hadn't heard a sound. The wagon wheels rolled fast over the snowy road. He didn't know what was happening out there, what was going on. While he and she stayed calm, the steward turned ashen with fear. Kettle spotted someone tailing them. We have uninvited guests. Outside, snow fell white as far as the eye could see when suddenly a monster awoke in the filthy mud. Its eyes lit up, full of hatred. The mercenaries froze at the sight. The captain was too terrified to speak clearly. This is. Milena was also horrified, her face drained pale without a drop of blood. Kettle was utterly calm, propping his chin in thought. A black slime, how are they called that? Milena trembled. Yes, it's a creature recorded in the archive. Kettle suddenly grew curious. The archive. She forced herself to stay composed and explain. Over the years, many powerful adventurers have challenged the ice plains. Few returned, but those who did left records of the creatures they encountered, and of those, black slimes appeared most often. By the way, do you know what they are, Kettle? Kettle replied with full confidence. Of course they're chewy, you can even snack on them, they're pretty tasty. Milena was horrified, frozen rigid. Wait, you eat them? He earnestly invited, want to try? Then let me catch a few. She stammered in fear and refused. No, I. Suddenly a loud noise rang out. Out there the grotesque black slime kept howling. The captain was frozen with fear, not knowing what to do. Milena also sensed something wrong and cried out in panic, Kettle. He stayed silent, watching the situation without answering, which made her a little anxious, Kettle. After a moment, Kettle finally spoke slowly. I made a pact with you. Kettle closed his eyes, looking utterly relaxed. I promise to protect your lives, so I won't act unless there's real danger. Milena's eyes widened in astonishment as she looked at him baffled. Huh, what do you mean? Kettle nonchalantly glanced at the black slime outside. That thing. You can handle it easily. Above all, I need to judge this group's strength for myself. The black slime's roar shook the heavens and earth, finally snapping the mercenaries back to their senses. The captain immediately ordered, raise shields. A nearby subordinate obeyed at once. Yes, sir. No sooner had he raised his shield than the black slime slammed into him. The blow was so strong it sent him sliding across the snow uncontrollably. Yet the black slime easily flung him aside. Another man seized the opportunity, leaped onto it, and swung the axe in his hand to strike. A loud clash rang out. He was thrown back. He couldn't take it and spat out a mouthful of syrup. The axe quickly fell, still emanating eerie energy. He shouted in anger, damn it, what the hell is this thing? The black slime grew even more frenzied, continuously howling at them. The captain realized it too and immediately warned his men. The black slime can only move in a straight line. Spread out and coordinate. The others took the order at once, understood. One of them on this side responded loudly, got it. They quickly sprang to their feet and leapt. The man in the blue cloak charged straight at the black slime. He took careful aim at it, then drew his sword. He directly slashed at the black slime's body. However, that only enraged it further. The black slime howled even more wildly. Suddenly, streams of energy began to concentrate nearby. Someone gathered all their strength and hurled the spear in his hands toward the black slime. In the blink of an eye, the spear pierced through the black slime to the astonishment of the comrades. It screamed in pain without stopping. Seizing the moment when it was in agony, he shouted to everyone holding weapons, don't stop, keep attacking. One of his sword strikes cut into the black slime's body. He immediately informed the others, regular attacks won't work, aim for the core. It's hidden inside. Everyone echoed the order in unison, Roger. Once they understood the method, they relentlessly attacked the black slime. Finally, the captain raised his sword high. Then he drove it down with all his might to annihilate the black slime. Its red mana core shattered into pieces in an instant. The black slime writhed on the ground, seeming to be in excruciating pain. They tensely watched every movement it made. At last, the whole team could exhale in relief and cheer in celebration. There, we did it. From inside, Milena watched them celebrate and felt happy for them, so they really defeated it. Kettle said nothing, silently looking up at the scene outside. They set out again, but not long after the group encountered a giant snow wolf stop. Another monster. Everyone immediately drew their weapons without hesitation, aiming at it. Sharp sword strikes were launched continuously. The white wolf howled in pain, its cry shaking the heavens. Finally, after relentless effort, they managed to defeat it. A heavy thud rang across the ground. Though frightened, they couldn't help but feel triumphant. So this is the ice plain, nothing special. Captain, I think the rumors were exaggerated. The captain was different. He warned everyone sternly, "Don't let your guard down, we're not even halfway yet." At that, someone glanced at the wagon in displeasure. "But are we sure that wild man is really strong? I mean, whether monster or not, isn't he just part of the Emperor's legend?" Kettle had no idea they were gossiping. They thought he was top of the food chain on the ice plains, yet clinging to them for protection. At least we should test his strength. The captain frowned as if pondering something. Footsteps suddenly quickened and drew nearer. Milena was a bit surprised, not understanding what was happening. Kettle remained silent. Outside, the young man in the green hat stepped forward and said, "Miss, I have something to tell you." Milena looked puzzled. "Verify what?" He continued calmly, "We risked our lives to take this job. As mercenaries, we contracted with you. It's what we do." Milena, standing outside, nodded. "Yes, and I'm truly grateful that you accepted this request. I always appreciate that," she thought. An escort across the ice plains. When people heard the details, most ran. "Without you, I couldn't have left." But the other spoke up, surprising her. "However, there's one thing that concerns me." He was very serious. "That wild man hasn't fought a single time, has he?" Milena, suddenly asked, hesitated about that. He cut her off and stated his request directly. "So we want to confirm whether that wild man truly deserves the special treatment he's receiving." Milena grew uneasy and avoided their gaze. "Confirm? How am I supposed to do that?" At the same time, the captain approached. He awkwardly apologized. "I tried to restrain them, but they wouldn't listen." Kettle, hearing the suspicion, showed no anger. He calmly said, "So you want to test my strength? Fine by me." But Kettle added, "Now's not the time." Everyone listening was surprised. "Huh." Kettle looked down and said, "We have visitors ahead." The group, unbelieving, challenged back. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Right then, a gloomy voice sounded behind them. "Ah, the weak mortals from outside have arrived. It's been a long time since I've had a good meal." It howled, "Pitiful mortals." The group panicked, hastily drawing weapons and turning around warily. A massive serpent opened its mouth to reveal razor-sharp teeth. "Writhing at will, that only adds to the flavor of my meal." Milena screamed in terror without stopping. The others were also thoroughly horrified by it. Kettle furrowed his brows and coldly ordered the creature before him, "Stop. They are my guests' return, white serpent." The serpent, seeing him there, looked utterly surprised. What are you doing here? Have you forgotten the rules of the ice plains when you left your tribe's territory?" Kettle cut in irritably, "That's none of your business." The white serpent sneered contemptuously, "Ridiculous." It kept roaring in anger, "I am the white serpent, you savage." The white serpent, furious, snapped, "How dare you order me, you who were promised immutability?" Kettle was no gentler. He wound up and threw a punch, you itching for a beating. His punch landed squarely on the white serpent's body. It howled in fury. Whirlwinds appeared one after another created by the white serpent. The mercenaries gritted their teeth, doing their best to endure. Its power was growing stronger by the moment. Milena struggled to hold it back with her hands, prompting worried cries of miss. Kettle, seeing it refused to stop, showed anger. "You're the kind that only listens after taking a beating." Milena sank to her knees and called to him, "Key Kettle." Kettle didn't turn back. His eyes were full of resolve. "I'll take care of it, won't be long." Kettle's footsteps were forceful, each one causing the ground to tremble. Kettle charged at the white serpent with all his might. He readied his fists, prepared to make it take the hit. A blinding light suddenly flared in the midst of the battle. The light illuminated the sky in an instant. Those nearby who witnessed it stared in bewilderment. After some time, Kettle had dealt with the white serpent. People continuously apologized to him. "I've committed a grave sin, please forgive me." Kettle waved it off. "It's fine, trusting a stranger isn't easy." At that time, their wagon continued on its journey. The cold made the steward tremble constantly, even coughing a few times. That drew Kettle's attention. Thinking it over, he had a question. Milena asked in surprise, "What is it?" Kettle grew serious as he looked at her. "Judging by your clothes and the way you speak, you don't seem a mere household representative. Why are you personally taking part in such a dangerous expedition?" Milena breathed a sigh of relief, and then explained, "I'm Velika's eldest daughter, a concubine of Lord Kasek Akasha." Milena recounted her past. She had come here for a political marriage, and was then abandoned a pitiful mother with no real power. Kettle sympathized, "I understand." As she recounted the past, her hands clenched. "My mother and I are family in name only. In reality, we are nothing. We were treated like servants." She lowered her head in shame. "I didn't mean to say so much." After a moment, Milena added, "I volunteered for this expedition." Kettle was quite surprised, really. Milena nodded firmly, "Yes, though it's a dangerous trip." She didn't dare meet his eyes, but someone had to set an example. Kettle smirked, "I see you're clever." Milena felt puzzled, "Huh?" Kettle remarked to her, "And you have great ambition, you are greedy." Milena grew hesitant, "You." Suddenly a sound outside made Kettle turn to look. Milena noticed too, they're here. Outside, the mercenaries were also stunned by the scene before them. They were speechless with surprise. There was grass. The steward bowed in thanks to Kettle. "Thank you so much, Kettle." Kettle asked with concern how she would return. Milena thought for a moment and said, "We'll go through the Empire." Kettle didn't hesitate to point out the challenge. "Since you've sold your weapons, you won't be carrying firearms anymore, but crossing the border shouldn't be too difficult." Milena looked up at him and softly called Kettle. She paused, then added, "You said I'm clever and ambitious. What did you mean by that?" Milena waited intently for Kettle's answer. "You are clever, and at the same time very ambitious." He carefully explained. "Your family was once highly respected, but has fallen into chaos and poverty. Even as a concubine's daughter, if you act yourself, you could open a path to save a house on the brink of collapse." Milena listened closely. Then she realized who the followers would trust and follow. "Your goal is to gain real power in the family, right?" Kettle, seeing her silence, questioned, Did I say something wrong? Milena inwardly admired the perfect answer. She couldn't meet his eyes and replied no. Kettle thought to himself, a correct response. Yes, it's common for a concubine's child to accept dangerous trials to inherit the family. Milena began to see him differently. The savage was smart, not like those half-baked braggarts. She grew more impressed by him and by his strength in defeating the white serpent unharmed. If that power belonged to her house. Milena thought for a moment, and then said to him, Kettle, if you plan to leave the ice plains. She suddenly made a proposal that surprised him. Why don't you come with me? Kettle didn't hesitate and refused outright. I must decline, I've got things to take care of. Milena nodded, I understand. Her hand unconsciously tightened. Milena then respectfully offered a necklace. Will you accept this? She added, if you go out and seek the Akasha family, show them this piece. Kettle laughed easily. If it's a gift, I'll gladly accept it. Before they left, the steward said again, thank you so much. Kettle, perhaps we'll meet again someday. He nodded firmly, definitely. Kettle watched them leave. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, 5 years on the ice plains had gone by. After a period of waiting, finally all the conditions were met. The system kept notifying. Mission 784 complete, rewards distributed, conditions satisfied, you may leave the ice plains. Kettle strode forward with great pride. At last, my first step. Now he was filled with excitement into the fantasy world he'd always dreamed of. Kettle immersed himself in nature, his face reflecting pure enjoyment as the fresh scent of grass blended with the animal air. In the forest, the air was clean and wildlife abundant. Kettle closed his eyes to savor it, catching the faint, refreshing scent of the river. Smells he'd never noticed back on the ice plains, wonderful, so pleasant. Suddenly he opened his eyes and turned to the side. Kettle saw a giant ice tower and exclaimed in shock. The air of the ice plains, where the hell did he go? A verdant mountain and forest scene bathed in golden sunlight. This is the fantasy world I've always dreamed of, full of mysteries and wonders I thought I'd never reach. Though the beginning was rough, I managed to survive. A bold thought arose. So now I'll enjoy life here to the fullest, magic and swordsmanship. After a moment's thought, Kettle muttered, dragons and elves, this really is a fantasy world. He stepped forward and thought to himself that if it weren't for his obsession, he'd have died long ago. The ice plains are truly hell, and you can't survive there on mere cowardly will. Suddenly a strange light appeared before Kettle, arousing his curiosity. He also happened to see special spirits. There was a sense of life energies converging there. After pondering, he confidently concluded it must be a village. At last, I found civilized towns in this world. In front of him were Greta and a white-haired girl huddled in the snow. Kettle froze, thinking that he'd tried to enlighten the dumb savages who only dug snow nests about the importance of shelter. Yet they stared blankly, utterly clueless. He closed his eyes with a serious expression, recalling the firm dwellings of humanity. How should I introduce myself? Say hello, or just ask normally, where is this? Now Kettle strode proudly through the green woods and told himself that, no matter what, he should behave politely. Sunrise pierced the canopy, blazing across the field through the ancient trees. At that moment, a hand appeared from nowhere. It was an elder. He appeared solemn and loudly declared, all elf residents, hear me. From today, this place will be our new home. Hearing that, everyone gathered around, listening with open, joyful faces. The elder stood elevated and continued, explore everything, everyone. Then someone walked up and called, Elder, and he glanced and asked softly, what is it? The young man hesitated and asked quietly, is this place truly safe? The elder nodded firmly, very safe. He looked to the others and added, this is a rather remote area humans can't reach. Yes, I know that, but the ice plains are right next to us. He glanced at the youth and asked seriously, you're worried that monsters from the ice plains will appear, right? The youth scratched his head in worry and answered, it's just that they're too close. Hearing this, the elder gently reassured them. It's fine, nothing has come from the ice plains in 1,000 years. And besides, we've placed a barrier. He looked toward the forest, holding 3 maps, and said that a hidden magic conceals our presence, making this look like an ordinary forest. We spent months crafting it based on ancient spirit arts we barely restored so long as the barrier holds. No outsider can find us, not even monsters. The elder thought of Marsilia Hassian Karuja and affirmed, we still have Her Majesty the Queen. He confidently believed that no monster from the ice plains could lay a hand on their queen. At that moment, Kettle appeared and passed his hand through the thin, invisible barrier. He stood there thinking for a moment that he just ripped something. What's here? Kettle kept walking and muttered, by the way, how far do I have to walk? Suddenly, while walking normally, he froze for a moment. A mane of golden hair appeared. A tiny green dress came into view. A small girl stood amid the vast trees, and Kettle couldn't help exclaiming in surprise, an elf. His eyes widened as he thought, an actual elf. Then Kettle made a few associations, one of the races often imagined in fantasy worlds. He smiled with satisfaction, thinking he hadn't expected to meet one so soon. Lucky, surviving really paid off. The little girl gripped her hands in panic and glanced around, terrified. Where am I? What should I do? I wandered too far. Suddenly she lifted her wide, sparkling eyes and looked at Kettle with innocence. In no time, the sparkle in her eyes turned to fear when she saw him. To the girl, Kettle seemed like a fearsome demon as he said, hello, little one. Her whole body froze in fear, eyes wide as she stared at him. Then she collapsed from sheer terror. A loud noise rang through the forest, sending birds fluttering away in panic. Kettle, alarmed, caught the girl who had fainted from fear. His eyes darkened and he stood stunned, uttering, The girl kept foaming at the mouth. Kettle panicked slightly and said, she fainted before I could even talk properly. Should I take her back to the village? He then considered that in myths, Elves are usually a peaceful, hospitable, kind race. Proudly rubbing his nose, he thought that if he returned the unconscious child, they might welcome him warmly, maybe they'd be friendly. I wonder what that would be like. Kettle's mouth twitched into a small smile as he said, looking forward to it. He then hugged the girl to his chest and carried her back. Not long after, a shout came from nearby. "No way, humans here. No, my child." A group of fierce people charged up with weapons, shouting, "You, who are you? How did you break the barrier? This isn't what we expected." The woman wept uncontrollably and cried out, "My child." The elder, seeing the scene, was astonished, thinking, how could this be? This place was supposed to be inviolable, unreachable by humans. How is there a human here? There should have been a barrier. How? Someone beside him said, "Elder, the barrier has a hole." He stubbornly replied, "No." Her Majesty, and the other answered, "The Queen temporarily left to scout the terrain." They glared at Kettle and yelled harshly, "I'm not an enemy. I'm just bastard. If you don't return the child, we'll hunt you to the ends of the earth." The elder stiffened, thinking to himself that their location had been exposed. He recalled earlier events and fearfully concluded that the barrier was created by ancient magic, so even adults couldn't enter. If it's been broken, it means humanity came fully prepared. How long have they been watching us? Kettle broke out in cold sweat, eyes wide in shock. Do they think I'm a kidnapper? He glanced down at the girl in his arms and thought he needed to clarify this situation first. The girl trembled and cried in fear, two small tears trickling from the corners of her eyes. After a moment, the girl opened her eyes wide and looked at him. Kettle set her down gently and said, "Go on, go back to the others." The girl hesitated, but still turned to glance at him one more time. But in her eyes, Kettle's figure appeared as a demon. Seeing that, the girl was struck with another shock, turning pale with fright. Then she screamed and ran straight to her parents. Kettle, startled, wondered, "Damn, is my face that scary?" He was stunned, painfully realizing one thing. "I thought it looked so decent when I was in the ice plains. What a shock." He awkwardly waved goodbye and said, "Anyway, I already returned the girl. Elves, as you can see, I'm not your enemy." The elder then shouted loudly, "The hostage has been released." He and the others raised their bows and cried, "Everyone attack, drive them out." Kettle froze and thought to himself, "They didn't even listen to me." Kettle's face darkened as he thought, "These elves are more savage than I expected according to myth. Elves are." He recalled a pleasant image. A gentle, upright people who love nature and crave peace. Yet real-life elves were fierce and violent. Well, elves are a race that live in nature. Then the brutality tore through the pleasant atmosphere. He despondently thought that nature is where the strong survive, not a peaceful place, so their savagery is somewhat understandable. Kettle stood indifferent as arrows flew like a storm. He calmly replied, "So this is reality." Seeing he had no scratches, the others exclaimed in shock, "What kind of magical gear is he using? He must have limits. Keep attacking." Kettle walked over calmly and said, "Just need." He reached out, waved his hand, and said, "Calm down." Then Kettle seriously summoned a source of dark power, one that carried extremely strong offensive force. That power immediately produced a huge explosion right there. The young man was struck so hard he couldn't open his eyes. The remaining people cried out in panic, "Form a defense." But Kettle's power was too strong, and in no time it had completely obliterated the place. The crowd was blown away by the gust, swept along with rocks and dirt thrown far. The gathered power formed a huge circle. Then it seemed to prepare to unleash all its supreme might. The village elder gripped his staff, trembling as he took a step back. He cried out in terror, "What is this?" The power had now dissipated. Kettle stood upright in the deep pit and said proudly, "I am not your enemy." He let out a weary breath and thought, "Damn, did I underestimate my power?" Then he quietly called elves. Before he could finish the sentence, a missile-like arrow came from nowhere and struck him in the head without his knowledge. Moments later, a terrible explosion erupted right where he stood. The village elder and the young man stood looking on in stunned bewilderment. From above, a figure appeared with braided hair. Slender legs landed on a rock. It was Marsilia Hassian Karuja. Upon her arrival, everyone responded in unison, "Your Highness." The Leaf Tribe Queen, Marsilia Hassian Karuja. She stood proudly and asked, "What happened?" The village elder hurriedly reported, "A human attack." Hearing that, Marsilia Hassian Karuja turned dark and said, "So the time has come." She looked at everyone and said solemnly, "Even this place is not safe." Just then Kettle emerged from the dust and said, "Wait." He nonchalantly stepped out of the swirling dust, scratching his head and saying, "I want you to hear me out." Seeing him alive, Marsilia Hassian Karuja appeared incredulous. The village elder exclaimed in astonishment, "Impossible. He took a direct strike from the queen and still stands." Standing above, Marsilia Hassian Karuja called down loudly, "Are you another powerful enemy who's come to harm us?" She frowned at Kettle and said, "Humans truly are a despicable species." Marsilia Hassian Karuja raised her bow and formally introduced herself. "I am the queen of the Leaf Tribe. The leaves change color with the seasons." She glanced and added, "Humans." Marsilia Hassian Karuja drew her bow and declared, "You will pay dearly for daring to covet us." He stared, unable to understand what she'd been saying. Kettle froze like a statue, wondering, can't I even speak? We clearly share a language. Does she deliberately ignore me? Or are relations between humans and elves really that bad? After hesitating for a moment, he made up his mind. There's no other way. He frowned with determination, his pupils widening as he reminded himself of one lesson from the ice fields. If they won't listen, keep hitting until they do. She knocked an arrow, aimed at him, and released. Marsilia Hassian Karuja concentrated, watching the arrow's path. The bow launched from her hands and flew straight toward Kettle as its target. Her arrow, like a fierce beast, charged at him. Kettle showed no fear. Without hesitation, he clenched his fist and charged forward. He delivered a straight punch into that savage beast. Two opposing sources of power clashed fiercely. Kettle's force spun like a vortex, unraveling Marsilia Hassian Karuja's strength. Seeing this, she could only stand stunned, so astonished she couldn't speak. Kettle also hesitated for a moment. What followed was a bold mishap. Marsilia Hassian Karuja's power ravaged everything around her. From her high position, she fell hard. He stood there, stunned, and remarked, "Maybe I should have held back a little." Marsilia Hassian Karuja now seemed to be in severe psychological shock. Her face went stiff and turned purple. She glared at him angrily and thought, "In just a brief clash, I realized one thing. This opponent is very powerful, at least at a transcendent level. Why would someone so strong be here?" Marsilia Hassian Karuja spoke softly. "Everyone, evacuate this place immediately." Everyone responded in surprise, "Your Highness." But Marsilia Hassian Karuja shouted loudly, "Move now, everyone, run." "Yes, ma'am." Obeying the order, everyone scrambled away as fast as they could, leaving the area. Then she glared at Kettle and sneered, "Humans, we acknowledge your strength, but you'll never achieve your goal." He paid it no mind. Kettle casually replied, "No, I only wanted to talk. How did all this turn into such a mess?" Marsilia Hassian Karuja closed her eyes. She seemed to be performing a summoning ritual. She focused, solemnly calling forth something. "You who scorch the deepest darkness, manifest, revive the horned spirit that embraces the purest flame." After a moment, Marsilia Hassian Karuja opened her eyes and glared at him. She threw her arm up toward the sky, and before long she had summoned something miraculous. It was a Fiego. It radiated a searing power Fiego. Seeing the Fiego, Kettle couldn't hide his astonishment and blurted, "Damn. The creatures from the ice fields are all terrifying and grotesque." He looked around and judged that a few resembled beasts from myths, though they looked ugly. Noting this Fiego's ferocity, he exclaimed that the creature before him was like a bull with flaming horns. His eyes shimmered as he said, "Indeed a spirit straight out of fantasy." Marsilia Hassian Karuja then ordered Fiego, "Destroy the enemy before you." It looked at him and murmured, "Summoning packs are nothing but trouble. They only bring problems, Fiego, high fire spirit." Hearing that, she snapped angrily, "Be silent." Marsilia Hassian Karuja regarded it with pride and thought, "Fiego, the keeper of fire and its horned spirits that are stronger are older and prouder. Normally, I could never summon this rank, but with the help of another tribe, I reluctantly formed the pact. I didn't expect to have to summon it this way." She gave a frank, serious command, "Fulfill the pact, Fiego." Its hooves began to move, so the pact is to kill the human before us. Fiego's gaze turned cold as it looked at him and said, "There." In its eyes, he was no different from a demon. Fiego wondered if it truly accepted such a being. A majestic sacred bull, its whole body blazing with golden-orange flames like an erupting sun. The fire not only cloaked its muscular frame, but cast a radiant glow around it, creating a scene both mysterious and terrifying. Standing not far away, a young man stared at the sight, hands clasped, eyes wide, mouth slightly open in utter amazement. He dared not blink, as if afraid the spectacle would vanish the moment he looked away. Amazing, truly a summoned spirit beast. This is the magical world. Before he could finish marveling, a deep, cold voice rang out from afar. "A human has invaded our home." His whole body went rigid, hands still clasped at his chest, his mind full of questions. The spirit's eyes gleamed molten gold. Mysterious markings flared, sparks of flame began to float around its body. It lowered its head, voice full of majesty and contempt. "Despicable humans dare dream of nature's races. I have decided I will burn you to ashes, leaving nothing but dust." He stood frozen, eyes wide, face bewildered, as if thrown into a play without a script, both confused and comical. The spirit's eyes blazed bright red like two live coals in a firestorm. Flames erupted around its body, swept over its horns and back, then cascaded down its legs like flowing lava. The massive body lifted off the ground, leaving charred, cracked trails where its hooves had been. From above it spun amid fire and thunder, forming a violent fire vortex as the golden patterns on its hide shone like an ancient seal activating destructive power. It roared, thrusting its enormous horns toward the target. Flames burst in time with its steps, and its eyes were no longer mere gazes, but blades ready to tear apart any creature that dared violate its territory. Amid the dazzling light, the young man stood dumbfounded, slightly stunned by what unfolded before him. The collision shook the land. Fire and rock sprayed everywhere, smoke billowed up, and the blast seemed intent on erasing every trace, reducing everything to ash. A ferocious surge of power threatened to rend Karuja apart. Reflexively, she raised an arm to shield her face, her hair whipped up, her robe fluttered, skin stretched under the pressure. Her breathing slowly steadied after the aftershock. Her hand eased down, and she slowly lifted her head, eyes opening through the drifting dust toward the epicenter of the explosion. Through the lingering smoke, the silhouettes of the two combatants emerged. The young man still stood, unthrown and unhurt, holding the spirit's blazing horn with one hand. Its body was completely restrained, the horn gripped as if driven into the ground. It could neither advance nor retreat, its golden eyes wide with shock. He tilted his head and smiled faintly. "Actually, a beast is better." As the words left his mouth, his expression shifted. The air around him trembled, his other hand clenched, muscles moving beneath his shirt as veins stood out for a moment. Instantly, he swung that fist at it. "I'm not afraid to beat it to death with my bare hands." Karuja's eyes widened. Stunned for a heartbeat, she had no time to speak, only astonishment as she watched him counterattack decisively, suddenly, and with overwhelming force. The punch landed square on Fiego's crown, the impact sending shockwaves that tore the air and blasted away surrounding earth and rock. A column of fire erupted like a volcanic blast, a crimson streak swallowing everything. From the impact point, a violent shockwave surged out, howling like a firestorm across sky and land. The punch's force extended for miles, tearing apart the forest behind. A colossal beam of light pierced the sky and burst from the earth as if the gods were enraged. The tremor mushroomed outward, consuming seas and atmosphere. A cataclysmic explosion roared, followed by seas of flame as though the sun had crashed to earth. Trees and rocks were blown into chaos, everything around reduced to a blazing wreck. Karuja panicked, covering her face, her eyes filled with terror as if witnessing the world collapse. Screams rose like a soundtrack to the disaster. Kettle's eyes glowed purple in the dark, piercing the enemy's soul. His cloak whipped about as murderous intent surged. She collapsed to the ground, hunched over, covered in dust and ash. Her shoulders trembled, and the hand supporting her on the earth still shook. Before her lay a scene of ruin. The ground split, the spirit had vanished without a trace. Only swirling smoke remained as if life had never existed. Amid the chaos, he still stood unmoved. She cried, impossible. He began to step forward, each heavy but steady step echoing through the wreckage. She remained seated on the ground, dazed, her gaze blank through the smoke, unable to tell reality from a dream. She bowed her head, shoulders trembling, voice hoarse with exhaustion yet sincere pleas. Then she bowed deeply, hair falling to hide her dust-smeared face, her voice trembling, "Please spare my people." He stopped right before her, his gaze descended like a shadow pressing on the air. After a moment of silence, his voice rang out deep and clear. "I am not your enemy, elf." In that instant, her whole body froze, her shoulders trembled slightly. Then her eyes suddenly widened in shock. She lifted her head slowly, as if unable to believe what she'd just heard. After a long argument, we finally accepted one thing, she thought in stunned self-reproach, that he truly is not an enemy. Karuja placed her hand over her heart, her gaze falling, voice full of guilt. "Sorry, human, we judged too hastily." She hugged her chest, fingers clenching to hold back the rising remorse, head bowed, not daring to look up at him. Even a single glance mistaking the one who saved our tribes, child for a kidnapper, was truly disrespectful. He stood there with his arms crossed, the corner of his mouth lifting in an awkward smile. "It's okay, I understand you said your people were hunted by humans, right? Still, it's a shame you never tried to hear me out." She raised her head slightly, still wary but now clearly curious and confused. Her voice was small, hoarse, but distinct. "You're really not one of those hunting us." He looked at her with not coldness but genuine curiosity. A light breeze lifted his cloak as he replied in an even, calm tone. "This is the first time I've met an elf. The White Waste has no elves." She blinked, hesitated, repeating, still wary, "What do you mean the White Waste?" Then, remembering something, she asked, "The gray ash savages of the White Waste." He paused at the name, then answered matter-of-factly, "That's the name those people out there gave me." The girl straightened, fists clenched, disbelief written across her face. "Impossible, we thought no human could survive there." Then she bowed her head, voice anxious. "If you can leave the White Waste, could others get out too?" He stood still for a moment, feet planted firmly on the cracked earth, unshaken. A soft breath nearly lost in the wind, then his voice low and steady, "Who knows, but I don't think so. Not everyone can leave like that." Kettle sank into thought. The White Waste has its own rules. Even powerful creatures like serpents can't break them. For some reason, I was granted an exit, through what they call a mission. He stood silent, his gaze contemplative as if staring through the smoke and memories ahead. "I'm probably an extremely rare exception." Karuja let out a soft breath. Her tense shoulders relaxed bit by bit. Amid the ruins and drifting dust, her voice floated like wind. "Then that's fortunate." Suddenly remembering, he asked, "Oh, is your spirit beast okay?" A hint of embarrassment crossed his face. Scratching his cheek, he forced a smile, realizing he'd gone a bit far. "That fire bull, I cleaved it in two." She pushed herself up slowly, dust falling as she rose. "Don't worry, spirit beasts are creatures of nature. When defeated, they simply return to the spirit realm." The young man murmured, half asking her, half telling himself. "A spirit beast, huh?" She stood erect, dignified like a warrior reclaiming honor after battle, eyes fixed on him without hesitation, sincerity plain in every word. "Sorry for the trouble I caused. If there is anything you want, within my power, I will oblige." He seemed only half-focused, following a private line of thought. "Spirit beast, huh?" He propped one hand on his chin, eyes half attentive, half distant, head tilted as if weighing something. "So, could someone who isn't an elf form a pact with a spirit beast?" She paused slightly, her eyes wavering before quickly averting his gaze. Her voice remained calm, but something unspeakable lurked beneath it, almost impossible, she thought. She raised a hand to her chin, narrowing her eyes as if reconsidering what she just denied. After a moment of silence, she spoke. "Of course, if a human is deeply connected to nature, they might form a pact with a spirit beast." Hearing this, he simply concluded, "The likelihood is still very low." She fell silent, lips pressed together, saying nothing, her expression darkening. Then she looked up at him, no longer avoiding his eyes but meeting them quietly. Her voice lowered with consideration and a cautious glint of hope. "If you truly want to bond with a spirit beast, try going to Elfo Sagrado." He immediately repeated Elfo Sagrado. She dropped her gaze respectfully, speaking slowly with deep reverence. "It is where the elves' deities reside, the most sacred sanctuary of our people, the elves' holy site." She paused, then added, "There you might have a chance." He brightened suddenly like a child hearing of an adventure. His eyes lit up, and his lips curved into an excited smile as he pointed at himself and asked, half in disbelief, Someone like me, a human, could enter. She reached toward him, movement slow and deliberate as if each gesture carried the weight of a major decision. Her voice dropped, ringing softly through the dust-laden air. Normally no, but with my introduction you can. I'll give you a map, keep it to yourself. She lifted her hand, palm turning outward, and lines of gentle, moon-like energy began to gather and swirl into a small ribbon of light as she thought. The elves' sanctuary, Elfo Sagrado. It's a place every elf scholar dreams of, she added with a fleeting hesitation. But for elves, humans approaching it is extremely dangerous. Elves have never revealed its location to outsiders to protect what they hold dearer than life. A crystal slowly formed in her palm, radiating a brilliant yet not blinding light, as if holding a fire within. Its smooth surface revealed swirls of orange-red dancing like living flames. She silently told herself, "Even so, I still want to trust you." Karuja quietly extended her hand, palm open toward him. "Take this." He reached out gently, his finger brushing her palm where the crystal glowed. "I accept, thank you." Her voice turned solemn, carrying formality and warning. "Of course, even if you gain access, our god will surely test you." In her mind, a vague image of the supreme deity flickered, a majestic figure cloaked in the light of the deep woods, eyes that pierced the soul. She smiled faintly, her features softening as she spoke sincerely. "But for you, I don't think that will be the problem." He replied briefly, "Good luck and thank you." At that moment, a sudden breeze swept through the shattered trees and ruffled her hair, sending her long locks streaming like a silent ribbon across the ruins as she formally introduced herself. "I am Queen of the Leaf Tribe, the ones who turned brown in autumn, Marsilia Hassian Karuja. And your name?" He offered a slight smile, honest and unpretentious. "I am Kettle Kettle, the Wild of the White Waste." After a brief parting, the air fell quiet as if swallowing unsaid words. Then a sharp sound rang out as he stamped his foot hard on the ground. His body dipped slightly, then suddenly coiled forward, ready like a drawn arrow. He launched himself forward, cutting through the air, his figure a blur and his gaze icy. Ahead lay a dense, shadowy forest that nearly swallowed the light, branches entwined like a vast vaulted canopy. He sprang powerfully from the earth, his body like an arrow slicing through leaves, leaving fleeting shadows flickering between sun and canopy, light as a breeze, yet decisive and forceful. At Barkin's border in the kingdom of Jehent, shouts of alarm echoed through the tranquil morning. "What's that? What's happening?" A guard clutched his weapon in panic, eyes fixed on the trees, convulsing violently, shouting in a trembling voice, "I don't know, something's coming." The captain of the Barkin guard immediately stepped forward and barked in an authoritative voice, "Ring the bell and assemble all the watchmen at once." From the direction of the woods came rolling plumes of dust like breaking waves. Something was barreling toward them at terrifying speed, its form indistinguishable. Only a wind tearing the air, dirt flinging up, and heavy footfalls pounding the ground like thunder. The air felt compressed, stifling and hard to breathe. Through that choking haze a figure gradually emerged, walking slowly but decisively, each step striking the earth with a heavy sound that echoed through the taut air like a plucked string. Cutting through the dust revealed a familiar silhouette. A man with tousled silver hair and cold, sharp eyes glinting through the smoke like blades. The guards almost simultaneously froze. Hands gripping weapons began to tremble. Cold sweat ran down their backs. All eyes fixed on the approaching figure in heavy silence. No one dared step forward or give an order. One of them, his throat tight, forced out a hoarse sound. "You." Kettle greeted the guards cheerfully. "You are the watchman? It's a pleasure to meet you." The guards remained in their defensive stances, unchanged from the moment he appeared. They stared at Kettle and whispered among themselves in trembling voices. That loud noise just now, was it caused by this guy? One soldier muttered as he looked at him, ash-gray hair. His voice grew more stammering. A scar across the chest, impossible. Suddenly remembering the man's identity, the guard blurted out, "The ash-gray Wild." No sooner had he finished than Kettle began to walk slowly toward the guards. At that the guards shouted loudly, "Halt, take another step and we'll attack." Kettle replied calmly, his tone serious, "I'd appreciate it if you would remain calm. I am not your enemy." The leader continued to point his spear at him and asked warily, "What do you want from us?" As he finished speaking, Kettle slowly raised his right hand. Then he pointed toward the fortress before them. The guards couldn't help but be surprised. They glanced back at the fortress behind them and said with suspicion, "The fortress." Kettle declared firmly to them, "I want to enter your territory." Hearing the stranger's words, the guards were taken aback. Kettle rested his hand on his chin and said to the lead guard, "Do you mean just passing through the territory? If possible, I'd like to stay for a while, I'm not sure how long." When he finished speaking, the guard immediately asked for more information. "So you're planning to stay for a time, what is your name?" He answered concisely, "I am Kettle." The guard asked suspiciously, "Do you have anyone vouching for you or any identification?" Kettle shook his head slightly, "I don't have any of that." He then remembered Milena's earlier instructions. "Thank you, Kettle. If you leave later, please present this token if you seek the Akasha household." Kettle pulled the token from his pocket and set it on the table, saying to the guard, "How about using this as proof of identification?" Seeing the strange object on the table, the guard asked, "What is that?" Kettle replied at once, "The crest of the Akasha house. I received it from someone with blood in that line." The guard hesitated and asked, "The Akasha house, the merchant clan of the Denayan kingdom, right?" While inspecting the crest, he said to him, "The clan came to the White Wastes a few years ago. Do you know them?" Lately, that family has been rising fast. Since the new head took over a few years back, they've expanded rapidly. Hearing that, Kettle asked the guard, "So can this serve as identification?" The guard lowered his voice as he replied, "It doesn't look like a fake. but it's hard to verify, so it's not from this kingdom. This is the kingdom of Jehan. He placed the crest on the table and continued slowly. Even if it can't be verified, it's still useful. All right, you can enter, but under conditions. Hearing that, Kettle repeated conditions. The guard propped his hands on the table and answered sternly, we need verification. You'll be under our watch to ensure you're not dangerous, a team, that is. There are 3 others also requesting entry. The condition is you must team up with them to clear a dungeon near the territory. Kettle nodded at that and replied, forming a team is the condition. Well, that's easier than I thought. He cheerfully accepted the terms. Fine, I accept, but there's one more condition. The guard answered immediately. After you've cleared the dungeon, I want you to report in detail everything that happened inside. As soon as he finished, Kettle laughed loudly and exposed the guard's plan. I get it, you don't fully trust them, so you have them watch each other and use this chance to weed out suspects. Not a bad plan. Actually, it's pretty clever. The guard asked him suspiciously, that's not all, are you really a wild? Kettle replied confidently, and plainly, yes, I'm a wild. Hearing that, the guard fell into thought. I always thought the wild were a stupid people. You are the first wild to make me reconsider. Then he told him, that's enough said, let's go. The paladin sighed and complained loudly, fine, it's the law. But we have to go into a dungeon with pickpockets like sewer rats. He continued angrily. What a nuisance. He introduced himself as Paladin Alessandro Tirano. On the bench beside him, the thief Cassin scowled and snapped at him. What's your problem, old man? Picking a fight with me because you lost all your money to a thief. I'm Cassin Hark, the thief. No sooner had he finished than the paladin shouted, you brat. How dare you insult a paladin? Cassin replied sarcastically to his reaction. Paladin, my foot paladin these days wearing armor like that? If you were a real paladin, you wouldn't show your face here. You're just a self-styled wandering paladin, right? Then the thief Cassin mocked him. You're just a wanderer like me. When the paladin didn't respond, Cassin went on with the taunt. Tyrannus, where did you dig up such a ridiculous name? The paladin couldn't hold back and drew his sword, threatening to chop him. You scoundrel. Cassin laughed derisively and challenged him. You want to test yourself? You think those tattered pieces of armor can withstand my strikes? Immediately, the 2 of them plunged into an unending duel. After a while, the paladin couldn't match Cassin's youth, and the paladin's sword hand began to tremble. Suddenly, a voice cut into the fight. I strongly hope you 2 will stop. At the sound of the stranger's voice, both combatants froze and looked at the newcomer. Before them stood a hesitant young priestess bowing her head, unable to look straight. Do I really have to clean out a dungeon with this lot? Will it be okay? Priest Hayes of Kalosha. The priestess glanced around and thought to herself, hey, the dungeon requires at least 4 people, another person will come. She anxiously stared at the floor, waiting for the last member to appear. Suddenly, a sound snapped the priestess out of the unease in her heart. The guard announced loudly to everyone in the waiting room, the final member has arrived. Hearing that, Cassin laughed heartily. I hope this one is actually normal, let's see. No sooner had he finished than Kettle slowly stepped into the waiting room. At the sight of him, everyone in the waiting room couldn't help but be stunned by his massive build. Kettle scanned the room and then called out loudly, his voice joyful. Is that you, my teammates? The old paladin muttered inwardly, he's huge. The priestess, seeing this, was astonished that he's actually human. The thief Cassin grimaced as he looked back at him. What kind of pressure is this? Kettle greeted everyone warmly in the room. Very pleased to meet you. The guard continued, all right, introduce yourselves. I'll be right back. He cheerfully called out, then let's start introductions. I'm Kettle, a wild. Having said that, Kettle asked the young thief standing near him, how about you? Caught off guard, the youth stammered, I Cassin Hark, I'm a thief. At this, the paladin said sternly, I am a paladin Alessandro Tyrannus, a paladin. Kettle then asked him, can you use holy power? Hearing that, the old man hesitated and answered awkwardly, normally yes, but I am a special case. Actually, I cannot use it. Kettle replied hesitantly, I see. No sooner had he finished than the priestess timidly introduced herself. I serve the god of deceit and illusion. I am Hayes, priestess of Kalosha. Kettle responded warmly, you're a priestess, pleased to meet you. Then he asked the priestess, even as a priestess your standing is still unclear. She explained to him timidly, the god I serve is Kalosha. God of trickery and illusions, my deity doesn't have a very good reputation. Kettle replied gently, I see. Suddenly the guard unexpectedly returned to the waiting room, to everyone's surprise. He shouted, if you're ready, let's go. Hearing this, both Kettle and the paladin fell silent, thinking about the upcoming task. On the other side, the priestess and Cassin looked somewhat worried. After a while of moving, the guard signaled to the people behind. We've arrived. Seeing the scene before them, Kettle was a bit surprised. Another guard informed them, this is the entrance to the dungeon. He continued, it's a 3-level dungeon. We will face undead monsters. Upon hearing the mission details, Kettle's face showed confidence. Clear the dungeon and bring back the emblem. Kettle said to Cassin, then let's start planning strategy. Can you explain? Surprised to be addressed suddenly, Cassin stammered, Lord Kettle, and Kettle cut him off. You can drop the honorific, we're traveling together, aren't we? Cassin propped his hand on his chin, thought for a moment, and then said, all right then. He then proposed a tactic to the group. Kettle and the knight lead the front line. I'll scout for traps, and the priestess will stay in the rear to support the fight with divine power. What do you think? Kettle immediately replied, understood. Then he shouted in a strong voice, right, let's move out. The 4 of them slowly advanced deeper into the dungeon, moving cautiously and staying alert. Seeing the dungeon's gloom, the priestess worried inwardly. It's so dark I can't see anything. Cassin thought quietly, there are no usual mechanisms or traps. This looks far too ordinary, as if it were. Suddenly Cassin remembered something. He said to Kettle, wait a moment, there are monsters. Kettle replied, I don't see anything, but Casson pointed at the ground and told everyone, do you see the scattered bone fragments on the floor? Those are bone soldiers. If we take another step, they'll stand up and attack. He then muttered to himself about the guard. Of course, the damned captain already knew everything. This dungeon isn't to test sincerity. It's a tool to conveniently eliminate troublesome outsiders from the start. At this, Kettle was still mulling it over. Bone soldiers. Casson continued analyzing the situation. Bone soldiers aren't weak monsters. Even if their bodies are damaged or their limbs severed, they still move as usual. He went on to tell everyone, moreover, since they're made of bone, their defense isn't trivial. The difficulty of this dungeon is much higher than I expected. Casson then warned the priest, hey, priestess, ready your divine power. Then he told the other two, old man, ready your shield. Kettle, you prepare well too. I'll aim for openings during the fight. Casson continued about the bone soldiers. Even if their bodies are destroyed, they still move, so aim directly at the weak spot, the neck. Also, because they're so sturdy, you need repeated strikes to bring them down. Hearing that, Kettle praised him. Good leader, got it then. As Kettle stepped forward, the dry skeleton at his feet immediately stirred. Seeing that, his face showed some surprise. At the sight of the bone soldiers moving, all three others had already taken up attacking stances, except for Kettle. But just as they were about to rush in, Kettle signaled them to hold their positions. The bone soldier quickly ran forward to attack the group despite its loose bones nearly falling apart. Without a word, Kettle threw a single, powerful punch straight into the bone soldier's skull. After striking the enemy unarmed, Kettle held his attack posture with a surprised look. The bone soldier, hit squarely by the punch, disintegrated into dust at Kettle's feet. Witnessing that sight, the three others were visibly shocked. He said to Casson with delight, Casson, you were right, just smash the head and they'll be immobilized. Hearing that, Casson mentally objected. That's not what I meant. Bone soldiers are creatures formed from bone, and their bones are an extremely hard and unusual material. Even a seasoned swordsman without aura control can hardly cleave a bone cleanly with a single slash. What's more, bone soldiers are reinforced by the dungeon's magic. The only way to destroy them is to repeatedly attack the neck like felling a tree, severing the vertebrae. It's practically impossible to blast the head away and grind it into dust like that. Seeing Kettle's power firsthand, Casson silently marveled. I'd known he was strong since our first meeting, but I didn't expect this level. He asked himself in doubt, is he really human? Kettle said to everyone excitedly, right, let's move on. All three others answered in unison, yes, understood. He replied cheerfully, no need to rush that much. Casson quickly answered, yes. Meanwhile, the priestess and the paladin silently cried out, I don't want to die here. Deeper into the dungeon, Kettle continued to encounter bone soldiers. The dry skeleton lay motionless on the cold floor. A voice called his name, Kettle. Immediately after, the bone soldiers began to move one after another. Seeing that, the priestess immediately exclaimed, bone soldiers. She shouted again, this time it's real, they're coming. Suddenly Kettle whispered to them, can I ask you all a favor? The three others replied in unison, yes. Kettle proposed decisively, let me handle these bone guards myself, I have a few things I want to test. Casson answered at once, yes, do as you wish. The priestess immediately agreed, I concur as well. As soon as he finished, he tersely added thanks. He then stepped up in front of a bone guard that was slowly raising its sword. The three others watched Kettle anxiously. What was he planning to do? He looked at the bone guard and exclaimed excitedly, interesting, what is this structure? No sooner had he spoken than the bone guard swung its sword, aiming to kill Kettle. As the bone guard's blade came down, Kettle calmly caught the sword's edge between two fingers with no effort at all. Breaking the blade, Kettle asked it, now what are you going to do? The bone guard immediately retreated. It then leapt onto a nearby high rock and took a defensive stance, finally charging forward to try to chop off Kettle's head. Despite its careful preparation, Kettle quickly dodged its attack. He then grabbed hold of the bone guard's arm bone. The moment he seized the enemy's arm bone, his face betrayed his delight. Kettle taunted the bone guard challengingly, how will you deal with this? No sooner had he spoken than the bone guard's arm bone suddenly fell to the ground. Seeing that, Kettle couldn't help but be surprised as he looked down at his hand. The bone guard stared blankly at its missing arm bone. Then it glared at Kettle. Immediately it retrieved its sword with the remaining arm bone. Kettle said cheerfully to it, so you can switch hands after all. No sooner had he spoken than the bone guard lunged to attack him. Kettle quickly seized the bone guard's remaining arm bone. Then he ripped the remaining arm bone out of its body. After losing its arm bones, the bone guard staggered back, then recklessly charged at Kettle. Even as it closed in on him, Kettle showed no sign of fear. He grabbed its arm bone and lowered his voice mockingly. You can even change positions, your intelligence isn't low, is it? The priestess was so frightened by the scene that she couldn't utter a word. The other two began to tremble. Seeing Kettle's overwhelming combat prowess, the others were astonished, indeed a wild man. Kettle's eyes gleamed and a terrifying smile spread across his face. Casson Hark went pale with fright at the sight. The gruesome skull was tossed onto the ground, tiny sparks still swirling around it. Kettle opened his eyes wide, bright and beast-like, watching every movement of his prey. It didn't take long before he raised a leg, clearly targeting the skull so you can still move with just a head, huh? The atmosphere fell into silence, broken only by Kettle's drawn-out voice. Interesting. After he finished, Kettle smiled and turned to the others. Did you wait long? Sorry to have kept you. Casson Hark jumped and nervously replied immediately, no, do whatever you want. Although Kettle didn't fully understand, he still hesitated and said thanks. He quickly spun around and shifted his step. Kettle cheerfully led the way away, then let's keep going. The three said nothing, hurriedly replying yes. After who knows how long, Kettle's footsteps suddenly halted. All four stopped and didn't move forward. Casson opened his mouth, this is. Kettle also peered down the staircase, descending to the lower level, and finished his sentence. The second floor. After another long while the space was silent, and they followed each other closely. Casson Hark suddenly removed the cloth covering half his face and exhaled. He hesitated and said to Kettle as he turned back, "Maybe shall we rest for a bit?" He thought for a moment, rubbing his chin, "You're right. A short rest would be good." Casson immediately showed his gratitude with a quick bow. "Thanks." Cut to a while later. Kettle sat with his arms crossed, eyes closed, resting in silence. The three Casson, Priest Hayes, and Paladin Alessandro Tirano sat opposite him, all awkwardly keeping quiet. Suddenly Kettle spoke, breaking the silence. "I have a few questions about this dungeon." Priest Hayes, a bit dazed, replied, "Yes." Kettle smiled kindly and looked at her, embarrassed. "Sorry, I don't know much." Priest Hayes hurriedly, slightly flustered. "No, wanting to learn is admirable, I don't know much either," but he politely replied, "Thank you." She widened her eyes curiously at Kettle. "What are you wondering?" He rubbed his chin, thinking of the nearby villagers and wondering. This dungeon is pretty close to the territory, so wouldn't there be problems with the dungeon and its monsters? The priest explained, basically the dungeon monsters won't spill out. Of course there are exceptions, but those cases are controlled and handled in advance. Casson Hark cleared his throat softly and continued her explanation. Dungeons are natural phenomena, sometimes caves, sometimes towers, and most appear near places where people gather. From their explanations, Kettle understood. So that's why this dungeon exists. The priest continued analyzing. When a dungeon appears, the territory assesses its danger level. Then we outsiders, mercenaries, or guards handle it. Hearing that, Kettle suddenly smiled and exclaimed, "Oh." He went on to ask, so there are no dungeons within the territory itself? The priest quickly answered, "No, dungeons only appear at a certain distance, away from inhabited areas." Kettle nodded, "I see." His face lit up with excitement. If it's a dungeon, there must be rewards for clearing it, right? She propped her chin, thinking of a boss, skeleton, and treasure. That's right, usually a boss appears on the final floor. Defeat it and you get various rewards. For a dungeon of this size, the loot shouldn't be bad. Shadow covered half of Kettle's face, leaving only a smile on his lips, just like a game. The priest looked at him curiously. "A game?" Kettle realized he'd said it aloud and replied, "I was just mumbling to myself." He quickly changed the subject. "I have one more question." She hesitated slightly. "Go ahead." Kettle suddenly asked, "Who created this dungeon?" Priest Hayes' face filled with question marks. She looked bewildered. "What?" She stared at him, not understanding why Kettle would ask that. Dungeons appear naturally. No one creates them. Kettle felt something was off, as if someone's hand was manipulating everything behind the scenes. That raised too many doubts. First, they always appear near populated places, as if someone intentionally set them up for us to inspect. The image of a snake coiling tightly around a red apple flashed through his mind. He added silently, "They appear near crowds and lure people with great rewards." Kettle looked at everyone seriously. "I think this feels more artificial than a natural phenomenon." Hearing that, Priest Hayes jumped. "That's true, isn't it?" She touched her chin and fell into thought. "I never considered that, I just took it for granted." Even Casson Hark fell silent and doubted. "Truly, I never thought about it, no, I never even questioned it, because it's a clear principle, an absolute truth." Could this barbarian really be doubting such a truth? He glanced downward. Barbarians have always been a stupid and brutal breed. The terrifying image of a predator eyeing its prey with one eye surfaced, callous, bloodless killers. That truth never changes. That frightening exterior alone piled doubts into Casson's mind. If what I know is correct, is this barbarian really just an ordinary savage? As scattered thoughts rushed through his head, Kettle's voice suddenly cut him off. "This is interesting." He nodded and smiled at everyone. "Folks, had you rested enough?" The three of them sprang up in surprise. "Yes." Kettle cheerfully led the way and waved them to follow. "Then let's continue." Casson quickly answered yes. They walked on for a while, four of them moving forward cautiously and scanning their surroundings. Kettle calmly took the lead. Casson and Tirano watched their respective sides, and the priest followed close behind. Suddenly Kettle paused slightly, his eyes lifting as if he'd spotted something. He discovered a locked chest. "What's that?" Casson immediately explained. "It's a treasure chest. One of the maze's rewards. If you open it, the treasure is yours." He closed his eyes and thought to himself. Easy to say, but opening a high-tier chest requires a seasoned thief at least proficient lockpicking skills. And if someone had that skill, they wouldn't risk their life in this dungeon. Sadly, we probably have to skip this chest. But Kettle's voice pulled him out of that thought. "Casson, open it." Casson's face went blank, couldn't believe his ears. "What the hell?" Casson went a little pale, forcing a hesitant smile. Right, but..." Kettle seemed not to notice him, excitement written all over his face. "Isn't opening treasure chests a thief's job? That's why I'm asking you. I want to see a thief's skill with my own eyes." Casson closed his eyes and thought silently. "That's true, but there's a problem." He froze like stone. "If I can do it, then why am I even here?" Casson gaped. A lowly thief with no guild recognition, where would he have lockpicking skills? His mouth was open, but he dared not speak the truth. He couldn't admit it. Looking at Kettle's eager, expectant face made it hard to tell those eyes were full of hope. If I confess, they'll turn to disappointment. He imagined Kettle flipping 180 degrees and coldly staring at him. "You claim to be a thief but can't do this. Pathetic." Thinking of the foot crushing the skull earlier, Casson stiffened. He screamed inwardly with no one knowing, then laughed and scratched his head to seem calm. "I'll give it a try." Cut to a little later. Kettle excitedly stood behind watching Casson with sparkling eyes. "You pick locks with that tool? Interesting." Casson stared gloomily at his fate. He was being watched from behind, and if he failed, he'd die. Casson's face went ugly. He tried to dredge up memories from long ago, recalling the skills he'd seen while following him as a porter. Kettle, like a monster, exuded a dark purple power. He stood behind watching Cassan's every move, remembering. He sweat as if sitting on a blazing fire, betting his life on this, using the thief skill Cassan the scream of the soul. A flash of purple light flared behind him, making the young man's face briefly change color. His eyes widened, his gaze seeming to freeze for a moment. Kettle's eyes opened wide in surprise, his shoulders trembling slightly under the thick fur cloak, and his heartbeat seemed to drum loudly in his chest as he faced the unexpected sight. Cassan Hark's eyes half closed, his cheeks flushed and tears glittering at the corners. The corner of his mouth curled into a sorrowful yet relieved smile as he cried out, "There, it's open." Priest Hayes' eyes lit up as she looked ahead, exclaiming with joy, "Wow, really? I heard only a master thief could open a treasure chest, never expected it to be this straightforward. Amazing." Kettle's eyes brightened with excitement. He clenched his fist and raised it high as if to spread the surge of joy within. "Is that so? Well done, Cassan." Cassan hesitated, then replied, With a slight sideways glance, his face briefly clouded. Cassan gave a faint smile as if trying to hide his inner embarrassment. His eyes showed doubt about himself. Could I not have done it? What, the just a glance and it opened? Is it really that miraculous? He looked away, contemplative. Cassan had always been proud of his survival skills, but in this moment, he doubted his own life for the first time. Had he truly been trying his hardest all along? Kettle stood at the bow, arms crossed, looking down and asking, "How much is this place worth anyway?" Priest Hayes followed his gaze and answered him, "For this place an average family could live lavishly for about a month." Cassan remained seated in a corner, his embarrassed expression still etched on his face. Kettle smiled confidently, understanding, and replied, "I see." Accepted. Kettle's call startled Cassan. "Cassan, you handle the distribution of the rewards, okay?" Cassan answered, "Yes, sir." A hand holding a silver cup lowered it toward the golden surface, as if to scoop up a bit. Cassan froze. He lifted the cup in his hands and examined it in front of him, his face showing shock and worry. Someone called out Cassan. His eyes flew open in panic, cold sweat pouring over his pale face, hair fluttering. Kettle asked softly, "Do you need help?" Cassan didn't answer but exhaled in relief. Kettle, puzzled, asked if he was hurt. Cassan snapped loudly, "No, I'm not doing anything," leaving all three bewildered. 2 steady feet advanced step by step. All three kept their faces cold and said nothing, staring straight ahead. Suddenly someone warned, waited skeletal soldiers. The 4 halted before a dry skeleton sprawled on the stone floor. Kettle counted the heads on the ground and murmured, "There are 4 of them. I'll take care of 3. The other 3 were terrified, their bodies trembling violently, but they still tried to keep their faces impassive. Kettle's eyes blazed with purple light as a malicious smile spread across his face. His gaze was icy and piercing. "Leave the last one to the rest of you." Cassan paused, realizing this was real combat, then quickly responded, "Yes." Paladin Alessandro Tirano and Priest Hayes replied in unison, "Understood." Kettle's feet slowly approached the skeletons. The skull on the ground suddenly made a sound. Its jaw twitched and its eye sockets glowed with a blue light. Cassan tensed. No matter how many times he watched, seeing the bones assemble themselves still made him shudder. The 4 skeletons reassembled and began to move like ordinary people. They sat up, faint blue lights flickering, leaving the 4 of them astonished. The 4 skeletons surged forward as if to attack, screaming and baring their teeth menacingly. Kettle immediately ordered, "Everyone Paladin Alessandro Tirano, start casting spells." Priest Hayes began muttering a few incantations, and Cassan solemnly prepared to strike as Kettle shouted, "Attack." The 4 skeletons surged forward too. Cassan stood blocking them, thin wisps of gray smoke swirling around. He flicked his arm in a circle, leaving a streak of light like a golden blade that sliced past the skeleton's face. The 2 skeletons behind looked at each other in bewilderment. Another skeleton's face slammed into something hard, its panicked expression almost comical. Kettle hugged 3 skeletons to his chest and whispered, Now, this is rare, don't break it," bending down to soothe them. "I'll take care of you." A skinny skeleton at this side raised its sword high, preparing to strike. It swung its sword, forming a white streak of light that lunged at Paladin Alessandro Tirano. But he quickly lifted his shield to block. The blade pressed hard against the shield, making it difficult for Paladin Alessandro Tirano to hold. His face hardened, and his eyes were as sharp as a bullet. Something rocketed up from the ground with terrifying force. Cassan leapt powerfully and attacked from behind, a dagger in his hand, but the noise alerted the skeleton. He flailed his arms and legs, sending the skeleton flying backward onto its back. Priest Hayes' gaze fixed on a single point. She raised her hand, surrounded by a golden red light, and shouted, "Shadow illusion." Paladin Alessandro Tirano staggered, as if about to fall face first to the ground. He dropped to one knee, still gripping his sword that emitted a band of white light. The skeleton dropped to the ground as well, smoke rising around it. Cracks began to appear across the skeleton's body, slowly spreading over its bones. Once more the skeleton tensed, its whole body enveloped in greenish-blue smoke. Kettle exhaled a satisfied laugh, haha. He stood there laughing in midair, feet planted on 2 skulls while holding 2 other skulls in his hands. Smuggy never expected to witness such a textbook formation in action. He added, "Truly rare." A forceful punch shattered the atmosphere. Kettle reached out to catch the fragments from the air. Smiling, "Now that's cleared, no more hindrance, time to enjoy." A flash of golden light. The blade sliced the air, a razor-sharp arc striking the dry skeleton. The clash rang harshly through the gloomy space. Cassan thought to himself, No doubt about it, this savage, Priest Hayes and Paladin Alessandro, Tiarano's expressions grew complicated. A bead of sweat still clung to their cheeks. They're testing us. The skeleton's face looked comical, its eye sockets and jaw forming perfect circles. The dry skeleton knelt on the ground, one arm hugging the knee of a leg, its expression full of puzzlement. Faces flushed red. Some murmured spells while others brandished knives. Some launched their swords toward the dry skeleton, because they feared exposing a weakness would get them killed. Rays of light cut through the pitch-black night one after another. The skull lay motionless on the stone floor, faint bluish-white light still flickering around it. Kettle crouched down heavily, the movement making a loud sound. The other three also sat down and fell silent. For a moment the air turned oppressive. Kettle sat lost in thought. No longer in doubt, those from the frozen wastes are pretty solid. 3 more dry skeletons appeared, grinning toothily in a way that was both comical and terrifying. The Layer 3 monsters were also skeletal soldiers, and their numbers had increased, but thanks to Kettle leading the way we got through without trouble. And finally, Kettle dashed at them like a lightning bolt and delivered a crushing blow. Priest Hayes stared ahead in silence, admiration on her face, her hand loosely clasped at her chest as if steeling herself for something. Casson stood opposite Kettle, looking at him with a cold, piercing gaze and a solemn expression. The silhouette of a knight in dark armor sat motionless amid the cold mist, gripping his sword hilt, as if guarding a secret buried in the dungeon, its deepest chamber. On the icy steps, the black-armored knight sat unmoving on the throne, weak fire throwing light over his scratched armor, while the intruders stood quietly at the foot of the stairs, barely daring to breathe. The skeletal knight. Priest Hayes trembled in fear, alarmed. How could something like this be here? Kettle asked, is it different from the others before? She emphasized, yes, it's very strong, extremely strong. Red eyes flared in the empty eye sockets. The skeletal knight in black armor stood amid a whirl of purple, malevolent energy, a cold sword pressed to his chest. Priest Hayes' eyes widened in horror, her breath catching in her throat. A skeletal knight wielding a greatsword with ease. Unless one is on par with a knight, there's no chance to face him. This isn't the kind of monster we can handle. What if we can't defeat it in return? She added that there would be an inquiry, and if they found a reasonable cause, then we wouldn't have any problems. A pleased smile spread across Kettle's mouth. Priest Hayes anxiously called to Kettle. He replied, that makes sense. The skeletal knight slowly rose into the air. The skeletal knight's eyes burned bright as he curved a sinister smile and looked toward them. He stood on the steps, holding a long broadsword, staring straight at Kettle, who stood below, parallel to him. Kettle murmured quietly, how long can it hold its form? Interesting. At that, the knight raised his sword high and lunged forward, bending as he advanced. She froze for a moment, a look of confusion mixed with anxiety crossing her face as if sensing something wrong. Danger was plain in her eyes. She shouted and simultaneously formed a magical shield to absorb the skeletal knight's attack danger. Her golden shield developed many cracks, and at the same time the knight's magic began to wane. Priest Hayes' face contorted in pain, her breathing rapid, eyes glowing yellow with grim determination amid the hazy dust, and the heavy pressure bearing down on her body. The shield shattered into shards. The skeletal knight's dark magic surged violently. Luckily, Paladin Alessandro Tiarano had time to raise his shield to intercept the blade, and Priest Hayes beside him cried out in fear. Purple smoke curled up from the shield into the air. A few figures instinctively backed away, their breaths heavy and eyes strained as they witnessed the power sweep across the battlefield. Kettle turned his head back and exclaimed, oh. Paladin Alessandro Tiarano tensed, sweat pouring down his face. He wondered if a single strike could be so devastating. The skeletal knight's massive frame meant its blows were equally enormous. Paladin Alessandro Tiarano feared it's too powerful. The knight's expression turned mysterious, indescribably deep. He stood on the ground barring a sinister grin, his cloak billowing in the wind, a swirl of purple smoke radiating around him, looking utterly terrifying. Kettle stood silent, one eye closed and the other open, staring at him. His gaze settled and grew more dangerous. The skeletal knight lunged at Kettle, and he struck the creature with a powerful punch. It staggered and flew off to one side, its dazed expression almost comical. The 3 others watched in astonishment, mouths agape and eyes wide, speechless. Kettle clapped his hands together to dust them off, gave a faint laugh and quietly asked, is that it? Kettle stood motionless in the cold void, squinting slightly, muscles tensing in alert as he faced the overwhelming presence before him. His eyes suddenly widened. Surprise flashed across his face as if witnessing something unexpected. Kettle suddenly called out Casson. Hearing his name, Casson turned and answered, yes, yes. A stout wooden chest sat neatly on the stone step, secured with a golden lock. Kettle quietly asked if he could open it. Casson shouted frantically, no, I can't, it's protected by a high-level lock. I don't have the ability to open it. Kettle sounded a bit disappointed. Is that so? What bad luck? Casson replied sadly, it's a pity, but give it up. Before he could finish, Kettle used his own strength to deliver a mighty blow. Casson's eyes bulged excessively, his mouth opened stupidly wide. The wooden chest burst open, dust and smoke rose from within, and everyone fell silent, watching to see what was inside. The 2 stood frozen, eyes wide and mouths agape, staring forward in horror as if they'd witnessed something beyond imagination. Kettle smiled confidently and clenched his fist as if the released power exhilarated him. The chest was full of silver coins indeed, but the reward could be much greater. Casson, you clear it out, he said. Casson replied, yes. He slowly stepped toward the wooden chest, pondering using force to open it, something he'd never seen in his life. Casson's face registered an indescribable blankness. He wondered, if Kettle could smash it open, why had he been asked to pick the lock at all? A large doorway opened before the three of them, bright light flooding out from within. A few fragments of rock fell from the cliff. Kettle turned his head to the right, curious. The stones behind them were shifting, making the ground tremble like an earthquake. Casson turned his head to the side, eyes calm yet alert. He exhaled softly as if confirming something inside. Once a dungeon is cleared, it vanishes, so there's probably no secret room this time. Hearing that, Kettle asked, "A secret room, do those exist?" Casson replied, "Rare, but they do." Kettle smiled, then added, "That's amusing." Casson looked puzzled, not understanding what he meant. Confusion showed clearly on his face. The guard captain leaned on the table with one hand, the other relaxed. Surprise showed on his face as he asked quietly, "What, it's over already?" Sunlight fell on the quiet city wall. A soft cough breaking the silence of the hot midday air, a hum. He hesitated, then asked, "So how was the dungeon?" Kettle thumbed his nose in excitement and replied, "It was great." The captain seemed deflated and stammered, "Oh, I see." He gestured and said, "Then we'll proceed with the entry formalities. Everyone follow me, one by one." Priest Hayes froze for a moment, her face showing confusion mixed with anxiety. "No major problems, sir." The dungeon warden asked, "So do you think that Savage can stay within the territory?" She propped her chin on her hand, pondering. After a long silence, she replied hesitantly, "I think it'll probably be fine." The warden fell into thought. When asked about that so-called Savage, she only spoke in hints. He frowned, thinking, conquering the dungeon isn't the problem, the process is. The real purpose is to root out dangerous individuals. Casson said confidently that he wasn't the type to cause trouble. The captain met privately with Paladin Alessandro Tiarano to question him. Folding his arms, he reflected that the man was as strong as a beast, but wouldn't harm anyone indeed, different from ordinary savages. Kettle, arms crossed, praised. Casson did well, he's a thief who disarmed traps and tried the chest. Alessandro is a strong frontline warrior, and Hayes's prayers helped us a lot. Casson replied, "I see, so that's it." Paladin Alessandro Tiarano rambled on, but the captain's expression grew more complicated. He wondered when strangers force their way into a party to clear a dungeon, they usually don't lavish such praise. A bead of sweat rolled down his cheek as he continued. "Very good, you are permitted to enter." The captain didn't forget to warn him. "Though permitted, if you cause trouble, you'll be expelled, be careful." Kettle answered, "Understood." Someone brought over a cloth bag, labeled the conquest reward for everyone to divide. Kettle mused that the guards might take the reward for themselves. He took the cloth bag and thanked him, saying, "Thank you," nodding that this time it seemed they hadn't touched it. Kettle turned to the others and suggested, "Let's split it evenly." Casson responded, "Huh." All three refused the reward. "No, it's not necessary, me neither." Kettle persisted, "We all work together, so split the reward equally, you can't refuse." Casson scratched his head and replied, "All right." Kettle continued, "Then let's go drink to celebrate, see if there's an inn nearby." The three exclaimed, "Huh, what?" They all burst into laughter. The atmosphere lightened after the friendly teasing and jokes celebrate. "Yeah, ha ha." The three could only stand silently with tears in their eyes. Emotions swelling uncontrollably. "Mother, I want to go home." Kettle strode joyfully through the opening gate, leaving behind gloomy figures sinking into despair. The captain watched their backs, pondering. A savage who killed a skeletal knight with one punch, strong as a beast. In front stood a tall man holding a sword. Opposite him was the back of a robust young man, at least as strong as a knight, definitely not an ordinary savage, but a legendary savage, an abnormal individual. Their feet froze in place. He barked an irritated order, eyes full of resentment. "I'll report this to your lord, stand guard at the gate." The man behind replied, "Yes, sir." A tall, magnificent castle displayed luxurious furnishings inside. The captain stood at the doorway with his hand over his chest, and bowed politely as Luke Barkin spoke, "Enter." The captain at the door bowed with his hand to his chest, and said, "I report to you, my lord." Luke Barkin asked, his face unchanged, "What is it?" "He is Lord Luke Barkin of the Barkin region of the Jehent Kingdom." The captain's gaze was sharp as if piercing the other, his voice steady but betraying high alert. Captain of Guard 1 reporting, "My lord, a savage has entered the territory." The scene outside the palace was made more magnificent by the moonlight. It was the lavish interior decoration that truly astonished visitors. Luke Barkin suddenly asked, "Did you grant him permission?" The guard captain confirmed, "Yes, my lord, it's not a big issue." He didn't understand what the captain meant. So what exactly is the problem? The captain had to voice his concern. He's too powerful, being that strong is enough to be a problem. Luke doesn't trust anyone easily, how strong is he? He paced uneasily as the captain recounted their tale. They said the man defeated a skeletal knight with a single punch. Luke tensed so much his eyebrows nearly stood on end. A skeletal knight. He pictured its form. A monster you couldn't handle without a knight's rank, and this man felled it with one blow. Deep down, Luke had always assumed savages were simple, uneducated brutes who solved everything with raw force. He broke into a cold sweat. So is this one top tier? He couldn't assert it for sure, it's possible. Luke Barkin stayed cautious just in case. The man could be even stronger. The guard captain was at a loss too. He couldn't determine it clearly. He didn't know what to do in this situation. A warrior of that caliber, and a savage at that, a race that worships strength as truth, this was a real headache. Luke, however, took a different approach. For now, summon him. He was deeply uneasy about the order given, "Will you be all right?" Luke had his own plan. Simply letting such a powerful being roam the territory was reckless. Better to meet him directly, though the guard captain remained worried it could be dangerous. Luke was wholly confident in his strong defenses. I have my own knights. He flinched slightly when the Lord announced it. He turned to the knight and asked for his opinion. What do you think? The knight judged by instinct. He's strong, but he's still just a savage, a muscle-bound oaf with no intellect. The Lord's knight was supremely confident in his skill. Against my swordsmanship taught directly by the sword saint, he isn't on that level. Luke nodded slightly in agreement with that assurance. He ordered the guard captain, "Summon the savage, I'll speak with him personally." The dining table was laid out with many delicious dishes. Kettle ate a piece of chicken thigh with relish, only a few drops of sauce left at the corner of his mouth. Everyone couldn't help but be unsettled by Kettle's enormous appetite. The room fell silent. The paladin, Cassin, and the priest were at a loss for words. He slammed his cup down hard on the table. Only after finishing did Kettle compliment the meal. "This is good, nice place. I also like the quiet. It's on me today, so eat and drink freely." She laughed out loud to ease the tension. Kettle turned to the paladin and asked, "You're a holy knight, right?" He replied calmly, "Yes." Kettle questioned the paladin's power. "What holy power do you use? I didn't see you use it during the dungeon raid." The paladin fumbled an explanation. "I'm still training, so my holy power hasn't awakened yet." Kettle expressed surprise. "Oh, unlucky." The paladin was too embarrassed to add more, replying, He quickly changed the subject. "You said the god you serve is Kalosha. Are there any temples nearby?" The priest offered a casual excuse to refuse. No, I don't think so. He's not a welcomed deity." She knew the truth but kept silent. Kalosha, the god of deceit and trickery, was hated and shunned by the people. The priest hesitated whether to ask. Lord Kettle was still busy eating. What is it?" Her question made the paladin and Cassin startle. How strong is he exactly? Kettle was still lost in the world of food. He couldn't define his own abilities, or rank, I'm not sure either. "I haven't been away from the frozen wastes long, so I'm curious myself how strong is a skeletal knight." The priest's estimate was fairly accurate. At minimum, you'd need a second tier to handle that one, and if it's first tier, it could beat him like Lord Kettle did. Kettle stayed modest, then probably tier 2. The innkeeper's voice trembled as he apologized. He hoped the customer would understand. "Well, our shop's about to close, savage." He urged everyone to get moving. "My fault, let's go." Kettle asked about their plans. "Do you all have any upcoming schedules or plans?" She and the paladin shouted loudly, "Yes, we do." Cassin also asserted boldly, "Yes, very busy." His eyes glistened. "I see. What a shame, so I guess we part ways here. See you all someday." But all three shared the same thought. Never mind, goodbye. Kettle's feet were already on the soft bed. He smiled happily. "This is great. Could this be the first time I've slept in a proper bed since arriving in this world?" Kettle shocked the innkeeper. He was glad to be allowed to stay at the inn, thanks to the dungeon reward without much trouble. He felt happier than ever. Compared to the frozen wastes, this place was truly heaven. Kettle still drifted in his thoughts. It had taken quite some time from when he woke in the frozen wastes to when he found civilization. What should he do now? He wanted more experiences to feel more. He expressed his longing. "I want an adventure, the Elven Sanctum." Those plans remained unrealized. The magic tower and the capital city. He closed his eyes to let his mind rest. Sunlight streamed through the window frame. Kettle woke up still drowsy. He hurriedly wiped the drool still at the corner of his mouth. It was early morning when the guard captain suddenly came to find him. "Did I wake you?" "Sorry about that." Kettle wanted to know why he had come. "Captain of the guard, what's the matter?" He cleared his throat to ease the hoarseness in his voice. The guard captain had come to announce. "The Lord wants to see you personally." Kettle couldn't believe his ears. "The Lord? The one who rules this land, the master of the domain, such a person wants to meet me." He didn't hesitate and agreed immediately. "Understood." Kettle wanted to prepare before leaving. "Shall I go now? Let me put on clothes and I'll be right there." The guard captain was a bit skeptical, that's simple. Sunlight lit every corner of the streets. Only now did he feel the bustle of the market. When he first entered the domain, it had been dark, so he'd only had a glimpse. Kettle looked around, and seeing it by day was truly impressive. He thought life here was truly peaceful. Kettle even gave him a thumbs up. "If this is the lucky fantasy type, I'm all for it." The guard put up with the situation. What the hell is up with this guy? The guard captain forced himself to be patient because of his duty. There wasn't much time. He had to return as quickly as possible. In the blink of an eye, they were at the palace. "My lord, I've brought the savage." Luke reminded the guards at the door, "Let him in." Kettle was walking into the great hall. He reached out to shake Kettle's hand. "A pleasure to meet you, savage." Luke gave a brief introduction. "I am Luke Barkin, lord of these lands, Luke Barkin, lord of Barkin of the kingdom of Jehent." He responded politely upon meeting him. "A pleasure to meet you, my lord, the legitimate ruler of the Barkin territory." Kettle bowed slightly to show respect. "I am Kettle, a savage." Luke's eyes nearly popped out when he saw that gesture. He was speechless with astonishment. A thought crossed Luke's mind. A savage, offering a handshake. He forced himself to stay calm. Savages never shake hands. For them, strength is everything with no exceptions. "Apparently I've lived long enough to see odd things." Luke's attitude shifted rapidly. "It seems you've learned some basic etiquette. Please sit." Kettle sat across from him in the opulent chamber. The palace's decor was completely different from the outside. Everything gleamed with gold. He was surprised looking around. "So this is what the Lord's castle looks like." Kettle seemed to realize something. Even in a fantasy world, castles still look medieval, huh? His eyes moved forward there. A knight guarding the Lord. Kettle's wish had come true. He'd loved role-playing as a knight as a kid. And now to see a real knight in person was amazing, just like he'd imagined. He noticed someone staring at him. The Lord's knight was overthinking things, lethal intent. He always looked at others with suspicion, its genuine killing intent. Unmistakable. How dare he radiate that kind of killing intent in front of the Lord? Before understanding the situation, the Lord's knight reached for his sword. You fool, you won't leave here alive. He listened as Luke finished speaking. The reason I called you here is simple. I mean no harm to Kettle. I just want to confirm a few things about you. Kettle crossed his arms. It's up to you, what do you want to confirm? Luke didn't believe Kettle was a savage. Where are you from? He answered at length but off topic. So that's important to you. I'm from the coldest place in the world. A land covered in white snow. It seemed Luke had guessed, the frozen wastes. Luke, cautious in every thought, realized. He really is the savage warrior of legend, and now he's standing right before me. He still had many doubts hard to believe. Kettle didn't know how to explain. It's a brutal place, believe it or not, it's up to you. Luke wanted more information. Then let me ask one more thing. He grew even tenser than Kettle. How strong are you? Luke needed an answer to prepare precautions. The important thing was how terrifying his strength truly was. Right. Kettle told the truth. That's the wrong question. I don't know the external standards of strength. He trailed off, I understand. Luke turned his head to look at the knight. The knight understood the Lord's implication without being asked. Luke used another method to test Kettle's strength. Would you like to spar with one of my knights? If you agree, I will ensure you are rewarded appropriately. He didn't understand what was happening, a duel. Luke looked forward to his performance. Of course it wouldn't be to the death. I trust you'll keep it within bounds. Kettle smiled brightly. I like that. His calm demeanor startled him. An exhibition match with a knight. He had prayed for this, and now it was happening before his eyes. A knight, not an ordinary one, but a fantasy world knight wielding sorcery and an aura. A chance to witness real combat skill. I'm genuinely excited for this. For some reason, Luke gripped the arm of his chair. He still held his prejudice against Kettle. Indeed, a savage remains a savage. Even if he's polite, his wild nature loves battle, and the thrill of the fight hasn't changed. Both the Lord's knight and Luke felt that Kettle was radiating killing intent. The scene unfolded in the arena. He sat waiting to see who would be victorious. He and Kettle were now standing in the ring. The Lord's knight took the match very seriously. Kettle's expression, by contrast, was full of energy. Luke could not wait another moment. Begin, let's hope no one bleeds. A servant immediately struck the bell. The Lord's knight sneered at him. Consider it an honor to witness my swordplay, you lowly savage. Kettle ignored the taunt. I'm actually looking forward to it. He couldn't understand how the man dared to be so relaxed. The Lord's knight had been ready for a long time. I'll show you. He lunged forward quickly, an overwhelming disparity in skill. The Lord's knight wanted to test Kettle's reactions. Now then, let's see what you'll do, savage. 3 spear-like blades appeared in the blink of an eye. It turned out he wielded a sword with 3 blades joined together. Kettle was somewhat alarmed at the sight. Kettle had no time to react. The sword. 3 green blades thrust toward him at once, making him suspect an illusion. Kettle's face froze, but his body reflexively dodged like lightning. No, this wasn't an illusion. The knight kept attacking, but never landed a hit. A thought flashed through Kettle's mind. All 3 swords are real. Is this swordsmanship? The opponent watched Kettle's stunned face as he dodged indeed. The knight grinned with triumph. You had to struggle to dodge my blades still. That you managed it at all is impressive. He felt certain victory was in his hands and wanted to finish the fight immediately. But the fight didn't need to continue. Suddenly Kettle's hand clenched and shot forward. His face showed no emotion. With a casual snap of his fingers, the knight's sword instantly shattered into pieces. The sudden turn of events left him unable to believe his eyes. Huh, what was that? Kettle gave him no chance to recover. In a heartbeat, he was right in front of the knight, his hand reaching for the man's chest. His hand gripped the breastplate at the knight's chest. Veiny hands dented the solid armor. Kettle heaved violently. The breastplate burst into fragments and the knight's body flew backwards. He flew back with his mouth agape, apparently unconscious. Luke Barkin's eyes widened, and his mouth dropped open as he shouted, "What?" The gauntleted hand loosened and fell to the ground. The knight was flung a long distance, collapsing against the wall. The only traces were a deep gouge in the ground and a dented wall. Seeing his knight defeated with a single strike, Luke Barkin couldn't believe his eyes. He was stunned, thinking. With just one blow, a rank 1 knight was felled. What terrifying power is this? His feet planted firmly, he pivoted around. Kettle smiled at him. That should do it, right? Luke Barkin didn't answer immediately. He stared at him in shock for a long moment. He recovered his composure and slowly said, yes. In Luke's mind replayed the devastating blow Kettle had just delivered. A savage who could down a rank 1 knight with a single strike. This was monstrous power, at least transcendent level. And that was the minimum. The true depth of that strength was immeasurable. His face grew grave. Such power in a savage could threaten to tip the balance of the world. An image formed in his thoughts of a heroic man, and a sword alongside a dragon. If so, I should inform that person one of the few in this wide world who bears the title Sword Saint. Luke Barkin bowed his head slightly, wondering aloud, it's about time he appears. Would he be interested? No sooner had he spoken than a voice suddenly rang out, were you speaking of me? Luke Barkin jolted and immediately turned his gaze toward the voice. The window opened, letting sunlight and breeze into the room. The thin curtain fluttered gently, and standing squarely in the opening was an old man in a blue cloak, arms crossed, calmly watching him. Luke Barkin exhaled a long breath. He glanced at the sudden intruder. Your tastes are still as eccentric as ever. The old man chuckled calmly in reply. Everyone needs a bit of entertainment. The old man was none other than Sword Saint Kane. Arms crossed, he said, well then, why don't you tell me that interesting story? Luke Barkin braced a hand on the table to steady himself, and rose to his feet. He bowed slightly to the Sword Saint. It's an honor that you came despite the short notice. I request an audience with the great sword saint, Lord Kane. Kane said nothing, only stared at him. The man remained silent, and Luke held his stance. Scene changed to a while later. The knight who had lost a kettle lay in bed in pain, trying to suppress it. The wooden door suddenly opened. Luke, who had been standing in the room, unexpectedly asked, startling the knight, "Are you feeling any better?" He hurriedly fumbled to clutch his wound and tried to sit up. "I'll be fine in a few days, I'm sincerely sorry, my lord." Before Luke could speak, the man behind him cut in. "You should be apologizing to me instead." Sword Saint Luke folded his hands behind his back and looked at him. "My foolish disciple has been defeated by an unknown lowly savage." The knight, unnerved by the man's presence, stammered, "Master." Luke glanced down. The knight had only a torn patch on his chest. The old man calmly stated a fact. There wasn't a single wound. He reflected on the savage, thinking, "Before arriving, I saw the boy's armor utterly destroyed. Given the state of the armor, it wouldn't be surprising if he were dead, yet his clothes were only slightly torn and his body unscathed. Could that savage have held back?" Kane propped his chin on his hand and looked at his disciple. "He's not an ordinary foolish savage, he's someone who can control his power, and with great precision at that." The knight hesitated and replied, "I understand." He assessed calmly that the man far surpassed the knight's level to the point he could easily hold back. Finally, Kane delivered a verdict that made both Luke barkin and the knight gape in surprise. "At least transcendent level." Luke hesitated and began, He turned to Kane. "Forgive my rudeness, but compared to you, Lord Kane." Kane fell silent for a moment, then replied immediately, "He's quite strong. But I am the sword saint, even if he has transcendent power, he can't reach me." Luke felt somewhat relieved. Kane stroked his chin thoughtfully, "Yet I saw no aura from him, and his power is already at that level." Kane's words left Luke awestruck. That would be impossible by ordinary means. This is the strength of a savage from the frozen expanse. Kettle's figure rose in his mind. Luke Barkin sank into his own thoughts. "At first I didn't believe it either, but it seems he really is from the frozen expanse." Kane hummed, pondering inwardly. A savage from the frozen expanse. In his thoughts, Kettle's gaze was utterly terrifying. And with Kane's concerns came legends of someone surviving in the frozen expanse. Was he human or... Thinking this, Kane stroked his beard and suddenly muttered, "He is a freak." At his words, images of monsters kept surfacing: reptilian beasts, giant bears. But Kane immediately shook his head to dispel those grim visions. No, Luke Barkin blinked, not understanding what he meant, The horrifying images of a mutant flashed in Kane's mind. He explained, if he truly were a mutant, he wouldn't have held back against humanity. I've been mistaken. Yet there remained something that troubled him, the frozen expanse. Kane felt puzzled. Why there and why now? Seeing Kane's pained expression, Luke asked in confusion, "Is something wrong?" Kane brushed aside his questions. Nothing, leave that matter for later, as with his majesty the emperor, thinking of armored troops before the snowy mountain, gave him a headache. They always demand the strangest things. Kane spun to look at Luke. No need to worry about that now. Luke was puzzled but replied, "I understand." He kept his gaze on Luke. "That savage is still in this territory, right?" Luke, a bit curious, answered honestly, "Yes, he said he'd stay, so I think so." Kane changed direction and began to walk. His expression turned stern as he turned to leave. "I must verify it myself." Outside the city, a voice echoed, "What do you plan to do next?" The captain of Barkin's guard, sweating profusely, said nothing. Kettle stood opposite and said slowly, "Probably." Kettle recalled the previous day when Lord Luke Barkin handed him a small pouch and said, "This is the reward for the match," and he calmly decided, "From now on I will not interfere with your actions within the territory." Back in the present, Kettle rubbed his chin and continued, "I have no concrete plans either. But it would be better to verify my identity every time I enter a new territory. I have to clear dungeons, and that's too much trouble." Hearing that, the man offered a suggestion. "If you're worried about that, you could ask someone of high status to be your patron and vouch for you." Or Kettle wanted another option and quickly added, "You could become a mercenary." He explained the benefits of becoming a mercenary. If you accumulate achievements and are recognized by a guild, your status will be acknowledged. He thought to himself. However, mercenaries are nothing but errand runners until they reach a certain rank. With this savage's power, finding a patron would be the easiest route. Hearing that, Kettle was surprised. A mercenary. His eyes lit up and he asked softly, "Is there really a way like that?" An image formed of a mercenary fiercely hunting monsters through a dangerous forest. Mercenaries take on contracts to slay beasts, the embodiment of a romantic, fantastical world if so. Kettle looked intrigued and asked, "Where do I go to become a mercenary?" He hesitated and answered, "There's a guild." Kettle's face brightened like the sun as he said decisively, "Take me there." The captain of the guard froze and stared at him with wide eyes, stammering, "All right." Images of people on their own journeys appeared. Mercenaries roaming everywhere to fulfill commissions. Some view them as symbols of romantic freedom, but in reality, mercenaries are the lowest class in society, for those whose status is unrecognized. Even a mercenary can panic and flee from the terrifying monster they face. Even strong mercenaries often die in unexplored dungeons, or become sacrificial sheep for dirty work. Therefore, the low-tier mercenaries are usually rude, filthy, and loud. The man in green angrily threw a punch at the man opposite, shouting, "Bastard, how dare you touch me?" At the guild hall, the man struck couldn't block the blow and fell hard backward. He immediately recovered, sprang up and shouted, "You want to fight?" Hearing that, the man in green grew even more enraged and taunted. "Then come at me if you're brave." Two fellow guild members watched them about to clash and chuckled as they bet. "Hey, right when I bet on you. If she wins, I'm with you, I bet on the left one. They charged at each other and fought without yielding. Both sides fought fiercely and refused to lose. The mercenary guild receptionist then asked, Rosa, how's this batch of recruits? Rosa, the guild receptionist, sighed wearily. Hopeless, it's all a bunch of freaks. Rosa remembered the paladin, a lunatic claiming to be a holy knight, then Casson, a thief, and finally Kalosha's cleric, Priest Hayes. The cleric seemed decent, but the deity she worships is not trustworthy at all. Rosa sighed heavily in melancholy. The pink-haired receptionist beside her lamented, is that so? What a shame. She thought glumly that no decent people showed up, while the uneducated mercenaries only fought all day. Then imagined another scene if only a white-haired prince would appear to rescue her from this receptionist job. Someone slowly and deliberately opened the door and stepped in. Rosa, lost in thought and sorrow, suddenly jumped in surprise. She looked up and saw a strange visitor standing before her. Kettle stepped in, looked around with excited eyes, and exclaimed, so this is the guild. The two who had been beating each other up paused and turned to stare at the newcomer. No way. A savage. The others in the guild also went stiff and stared at Kettle. As for Kettle, he arrived here in high spirits, not a worry on his mind. Kettle sat at a table, folded his arms, and spoke boldly. I'm here because I want to become a mercenary. Rosa was stunned and trembled, her face drained of color as she stammered, Oh, you want to be a mercenary? May I ask your purpose? Kettle answered her slowly, many reasons, but I heard becoming a mercenary can get your status recognized. Rosa replied calmly, that's true. However, to gain recognition through the mercenary path, you must achieve quite a lot of feats. He responded decisively, that's fine, no problem. Rosa asked for Kettle's personal information. I'll register you as a mercenary for a fee of 5 silver coins. May I have your name? He placed 5 coins on the table and said slowly, I'm Kettle. My age, I don't know. She typed swiftly and smoothly, then said gently to him, then I'll just enter an approximate age. Shortly after, Rosa produced a badge and informed Kettle, done, your mercenary registration is complete. This is your mercenary badge. She reminded him, it's the symbol of a mercenary, don't lose it. Kettle fell silent when he saw the badge. He picked up the badge and stared at it, then said with satisfaction, I've been accepted. Excited, Kettle asked her, are there any missions right now? I want to start immediately. Rosa, a bit surprised, hesitated and replied, missions, yes. Rosa gently handed Kettle a board. These are the missions you can take at the moment. He picked it up, looked surprised, and asked, wait, this is all there is. On the board were F-rank missions. Herb gathering, cellar cleaning, sewer sanitation, street sweeping, and night patrols. Rosa forced a smile and replied, you're only an F-rank mercenary right now, so these are the tasks you can take. Inside, she felt uneasy. Savages tend to be proud. What if he suddenly flew into a rage? Should I call someone? She forced herself to say to Kettle, if you complete simple missions and accumulate achievements, you'll be eligible for harder tasks. No sooner had she finished than Kettle declared, I'll take this mission. Rosa stared at the mission board in astonishment. It turned out Kettle chose herb gathering as his first mission. She hesitated and asked again, are you sure? He answered calmly, it's a necessary task, right? No problem. Rosa stammered, I understand. Then, full of enthusiasm, Kettle asked, so, where do I go to collect the herbs? Rosa handed over a picture of the herb. You need to go outside the village, they look like this. Kettle grabbed it quickly and said eagerly, got it, I'll be right back. She stammered, oh, okay. Watching Kettle leave with the herb photo in hand and a look of excitement, Rosa froze, thinking to herself, what's with him, he seems so relaxed. Finally, he opened the door and left the guild to carry out the herb gathering mission. Rosa stood dumbfounded. Even the pink-haired receptionist's attempts to spook her couldn't move her. He arrived at the forest, and Kettle spotted a herb flower there. He held the paper with the herb image up to compare. Kettle looked for a moment and wondered to himself, does this herb heal wounds? It looks kind of strange. He took off his fur coat and tossed it onto the lush grass then. Kettle resembled a peasant gathering herbs, excited for this mission. I've even prepared UV protective clothing starting my first mercenary mission. UV rays come in 2 types even in other worlds, a rare bit of knowledge from Kettle. About an hour later at the mercenary guild, Rosa was stunned to see a large sack of herbs in front of her. Kettle casually asked, is this enough? Rosa stammered, it's way too much. In her head she thought, is he crazy trying to wreck the herb fields or what? Suddenly her eyes lit up. Oh, but... Rosa looked at the sack of herbs Kettle had gathered and exclaimed, they're in excellent condition, most mercenaries just pull them carelessly, ruining a lot of their value. Kettle felt proud upon hearing that. Looks like it, I take pride in being meticulous. Rosa agreed with him, yes. Then she handed Kettle a silver coin. Thank you for your hard work, Kettle, this is your reward for the task. 1 silver coin. He thought of the fragrant bread he could buy with the coin. It would only cover the cheapest meal, but still this was the first honest money he'd ever earned. Kettle couldn't help but be overjoyed. He was deeply moved. Holding the coin, he hurriedly said, I'm very satisfied, may I take the next task now? Rosa stared at him, She gaped at him, puzzled inwardly. What is this? How could this reward make someone so content, this savage? He was as happy as a child with a present and said, there's still daylight, so I want to do as much as I can. Rosa couldn't help but wonder why he seemed so cheerful. She felt like crying inside. My God, this new mercenary is just as strange. On the F-rank job board, the tasks listed in order were herb gathering, cellar cleaning, public sanitation, which he had completed, quickly leaving the remaining tasks, street sweeping, night patrol, and warehouse cleanup. Kettle pointed to the last task, warehouse cleanup, and decided, I'll choose this one. Rosa thought to herself that after the herb gathering task, This would be his third cleaning job. She looked at Kettle, whose eyes shone like sunlight toward her. Could it be that this savage actually likes cleaning? She didn't know what else to say and stammered, "WL. Then accept this task request." A moment later, he opened the door and entered the warehouse to perform the task. A girl wearing a white cap saw someone enter and turned her head to look. Kettle, upbeat and spirited, announced, "I'm here to clean the warehouse." The red-haired girl panicked and gripped her broom tightly as she looked at him. Kettle calmly asked, "Are you the owner of this warehouse?" She answered slowly, "Why, yes," though inwardly she was astonished. A savage. He began the job, gently lifting a row of boxes with both hands. Tidying the warehouse was simple, and he had no trouble moving the items inside. After that, Kettle took a broom and swept everywhere, the dust and smoke stinging the throat of a nearby young man and making him cough. The next task was to sweep the streets, so he grabbed a broom and started sweeping. At first, controlling his strength was a bit difficult, but he managed without major problems. At that moment, while Kettle was diligently sweeping the streets, someone watched him through binoculars. The old man watched him for a while, puzzled. What on earth is he doing? He thought to himself. Clearly at least superhuman level, someone strong enough to flatten a kingdom with a single punch. The thought of Kettle hiding behind that gentle face made him even more bewildered. In other words, if he revealed his power, he'd be praised anywhere, yet here he was, doing ordinary street sweeping work. The old man saw him diligently sweeping back and forth, and he wasn't doing it half-heartedly. Kettle swept thoroughly, brushing all the dirt into the dustpan. The old man observed everything and sighed. He really takes it seriously. He lowered the binoculars and stood staring at Kettle from a distance, unable to help but wonder why. When he finished cleaning, he didn't look tired, just wiped a few beads of sweat from his hands and murmured in light excitement, "This feels great." The old man saw him like that and felt puzzled. Why does he look like he's enjoying it? The next morning, the sun blazed overhead. Kettle woke up, let out a refreshing yawn, and stretched to energize himself. He put his feet down on the floor. Then he suddenly noticed a fairly large bag sitting on the table that hadn't been there before. The bag looked heavy. He wondered what was inside. It turned out to be full of silver coins. A female voice rang out, "Your first day as a mercenary went well, Mr. Kettle. This is the reward for 15 tasks." He opened his eyes wide and stared at the money bag. Kettle picked the bag up, and Rosa, sitting across from him, smiled softly and said, "Those are 15 silver coins." He couldn't hide his joy. Delight showed clearly on his face. Kettle smiled and said, "Thank you very much. I'll come back tomorrow." He smiled in satisfaction time to start his second day in town. At that time, a little girl was sobbing uncontrollably as she clung to her mother. The surrounding townspeople stood frozen, staring at someone there. It turned out Kettle had walked past them. His powerful presence made them stare with wide eyes. As he was walking, he suddenly stopped. It seemed Kettle had seen something and paused, exclaiming that. In the distance rose an old, beautifully and intricately designed building, a library. He knocked and entered the library. The librarian glanced at the visitor and then spoke hello. An eerie aura radiated from Kettle, making the librarian fearfully clench her hands into silence. He lowered his voice and asked, "May I read the books?" Kettle walked through the stacks for a while, then took out a few volumes and sat at a table to read them. Kettle sat engrossed in his reading, his face showing clear enjoyment. The librarian at the desk watched him read in silence. The old man, knife at his side, followed and observed Kettle's every move. Seeing him bent over his books, he was greatly astonished and thought to himself, "A barbarian reading books, it's odd," he thought. That aside, there's no doubt I can sense it. Even barbarians from the frozen plains have some customs different from others. Kettle remained there, reading intently with a faint smile. Perhaps only this barbarian is special like that. A moment later, he closed the history book and murmured, "So the Empire finally won." After finishing, he pieced together a series of events. Years ago, Milena came to the frozen plains and said she would sell weapons to the kingdom in its war against the Empire. Yet the Empire won that battle. The Empire's banners were raised as a mark of victory. Now the Empire is tremendously powerful, and the kingdom of Varkin has almost become a vassal state. A host of that Empire's knights stand ready to launch fierce wars. The Empire has swallowed half of the human world and continues to expand its conquests. They fear no opponent and strike without hesitation, as if they intend to devour the entire world. Kettle rubbed his chin and murmured, "Conquer the world." Then his eyes lit up with curiosity about history. "All right, that's enough about humanity, now let's see something more interesting." He pulled out a book on non-human races to see what it said about them. Kettle flipped through each page, reflecting. A compendium of non-human creatures detailing the mystical wonders recorded in this book. A magnificent cavern filled with glittering crystals truly existing in this world, the greatest cave in the world, overflowing with rare ores like star gems. The dwarf caverns of Manchiana. Then there's the fairy village Pisarapia, verdant and beautiful with grass and trees everywhere. The cloud city of the angelic Lagemara, equally grand and splendid. And the unreachable sanctuary, the sacred home of the entire elf race, Elfo Sagrado. This place has been shrouded in mystery for years. No one knows its location. Even powerful rulers have tried every method to find it and fail. Kettle read this with apparent interest. Clearly many have tried to reach the elves' sanctuary. Suddenly he widened his eyes, as if he discovered something intriguing. Kettle brought the book close to his face and read every word with wide eyes. Wait, are there other regions like the frozen plains? These places are teeming with horror spirit zones that reject human presence and are filled with the uncanny. Many spirit zones exist, But in this world, 5 regions are exceptionally vast. Next is an area wrapped in absolute silence. The silent forest, where everything falls into stillness. Then a place immersed in burning flames, the abyss, which spreads evil throughout the world. Beneath the ocean lies a unique ecosystem. The deep sea, where primate-like beings breathe and survive. Next is a bottomless black hole surrounded by a colorful ring, the infinite void, where nothing exists. Finally, a region that snows year-round. People there exude an indescribable mystery, the frozen plains. Within these spirit zones dwell terrible monsters called incarnations of destruction. However, these spirit zones cannot invade human territories. He read this and exclaimed in awe, "How vast is this world?" Then he rubbed his chin, wondering, are there many more places like the frozen plains? A moment later, Kettle stood up from the table and said, "This should be all the information available here." He looked toward the librarian and said politely, "The information was really helpful, thank you." She jumped as if her soul left her for a moment, then stammered, "Why, yes, of course." Kettle then slowly made his way back to the mercenary guild. He entered and approached the guild receptionist, asking Rosa what tasks are available today. She was surprised and said, "Lord Kettle, you're here already." Kettle's eyes lit up when Rosa smiled and said, "This is today's mission request." That old man kept watching Kettle's every move and gesture. He was truly strange. He turned and walked away, muttering that perhaps he needed to meet him in person after all. It turned out he was Sword Saint Kane, the Day 2 supervisor watching Kettle. On a quiet evening with a bright moon and a cool breeze, the sound of clattering footsteps echoed on the road. Kettle smiled, full of excitement, thinking to himself that he would handle another dozen requests today. He thought about the little sum of money tucked at his side, and couldn't help but feel joyful all over. Even small amounts add up to quite a lot. Outside it was deserted, with no one in sight. Kettle walked alone, thinking that with this momentum the day he would be recognized as a true mercenary wasn't far off. He cheerfully whistled down the street, while in a nearby alley a man had already been hiding to watch. Seeing him, the old man suddenly lunged out, startling him. Kane's face glared menacingly. He wore a long robe with a large hood pulled up. The two stood facing each other, the air tense and awkward. Kettle bluntly asked loudly, "You've been tailing me all day." The old man was surprised and puzzled, He crossed his arms over his chest and continued to ask loudly, "What do you want?" Facing the rapid barrage of questions, the old man panicked, wondering how he had been discovered. His face went pale and his mouth opened in disbelief. I'd completely concealed my presence. No matter how keen the senses, discovering me should be impossible. Seeing Kane not answer, he began to worry and put a hand over his coin pouch. Could this man be a robber? He crouched into a ready stance, prepared to wrestle the man at any moment. Kane looked even more stunned at the sight. After a long while with no movement, he knitted his brows and growled no answer. Then I must be right. Security here seems good, but there are still robbers about. Sweat streamed down the old man's face as he stammered. Could I tell him I'm a sword saint, and would he believe me? Seeing the stiff, spray-glued posture, Kettle was struck as if by a thunderclap, old and still robbing. The economy must be worse than I thought. Suddenly he raised a hand to his chin and thought for a moment. His eyes brightened as if an idea had struck him. Taking him down and turning him in would make a good achievement. Kina flinched and froze in shock. What? Seeing his sly, suggestive smile, the old man was speechless but reconsidered. Actually, this could be a good opportunity. He thinks I'm a robber. He clenched his hands and raised them forward. Engaging him directly might be the best way to assess his strength and identity. Suddenly, Kettle stepped back. The old man instinctively looked up. Before he could make a move, Kettle had already acted. He swayed as if unmoored. With a whoosh, only a rush of wind remained in the air. The old man was frightened. Fear showed plainly on his face. Had the boy vanished? With a pop, Kettle reappeared looming before him, furious and terrifying, eyes glowing. His body now 2 or 3 times larger than before. What was happening? He reached his hand forward as if to grab him. He stamped his foot hard on the ground. A green aura radiated from him. If I just stand here. He swung his arm to dodge. Lunging aside, he's going to grab my scruff. Only when the man finally reacted did Kettle burst out a long laugh. He bared his teeth in a grin, stared at the man and said, "Not bad." But the man was utterly flustered, eyes wide and white. He couldn't accept it. No way, he almost caught me. Kane collapsed to the ground, still terrified. If his reflexes had been any slower, he would have been caught. Worse, he couldn't sense a trace of aura from the boy. Kettle crossed his arms and laughed loudly interesting. The man stared into his eyes, overthinking. He moves that fast with a purely human body. The man pursed his lips, swallowed. The probing was over, now it's real. Kane bent his knees and leapt up, teeth clenched. Transforming into a completely different person, I'll go all out. Kettle said nothing. His face darkened and he stood still. Suddenly he vanished into thin air, leaving only a gust of wind. Like lightning, he circled behind and grabbed one of the man's hands. The man gritted his teeth and looked back in disbelief, defeated before he could even start. I widened my senses and still couldn't react in time. He shoved the man's hand behind his back, as if escorting a criminal. The man panicked utterly, his face frozen in a stunned depression. This wasn't just being caught, it felt like his arm was trapped in solid rock and his whole body being dragged away. His entire body seemed restrained. Kane squeezed his eyes shut and screamed in agony, what monstrous power is this? He clenched his teeth and endured. This wasn't even a contest of strength. Unable to accept staying like this, he tensed and resisted. The aura of power swelled larger. If so, I'll give my all and unleash my strength. Seeing him channel power like that made Kettle blink in surprise. eyes wide. The grip around the man's wrist in Kettle's hand began to loosen. At last, unconsciously, Kettle could no longer hold his grip. A violent flash of light shot out, dazzlingly bright. Kane broke free and slid backward a long distance. Kettle, still confused, held his hand up and saw faint traces of the man's green aura on his palm. Kane knit his brows, panting and wary as he watched him. Kettle grinned broadly and teased, "Thieves today sure have every trick in the book, leaving the man speechless. Why does he keep calling me a thief?" The man's eyes lit up as he imagined a terrifying power mana at a level only elites reach. Surrounding his body, why would someone like that be a robber? Then he glanced again at Kettle's odd expression, yet he genuinely believed Kettle was a thief. Finally, Kane lowered his head slightly and sighed in exasperation. He felt the abundant energy in his body. He'd released mana instinctively. That manifested mana could easily tear through solid steel. A human body should have been crushed with a single touch. Yet the boy wasn't harmed. What kind of body is this? But he still couldn't make sense of it. How could someone endure exposed mana with bare hands? Seeing Kane standing dumbfounded in the corner, Kettle suddenly spoke up. "I don't know what tricks you're using." Saying that, he slowly stepped closer, "But I think it's time to end this." Sensing something was off, the old man already had a hand on the sword at his hip, ready to parry. His eyes widened in confusion, not knowing what trick the youth would pull next. Kettle pressed his face close with a friendly smile, used one finger to slide the sword back into its sheath. Kane looked up, trembling all over. Just that was enough to send him into a panic, eyes bulging like a frog's, mouth gaping as he screamed. He clenched his teeth. He tried to draw his sword, but couldn't. The boy had already dominated him with a single index finger. Suddenly, something happened that made the old man startle. One hand held the sword, while the other of his reached out, as if to grab the old man. Tears welled at the corner of his eye and trickled down, old but sentimental. "Is it over?" The boy's arm stretched longer, inching closer. When it was done, the smile faded from his face. He cleared his throat with a long, harsh sound. Kane fainted dead away from fright. Kettle hoisted him over his shoulder as easily as flipping a hand. So this is what counts as robbery in the fantasy world. The captain of the Barkin Guard suddenly went stiff. Mouth agape, "What the hell is going on, savage? What is this?" Kettle extended his arm. Old Kina was still unconscious. With an expressionless, earnest face, he handed the man over to the captain. The captain recognized the man, but was bewildered. What on earth is happening? Why is Sword Saint Kane here? Don't tell me that savage attacked Sir Kane. What should we do now? Seeing the captain's confusion, Kettle said bluntly, "I caught the thief." Those words hit like a thunderclap. Thief. His face lit up with excitement at the thought of what he might gain if I hand him to the guards. "It counts as mercenary credit for me, right?" The captain didn't understand a word and fell into stunned silence, momentarily dumbfounded. He stood there a while, still unable to process it. What is this situation? He scanned the man from head to toe and began to analyze. A person who has reached the pinnacle of extraordinary skill, Sword Saint Kane. Then he looked at the old man now held in Kettle's grip. This great man was being captured by a savage, in a deeply humiliating pose. The captain slowly opened his mouth to explain. "That man is not a thief." Startled, Kettle snapped, "You know him, so he's an accomplice." The captain set his feet, adjusted his posture, and became solemn. Then he solemnly bowed in salute. "The only Sword Saint in the kingdom of Jehent, I offer my respects to Sword Saint Kane." It seemed genuine. Kettle glanced at the man in his arms, bewildered. "Huh." The man's face darkened, sweat poured down, and he fell silent. Kettle still doubted, shaking the old man in his arms. "Sword Saint? Such an exalted title, and he's called a thief." With a sharp, resolute stare at the captain, he retorted, "Impossible, the old man is a thief. He attacked me to steal my coins." The captain had to wearily explain again. "No, he truly is the Sword Saint. I couldn't mistake that face. He may be a mage using illusions." The captain slowly closed his eyes and explained. If he were a mage strong enough to do that, he'd already be revered as a Sword Saint. Kettle still refused to give up. What if Sword Saint is just a fancy title for thieves? He frowned. "What nonsense are you spouting?" Kettle immediately blew it off. He asked again, "So he really is a Sword Saint?" The captain nodded at once. Right. Kettle blew it off. Part 2. Guilt showed on his face, his head spinning with no idea what to do. "I'll report this to the Lord." Inside, a heavy slam on the table rang out, an angry, urgent voice. "What?" Luke Barkin shouted straight at the soldier. "Lord Kane is missing." Kettle bowed his head and apologized sincerely. "I'm sorry, I should have let you explain." Kane, standing nearby, suddenly interjected. "No, it's my fault too for staying silent." They sat facing each other in a heavy, tense silence. Awkward and unable to meet eyes, how many pairs of trousers would that take? Luke Barkin rushed in, flustered. What the hell is going on? Seeing Kane sitting there solemnly, he gasped, thinking. "I expected Lord Kane to seek out the savage for single combat, but I never thought he'd lose. Lord Kane was defeated by that savage. I don't know the details, but it's true." Looking at Kettle sitting opposite, he pieced it together. That means the savage is stronger than a Sword Saint. The Lord stood frozen near the door with a jumble of thoughts. Of course, there are different tiers even among the extraordinary. Lord Kane only recently became a Sword Saint, so perhaps he's on a lower tier. The image of Kettle's frightening, violent demeanor inexplicably flashed in his mind. But a Sword Saint is someone who has earned an exalted title, the Sword Master. And the fact that the savage beat such a person made him utterly uncontrollable. After a moment, he pursed his lips and sighed inwardly. "My head aches." Luke Barkin stepped forward slowly, his tone gentle and measured. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding, so I'll take my leave. You two should talk this out clearly." He stopped mid-step, hesitating and unable to finish his sentence. Well then, an awkward silence fell, not a sound to be heard. Kettle stared at the old man without blinking. Kane grew more anxious and dared not move. The old man trembled as he lifted his teacup, unable to swallow so humiliating. Still, he couldn't deny it. It was a total defeat. His pride wasn't just wounded, it was shattered like a rag. He took a deep breath to calm himself and slammed the cup down. Allow me to introduce myself properly. He placed a hand on his chest. I am Sword Saint Kane. Kettle folded his arms and cut in. Is Sword Saint your family name? Once you reach that realm, surnames become meaningless. Hearing that, he nodded as if enlightened. I see. Oh, so what you showed earlier was a Sword Saint's technique. At that mention, the old man glared and went momentarily speechless. He spread his hands and summoned a flicker of green energy. Is this what you mean? Seeing that, Kettle sprang to his feet, mouth agape as if witnessing a marvel. Then he began to recall the earlier events more carefully. At first, I thought it was just a thief's trick and paid it no mind. But now knowing it's a Sword Saint's skill, I'm interested. The old man clenched his hand. Withdrawing that power into himself, this is the manifestation of arcane, also called aura. Kettle was a little startled. Aura, so that's what aura is. His eyes lit up with hope. How can I learn it? He didn't hide it and shared right away. Basically, you have to manifest it by controlling arcane. He stared at the energy held in the old man's palm in awe. An envy so is arcane like mana. The old man, expression unchanged, explained carefully. Arcane refers to the mystical power itself. Use it as an aura and you're a swordsman. Use it as mana and you're a mage. Enlightened, Kettle suddenly laughed and nodded. So both swordsmen and mages use the same power called arcane. Would you be willing to teach me? He froze, mouth agape in disbelief. What? Kettle stood up earnestly and said, embarrassing as it is, I'm still learning and lack knowledge. Kettle's eager face staring at him was almost threatening. I beg you, please teach me. Kane, visibly shaken, hastily agreed. All right, but do you really need my guidance? 100,000 ways flashed through his mind. Aren't you stronger than me? Kettle sat down, arms crossed, and said bluntly, I know nothing about arcane or swordsmanship, I just swing wildly. The old man looked stunned. Really? Kane shut his eyes tight and thought carefully. Yes, I'm a sword saint. I may have lost, but I hadn't even drawn my sword fine. I'll teach this savage a few sword techniques and show him their greatness. He painted countless ideal scenarios in his head, swinging the sword with skill that would make the boy gape in admiration, and reclaiming his shattered pride. He parted his lips and agreed, very well. With grave seriousness he declared, proudly to the skis, I am a sword saint who uses the sword. Without a sword, I'm only half a man. Kettle's face tensed in return and delivered a cutting line. I thought so, no wonder you're weak. It's because you didn't use your sword. The old man went rigid, stunned, and emotionally wounded. Those words stung. Kettle's eyes darted, voice faltering a bit. I mean, being called a sword saint at that power level, I thought something was off. Kane wanted to curse under his breath. This brat. Encouraged, he pressed on. If you'd used your sword, you might have one. Kane broke out in a cold sweat. Could he really have one just by using his sword? Kettle's eyes glittered with eager anticipation. I'm really looking forward to it, but it will start a period of turmoil for Kane. I'll get back my pride, right? He felt like he might be crushed even worse. Kettle secretly recalled his past life. Before regression, I studied swordsmanship. This is true arcane swordsmanship. A strange style that controls mysterious aura. He murmured to himself, this is real arcane swordsmanship. At the same time, Kane stood opposite him with his sword and asked seriously, the main trait of my swordsmanship is the fusion of illusion and reality. What did you see when you fought my disciple? Kettle, hearing that, recalled, that night was your disciple. His sword moves split into 3, and all 3 were real attacks. He said, a bit surprised, ah, so that's what you meant by fusion. Kettle offered his opinion, so it's skill-based more than raw power. Kane nodded slightly, that's right. Kane explained, swordsmanship is the art of merging blade and aura to wield mystical techniques, and one who reaches the end of that path becomes a sword saint. Then Kane poured his aura into the sword to demonstrate for Kettle. Kettle, thrilled, said, oh, so that's aura. Kane nodded in confirmation, yes. He thought to himself, I still can't believe this is happening. Kane continued, I suppose the fusion of illusion and reality sounds a bit abstract, he thought. Am I really teaching swordsmanship to a savage? Then assumed a fencing stance and said, so I'll let you see it with your own eyes. Kane's gaze sharpened, and a moment later he slashed his sword forward with force. His strike immediately split into 5 paths that shot forward. Seeing that, Kettle was instantly astonished his sword technique. He wondered, split into 5. A few seconds later, a large dent appeared on the wall where Kane's blade had struck. Kane quickly sheathed his sword and said, many techniques create illusions using aura. Kane added confidently, but making those illusions tangible is something only my swordsmanship can do. Then Kettle quietly spoke. The move you just used, Kane nodded proudly. Yes, it's indeed an arcane masterpiece. What do you think? Kettle replied nonchalantly, I feel like I could do it too. Hearing that, Kane was suddenly startled. He scolded lightly, what nonsense are you saying? Kane thought to himself, I've devoted my whole life to the sword. Combining innate talent with relentless training, I struggled to attain this technique after all that. There's no way someone could copy it after one glance. Seeing Kane still doubtful, Kettle said, it's faster if I show you. Then Kane was surprised at what he saw in Kettle's hand and thought, that's a... He wondered in confusion, an axe. At the same time, Kettle quickly assumed a stance. He swung the axe over his shoulder, gathering force. Then he cut forward in a rapid strike. Watching this, Kane was stunned that sword move, he thought, mouth agape. He's just using brute force to move quickly. On the other side, Kettle not paying attention to him. quickly unleashed 5 strikes forward just like Kane had. His counter-strikes landed with immense force against the wall, causing a huge blast. Seeing that, Kane was even more astonished. Kettle had already withdrawn the axe. He smiled brightly and asked, "So how do you like that?" Kane thought dazedly. It really did look like a fusion of illusion and reality when he executed the move. Even though it was actually achieved through overwhelming strength and speed, it almost fooled me for a moment. Then he said softly, "You just swing around wildly, there's no technique to it." Kettle retorted, "But the result isn't much different. Swordsmanship is meant for real combat." He added, "As long as the result is the same, that's fine, isn't it?" Kane was left speechless and replied, He thought miserably. He's not wrong, but his words wounded my pride too much. A moment later, he recovered his composure, took up his sword, and said, "In that case, how about this?" Kane struck again, this time producing multiple clones of himself that appeared around him. Kettle was stunned again, his body split apart. Kane's sword energy, combined with his aura, radiated outward. Seconds later, the ground cracked wherever the sword energy passed. When the dust cleared, there was a huge hole in the ground beneath Kane's feet. After finishing the demonstration, Kane panted and said, "This is the clone technique, achieved through extreme mastery in the use of aura." He turned to Kettle, wiped his sweat, and asked, "Could you imitate that?" Kettle pivoted on his foot and stepped away. He hurried over to a different corner. Next, Kettle swung the axe up again. He chopped forcefully in all directions, almost creating illusions. Seeing this, Kane continued to gape. Across from him, Kettle kept swinging powerfully all around. Gradually, a large gust of wind formed around him. Then a whirlwind slowly took shape. After finishing that display, Kettle smiled and asked, "How do you like it?" Kane fell to his knees on the ground and sobbed loudly. He turned pale with anguish. "My life's work." Kane rolled his eyes and wailed, "My swordsmanship." He muttered, "Impossible." For a moment, Kane seemed to collapse and covered his face. Kettle folded his arms across his chest and sighed. His psyche is weaker than I thought." He quickly stepped over to him. Kettle offered reassurance. "Your swordsmanship is outstanding." He continued, "I only swung the axe quickly, that's not true swordsmanship." Kettle added, however, "The moves you just performed weren't mere afterimages. They were real sword techniques. I can't reach the true arcane realm." Hearing that, Kane thought secretly, "That's right, my swordsmanship still has value, fusing illusion and reality into something tangible. I'm the only one who can do that." After a while, he regained his resolve and told himself, "Yes, my technique has no flaws." He grimaced at Kettle, thinking, "That savage is just a madman. What kind of madman can move so fast he becomes a blur without using aura? That's not something a human could do." Kettle suddenly asked, "Can you teach me the true meaning of the technique?" Kane startled and froze. He calmed himself and replied, "Sorry, I let my emotions get the better of me." Kettle nodded, "I understand." Kane cleared his throat softly, He quickly explained, "To use the genuine technique, you must first learn to control aura. But to master aura, you must first comprehend arcane arts." Kane added, "Whether mage, swordsman, or warlock, you can't ascend to higher realms without awakening the arcane arts. Only those who trust in gods are exceptions." Kettle asked, "Oh, so divine power is something separate?" Kane answered, "Their miracles come directly from the god they worship, and aren't related to personal ability." Kettle exclaimed in awe, "Ooh." Kane continued, "Arcane arts are exactly that, the mysterious power deep within each person, and how one harnesses that power determines everything." Hearing this, Kettle thought, so to use aura, absorb mana, or command spirits, the foundation of all arcane power begins with mastering these arcane arts. Kane explained the arcane arts have 5 stages. He said solemnly, "The most basic is sensing the arcane arts, the realm of recognizing, opening, and feeling the arcane." Kettle asked in confusion, "Not everyone can sense the arcane arts." Kane replied, "Without talent you can't perceive it." He lectured, "Those who can sense the arcane arts we call 3rd tier." Kane explained, "The ability to wield arcane arts is divided into 5 ranks, 3rd tier being the first." Suddenly Milena's words echoed in Kettle's mind. "Usually we divide them into 3rd tier, 2nd tier, 1st tier, transcendence, and hero." At the same time, Kane's voice chimed in, "Those are the 5 main ranks." Kettle thought to himself, so that's how it was back then." Kane continued to tell him that, actually those labels are just convenient classifications. Even within the same rank, there can be huge differences, and the boundaries aren't clear. It's enough to know the concept exists. Kettle nodded, "I understand." Kane quickly signaled, "Then let's begin." He said solemnly, "The first step of the arcane arts is to sense the arcane." Kane said softly, "Feel everything around you." The old man explained, "Comprehending mystic arts means awakening something you've never known before. Expand your senses to the fullest." Kane continued, "Sense the breeze passing by you, feel the warmth from the earth, notice every movement in the wind as it stirs." He instructed, and within that, look for a distinct presence. Kettle sat attentively, trying to perceive as Kane had told him. After only a few seconds, he opened his eyes wide. He whispered to Kane, "I can't feel anything." Kane stammered in surprise, "Really? I thought with your strength you'd sense it right away." He thought to himself, "It's not a strict rule, but the strong, often even without mana, find it easier to grasp mystic arts. Perhaps you're an exception, a wildling." Kane stroked his beard and asked skeptically, "Or is it a peculiarity of the White Wilds?" Kettle propped his chin and replied thoughtfully, "I'm not sure. No one around me has ever sensed something called the mystic arts. The people out in the wasteland are like that." Kane proposed, "Really? Even for most people, grasping mystic arts isn't easy. Let me try channeling energy directly into you to open a path to the mystic arts." Hearing that, Kettle brightened and asked, "Are you going to transfer aura?" Kane nodded more or less. Kettle quickly said happily, "Okay, I'm ready." And Kane nodded back, all right. The old man stood up and moved toward Kettle. Kane came up behind him and reminded him, now relax your whole body, focus inward, and gather all your sensations into your body. He lightly placed a hand on his back now. Feel the mana I'm about to pass into you. Suddenly Kane's face went pale as he thought, this body. He wondered to himself, is he truly human? Kane gaped, thinking he's like a carved stone. How tightly packed are these muscles? Is he really human? Seeing the old man frozen, Kettle turned around puzzled Kane. Hearing his name, Kane snapped back. Pardon me, my mind just drifted off. He composed himself and said, let's begin. Kane thought inwardly, I'll activate the aura flow. The key is to awaken the mystic path inside him. Kane told himself finding it is the goal. It shouldn't be too difficult. At that moment, Kane paused again. He puzzled aloud, what's this? Kane was briefly astonished. I can't find the mystic path in his body, no, to be precise. He went pale and looked at Kettle. I can't reach it. Kane murmured to himself, no matter how far I spread my aura, it can't touch anything, I don't sense a thing. The more he thought, the more he realized it felt like swimming in an abyss. He was dazed and thought, no, it's like being crushed by the pressure at the bottom. Kane broke into a sweat and said, this isn't good. He cleared his throat softly, and Kettle looked up, a little alarmed, He frowned and asked, what do you mean not good? Are you saying I have no aptitude? Kane hesitated and replied, no, that's not it. It's just that pouring aura into you alone isn't enough to find the mystic arts. He went on, you have to find an inner conduit yourself, and awaken the power that's sleeping. Kettle faltered and said, I know that, but Kane quickly cut him off. I can't find the conduit to your mystic arts. Hearing that, Kettle's eyes widened in alarm. Are you saying I can't grasp the mystic arts? Kane added softly, no, not exactly. I can't even confirm whether it exists. Kettle asked suspiciously, what do you mean by that? Kane replied, your body is abnormal. He explained, to find the mystic path, aura must reach deep inside. But your body is too dense, my aura can't penetrate deeply enough into you. Kane worried and pondered. I've never seen this before, pure physicality blocking aura. Beside him, Kettle also thought ruefully. Even a sword saint would be at a loss, After a moment he pursed his lips and asked, so I'll never grasp the mystic arts? Kane answered, it's hard to say. I can't assert anything definitively. He continued, I don't even know whether that path exists within you. Kane gently offered advice. You should seek a sword saint more versed in aura, or go to the mage's tower. He bowed his head apologetically and said, in any case, I'm sorry. Kettle answered softly, no, it's fine. He propped his chin and thought, there's still hope. That's enough for today. A moment later, Kettle quickly stood up and said, nonetheless. He thanked him cheerfully, you've taught me much. I'm grateful. Kane fell silent and didn't respond. He thought back, the wildlings I've met are untamed and hard to control. They pillage, drink, and live by violence, so society casts them out. Kane pondered for a moment, then asked, but this one is different. Have you ever thought of joining the kingdom? Kettle asked, what do you mean? Kane replied to him, I mean swearing loyalty to the kingdom and receiving a rank. He added, with this power you'd rise high. I'd even be willing to sponsor you. Kettle laughed, that's an interesting offer, but he bowed his head and explained, I refuse. I don't want to be bound. Kane thought to himself, if we had him, maybe we could break free from the Empire's control. He asked further still, surely rank doesn't tempt you. Isn't that enough? Kettle's face dimmed briefly, Then he smiled brightly and replied, I choose to enjoy my own freedom. Kane was somewhat surprised by his answer. He blurted out, oh, I see. Kettle held out his hand cheerfully and said, anyway, thank you, I won't forget this favor. Kane fell into silence and reflection again. A few minutes later, Kane left the room and wandered down the corridor. He scolded himself, I'm so foolish. Kane remained dazed, thinking he had thought he could control him, even briefly, but that proved impossible. He fell silent. That wildling acts on his own while he may cooperate with others, but only to a point. Inside, only his own thoughts exist. Kane speculated he didn't know what the man was thinking. Perhaps that made him even less predictable than other wildlings. He thought wearily, a man from the Demon Rift, a wildling of the White Wastes. After a while, Kane sighed, He muttered to himself, invading the Demon Rift, what is the Emperor plotting? In Luke Barkin's study, he asked sternly so, does the Emperor really intend to conquer the Demon Rift? Kane answered, people are dying in the name of reconnaissance. Luke asked skeptically, are you serious? Kane sighed and said, certainly perhaps he believes himself the reincarnation of an ancient emperor. He added anyway, that's a matter for the future. We haven't even consolidated all of humanity's territory yet. Luke paled briefly, weary. It's only a matter of time. Kane reminded him, yes, this land still belongs to the Empire. We could be summoned at any moment. It's best to be prepared. Luke nodded and replied, thank you. Kane exhaled and leaned back in his chair, saying, the world is already in chaos, and now the Emperor is half sane, half mad, what a headache. At those words, Luke seemed to snap away. He asked in a low voice, could it be that the rumors are true? Kane quietly confirmed, yes, the demons have begun to mobilize. Luke was shocked and went pale. Kane continued, dungeon outbreaks are also abnormal, nothing is certain yet. But some say the corruption of the Demon Rift is leaking out. He thought to himself that something is happening, and whatever it is, it's a catastrophe for humanity. Suddenly Kane seemed to recall something and said, on second thought, maybe the strangest thing is right among us. Luke nodded, that's right. Kane asked softly, what do you think? Luke hesitated and answered, I don't know. He was a bit tense. At least he's not an enemy, but... Luke said uncertainly, beyond that I can't say anything more. Kettle quickly left Luke's manor. He walked cheerfully through the streets. Suddenly Kettle paused and looked around. The townspeople and children who saw him trembled and pressed themselves aside. When Kettle looked ahead, the person in front of him also hurriedly hid behind a wall in fear. Kettle fell briefly into thought, He propped his chin and wondered, Are they afraid of me because of my clothes? Kettle muttered to himself. Or is it because I'm not wearing what they consider proper? A leather vest is fine enough, but it probably doesn't look very civilized. Surely they think I'm crazy and don't want anything to do with me. He completely misunderstood them. Suddenly his eyes brightened with determination, and Kettle said, all right then. He grinned and decided to buy a few sets of proper clothes at a high-end suit shop. The shop's door was just ajar. The shopkeeper looked up to greet him, then froze. Welcome. His face went ashen. Kettle strode in confidently and said, I want to buy clothes. The shopkeeper thought fearfully, a wildling. He bowed and pleaded, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid we have nothing that fits your build. Kettle snorted and asked, what a nuisance, so there's no way. The shopkeeper bowed low and replied, if you can wait, we can have something tailor-made for you. Kettle brightened and said, oh, I see, then do it. The shopkeeper forced himself to look up. Yes, of course, we'll contact you when it's ready. He thought to himself that if the tailor-made clothes didn't please him, the shopkeeper imagined Kettle displeased with the garments, calling them clothes. He whimpered in fear, wondering if he'd make it home alive. Kettle, on his way to the guild, suddenly stopped and said, what's this? On the ground at his feet lay a blue gem. Kettle quickly picked it up. He examined it curiously. Could it be a jewel? The gem in his hand glowed with a stunning blue light. Kettle frowned slightly as he looked at it. Then he put the gem into his pouch. All right, I'll ask the guild about it. Later at the guild, Kettle took the gem from his pocket and asked softly, do you know what this is, receptionist Rosa? He placed the gem in Rosa's palm and said, I found this on the way here. It doesn't look like an ordinary orb. Kettle continued, I see. Rosa glanced and assessed it, but it doesn't look like a gemstone either. She examined the gem and remarked, the surface is very smooth. It seems to have been polished and carved by someone. The gem in her hand shimmered with a hint of blue. Rosa's eyes grew a little distant. There was no mark or engraving. She murmured, why does it feel like it has value? Seeing her distracted, Kettle snapped his fingers loudly. At the sound, Rosa suddenly snapped awake. She held the gem in her hand, looking momentarily bewildered. Kettle asked softly, are you all right? Rosa stammered, what do you mean? Kettle replied, you looked like you were enchanted by the orb. Rosa asked, puzzled me. Kettle answered, never mind, forget it. Rosa looked at the gem a moment longer and said, still, this orb is hard to judge. I sense a strange energy coming from it. Do you want me to have someone appraise it? Kettle smiled and replied, I appreciate it, but I'll investigate it myself. The fun is part of it. Then he asked, by the way, any tasks today? Rosa hurried, yes, please wait a moment. I'll get the request board. She produced a board of tasks. Here, street sweeping, drain cleaning, weeding, digging potatoes. Kettle cheerfully skimmed the list. A few hours later, after nightfall, Kettle had earned another sum of money placed on the table. He happily stretched out on the bed. Another glorious day. Then Kettle picked up the gem again to admire it. But seriously, what exactly is this thing? He muttered. Rosa looked like she was about to lose her mind over it. Could it have some function? Suddenly Kettle frowned slightly. A voice issued from the gem. Come to me. Kettle sat up in disbelief. Why did he just hear a voice from the orb? In Kettle's mind, a call arrived. Come to me, come. He wondered, what the hell is it trying to lead me somewhere? Kettle said, a bit helpless. And now a map has appeared in my head, some kind of controlling magic, maybe. The gem in his hand still emitted that eerie blue-black light and called, come to me. Kettle sighed softly. He looked out the window at the sky and said to himself, then let's go. The gem's voice continued, come to me. Kettle, slightly annoyed, said, I'm coming, shut up. He quickly followed the route the gem indicated. Suddenly he looked up in surprise. In front of Kettle was a dark cave. He wondered, is this the place? Kettle smirked slightly. Inside, a skull-headed monster was watching him as well. The gem kept calling, come to me. Kettle murmured, I'm coming, so where's the voice coming from? Before a curtain of magical water, a low voice spoke, and another sacrificer stepped forward. The man sneered, is this time just a stupid savage? At least he's big enough a decent sacrifice. He sat within a matrix murmuring to himself. The skull-headed monster whispered softly, that makes 10. This must be a dream. Can you really even do a resurrection? An image appeared of an old man grinning maliciously and pulling strings. During those brutal wars, countless kingdoms fell, and behind those times stood a dark sorcerer manipulating and corrupting humanity's minds. He controlled kings, stoked wars, and seized the thrones. But in the end, his crimes went too far and backfired, and the heroes hunted him down. However, before being destroyed, he transferred his soul into another vessel, turning himself into a lick. A lick is a being that imprisons its soul within a living host, persisting until that host is destroyed. A lick is a being that imprisons its soul within a living host, persisting until that host is destroyed. Because he needed countless lives as sacrifices for his revival, he hid near a peaceful region and began spreading whispers of death, quietly sowing chaos. He offered lives as sacrifices to create the magic stones needed for his resurrection, and once more plotted world conquest with overwhelming force. His goal was inching toward success. Still, the Lick had one baffling question. Why is this savage here a sacrifice? This place is remote because I need to grow my power in secrecy, so I chose a distant spot away from prying eyes. Now Kettle stood bewildered within the Lick's sight, so the presence of a savage here was extremely unusual. He watched Kettle's every move. Intently. Northern creatures must have traveled far, and judging by his size, he's a perfect sacrificial specimen. The Lick's hand began to gather a blue orb. The gem had been enchanted with a special effect that only attracts those who haven't awakened to arcana. So the creatures drawn by it were all arcana unawakened. In that vision, Kettle, for some reason, broke into a bright smile. So this savage is ordinary, with no arcana. He seemed unaffected, perhaps by luck. He laughed arrogantly, unaware he's about to be placed on the altar naked. Come here, savage. Become the sacrifice for my glorious resurrection. Before long, Kettle arrived at the door to where he was the place. He stepped inside decisively, without hesitation. Upon entering, Kettle's eyes widened in astonishment. A blue light flashed from the Lick's eyes, as its bone hand clenched the staff. It stood imposingly, its gaze fixed directly on him. At that moment, Kettle realized, a Lick, an actual Lick, a realm only mages at their limit can touch. The kind of overwhelmingly powerful villain you see in fantasy. Tailies, it's unbelievable to be witnessing a Lick in real life. Suddenly it frowned, a little wary. What are you? Don't tell me the gem didn't attract you. Hearing that, he recognized and replied at once. So you used this to lure people here. That answer made the Lick even more suspicious of mortals. Damn. I can't sense any arcana from him. In other words, he's just a regular savage. Then the Lick posed another question. Do you possess some talisman protecting your mind? He wondered, a high-grade artifact. No, it must be strong enough to block even my senses. I don't know how a savage like him could have such a thing, but then he stepped closer to him. Perhaps you got lucky and stumbled on a fine artifact somewhere. Kettle immediately interjected dismissively. I don't have anything like that. Suddenly the Lick swung its staff, and streams of white-green energy were sucked inward. Do you think you can trick me? Those lights were likely the spirits of the scattered skeletons here. If you'd quietly accepted your fate, you could have died without pain. 2 skeletons gradually rose, but perhaps I'll have to use force. Both gripped sharp swords. Summon my minions. Immediately, a fierce skeleton lunged at Kettle. Still, he merely curled his lips in a nonchalant smile. A dungeon with an evil Lick inside. He thought he understood what was happening. The Lick's minion leapt right at his head, raising its sword high. Kettle gave a casual swat, like brushing away a fly, and sent it flying. Watching this, the Lick was utterly terrified. It opened its eyes wide toward him. Instantly, its minion was struck by one blow, and disintegrated into dust. Kettle nonchalantly brushed the dust off himself and remarked, weaker than I thought. The Lick was now sweating profusely, grinding its teeth in unwillingness. Then the Lick waved and summoned the rest of the dry bones. Let's see how loud you talk after having your arms and legs crippled. I only need you alive, that's all. A crisp slicing sound rang out as a host of animated bones charged at him. Kettle, bored, clenched his fists. With another flick, Kettle easily took one down as if it were a piece of cake. Then he lunged at the rest, sending them back to dust. He swung a leg and smashed one squarely in the skull, making it drop its sword in pain. The last one was dealt with in an instant. This left the Lick gaping, unable to believe its eyes. Watching the skeletons dissolve on the ground, Kettle said slowly, as I thought, Casson was right, if you destroy their heads, they die. He ruffled his hair. An actual Lick should be able to summon something stronger than these rotten skeletons, right? Just these shabby dry bones. His words struck deep into it, truly a painful wound. The Lick immediately pointed its staff at him. I've lost patience. The blue soul stone on it quickly emitted a blinding light. Several skeletons then seemed to transform, donning large horned armor as they rose. At a glance, Kettle's eyes lit up in recognition. This skeleton looked familiar to him. A skeletal cavalryman, a bone knight really. Kettle then put on a puppyish, delighted face. No, wait. Since it's created by a Lick, it might be different. In any case, this will be interesting. The Lick spread its hand as the energy swelled and snarled. Kill him. Instantly, the bone cavalry rushed like the wind toward Kettle. Yet he felt no fear. On the contrary, he was thrilled. A bone knight summoned by a Lick. In no time, it was before him and raised its halberd. Let's see how tough you are, Kettle said, then swung a punch straight into it to test the brother's durability. With another flick of his hand, it flew meters away, slamming into the rock face and causing a shockwave explosion. Earth and stone shattered into hundreds of pieces, dust billowing everywhere. A thick dust veil obscured everyone's view. Suddenly the dust cleared, revealing a hazy silhouette that didn't disappear. It was the bone cavalryman. It hadn't been taken down and gaped its mouth wide. Seeing that, Kettle said casually, oh, you're tougher than the last one. The Lick's eyes glowed blue as it issued a command. Unleash all your magic. Immediately, the entire bone cavalryman radiated blue auras as it turned toward Kettle. He stood there, eyes wide, watching the thing approach. The bone cavalryman opened its jaws and charged with all its energy. He watched it barreling madly toward him and wondered, what on earth is this now? At this point, the bone cavalryman was only a few centimeters from Kettle. His hand suddenly clenched. This bone cavalryman was created by the Lick. Then came an uppercut straight to the skull. Once again, the bone cavalryman was sent flying meters away by his blow. Another earth-shattering explosion occurred, sending rocks scattering in all directions. Kettle stood silently, intently waiting for the result. As for the Lick, it gaped in disbelief. It never expected this day to come. The dust gradually dispersed, but by then there was no sign of the bone cavalryman. Kettle had advanced before anyone noticed. He stomped hard on the severed bony arm. Then he looked back at the Lick and remarked, that was somewhat different, but in the end not that much, just that. In this situation it could no longer be arrogant. Its mouth parted slightly. Who are you? The Lick's thoughts churned. He still couldn't sense any arcana from this savage. If he were using a magical weapon, I'd sense the mana, but there's no trace at all. Then the Lick glanced at Kettle's body, so this must be his pure physical strength. He defeated a bone cavalryman with raw physical power alone. Is that possible? The Lick breathed out an exclamation. You really are special. Suddenly Kettle's eyes flashed as if he'd seen something. He stared intently at a spot. The Lick's hand gripping the staff began to emit blue-black energies. Fine, I will handle you personally. Countless black energies surged toward Kettle. Consider it an honor. Watching this, he was so delighted his cheeks flushed. and his mouth formed an O. Before long, Kettle was completely swallowed by that darkness. Thinking he had cowered, the Lick taunted, "Scared now? Good, tremble, savage." Despite Kettle's puzzlement, it kept sneering, "You'll pay for daring to step into my sanctuary." Kettle, still puzzled, replied, "No, I came because the gem was noisy." Hearing that, the Lick broke into a cold sweat while he continued, "Didn't you scatter those gems yourself?" It gloomily recalled Kettle's image indeed. In fact, everyone who set foot here had been lured by the gems it scattered, and this savage was no exception. Immediately, desperate from embarrassment, the Lick raised his staff high and shouted, "Shut up, you savage. I am the great and mighty sorcerer who destroyed 5 kingdoms and fought alongside heroes, Cardos Braniula's Kesses." Hearing the full name triggered a flash of recognition in Kettle's memory, the elven queen Hassian Karuja, and he silently wondered why everyone's names in this world seemed to take up 2 lines. Splotchy energies gathered around the Lick, forming the foundation for my revival, you lowly savage. In no time it stood before Kettle, who remained motionless. Then it turned into a pitch-black stream of energy. Kettle focused intently on this strange phenomenon. A black whirl seemed to form in his pupils. It was a magic that controls human emotions, stirring up negative feelings and imprisoning victims within them, numbing the mind and collapsing the spirit completely. A unique spell invented by Cardos that's nearly unbeatable given its minimal mana cost. Seeing this, he smirked inwardly. How could a savage who doesn't use arcana resist such a lofty magic? Now, what should I do next? Kettle kept his head down, expressionless. This savage was odd. He also didn't seem to carry any magical implements. Cardo snapped his fingers. "Seize him, we'll study him later, drag him away." One of his skeletal minions immediately stirred into action. It shuffled its bony legs step by step toward Kettle. Kettle seemed to be floating in midair. Cardo's minion kept advancing, showing no fear of death. A flash of blinding purple light sparked in Kettle's gaze. Immediately, he launched a flying kick that sent Cardo's minion soaring. As usual, it gradually dissolved, returning to dust. Kettle looked ahead. Seeing this, Cardos truly panicked and feared this man. Another explosion erupted, sending rocks flying everywhere. At this point, Cardos' mouth was agape wide enough to fit a whole sandal. No, how could this be? I was certain the mind control spell had worked perfectly. Suddenly, Kettle spread his hand toward him and said, "You just stand there starring, planning to command the bone soldiers like last time." Disdain and boredom were written across his face. Those words pierced Castor's fragile heart. Humans are driven by emotion. No matter how strong, everyone harbors negative feelings deep inside, and thus cannot resist emotion control magic. However, Kettle asked innocently, "Don't you know how to use things like fireballs or magic arrows?" Suddenly he scowled. "I don't understand how you can still stand. How dare you compare my magic to those lowly tricks?" His eyes flashed again. "Let's see what trick you pull next." Appear converge streams of dark flux. Ink-black energies spread everywhere in invisible, formless waves. Castor formed an array that swallowed the world and dragged every mind into chaos. At the sight, Kettle's eyes shone like car headlights. He seemed thoroughly amused by this. The streams of energy interwove in color, from blue-black to white. Castor thrust his hand forward. Annihilate. Instantly, that power hurled toward Kettle. It struck straight at Kettle, and a cloud of dust rose again. Castor opened his mouth and let out a powerful roar. He laughed like a madman, coughing up that black mist. "Victory is mine, you savage." Then Castor exhausted his energy and sank to the ground. He panted heavily. "I overdid it. My mana has been drained. Only a little remains to keep my body from falling apart. But with this strike, he should finally be finished." Just then, a familiar voice rang out, cutting short Castor's brief celebration. Impressive. He gaped when he saw Kettle standing upright right in front of him. Unscathed and without a drop of sweat, Kettle casually asked, "That's it?" Castor could have died on the spot. He hadn't expected him to be so tough, utterly unfazed. Castor thought to himself, "I just used the strongest dark mind control spell in my repertoire. Directly hitting even a great hero would shatter their mind. What exactly is he?" Kettle stared at his palm in bewilderment and muttered, "Truly impressive. But I don't sense anything at all." Still stunned, Castor heard Kettle speak in a booming voice. "If that was your entire performance." His hand tightened around the sharp weapon he held. Kettle's expression was deadly serious. Not a hint of joking. "Then it's my turn to act." Cardos Braniula's Kesses murmured, "Is that so?" Kettle was taken aback. Cardos continued in a hoarse voice, "You came here knowing who I am, so that's confirmation." Kettle still didn't understand what was happening. What is he rambling about? As soon as he finished, Cardos burst into loud, hearty laughter. "Empire, are you that afraid of me? I must say, your intelligence network is impressive to find me so quickly." He continued, smug, "But I'll return. I will crush your swords and reconquer this world." A powerful, high-speed roundhouse kick the long-haired figure struck so fast the opponent couldn't react. "I've heard there's a training furnace deep in the Empire." The muscular man bound and straining in anger, violet blue light bristling as if about to erupt a place that breeds countless mutants. "This savage must be from there. A sword forged to kill me. An assassin sent by the Empire." The skull-faced cloak screamed in rage and terror. "Even so." Then he proclaimed his ambition to Kettle. "I am Cardos Braniula's Kesses. I will kill you and overthrow the Empire." Kettle's face showed clear bafflement. "Are you insane?" Cardos then summoned an ancient urn from thin air. Witnessing the strange sight, Kettle couldn't help but be surprised. Suddenly he shouted in a chilling voice, "Give me your body." As soon as he finished, a stream of glittering water shot from the urn toward him. Immediately, Kettle's whole body went completely numb. He entered the savage's body, devouring even the soul. Once done, unless he became a Lick again, he would have to live in that body forever. Cardos told himself he had no other choice. Then he laughed triumphantly. This body is mine now, and so, inside Kettle's consciousness, he stared blankly, not understanding what would happen next, The moment he penetrated his consciousness, Kurdos was stunned by what he saw. What is this? Is this the savage's inner world? I've never seen anything like it. Something's wrong. His inner mind began to panic. Merely sensing this place was enough to throw his thoughts into chaos and collapse. His voice started to tremble. Don't tell me it's the Empire. Kurdos clutched his head and screamed wildly. No, it's not the Empire. Not even the Empire could have created something like this. He cried out in fear. My mind is collapsing. The last words of Lick Kurdos, Watching that, Kettle's face showed genuine puzzlement. What the hell? What did he just do to himself? Then suddenly collapsed. At that moment, Kurdos lay motionless on the ground. Kettle thought to himself that the black vortex looked cool enough. But that was all there was to it. He told himself a lick isn't that the final evolutionary form of a mage. I was curious to see what kind of magic he'd use. With those thoughts, Kettle clenched his fist tighter. He told himself that liches in this world weren't so fearsome after all. He'd cleared the dungeon, so it was time to claim his reward. Suddenly, Kettle bent down and picked up the staff lying on the ground. It glowed as if chanting a spell. He examined the item closely and muttered that it helped cast spells if he had this. Could he use magic too? As he spoke, Kettle accidentally dropped the magic stone from the staff. He quickly pocketed the stone, pleased to himself, best hide that, it's mine. Then Kettle scanned the area around him. He eyed the ancient urn and mumbled to himself that since it once belonged to a lick, could it be a soul vessel? He picked up the urn and decided he should ask Rosa to appraise it. He continued to be on guard around the dungeon. Okay, I think I've harvested enough rewards. Something feels off. Suddenly Kettle looked ahead. Floating in front of him was a mysterious seal hovering in midair. Kettle couldn't help but be surprised. What is this? Could there be a hidden chamber? He reached out and lightly touched the seal that hovered before him. The moment he touched it, the seal suddenly released thick black smoke. Then the seal began to shatter into pieces. A few indistinct figures started to materialize within the hazy black smoke. The blank faces of those figures behind the smoke grew increasingly defined. Those people formed a circle that surrounded Kettle. The secret ritual chamber of Lick Kurdos. Kettle showed visible surprise, so it was real, but he slowly stepped forward toward the strange group. Who are these people? Kettle waved his hand in front of the motionless man and said hello. When they didn't respond, he called out again, is anyone here? Then Kettle propped his chin on his hand and mumbled to himself what to do now. Finally, he lowered his voice. All right, I'll return to my domain for now. As he left, he thought that, when he reported this, they'll probably send someone to handle the matter. After returning to his domain, Kettle immediately went to see Rosa. He quickly appeared at the reception area where Rosa worked. The moment she saw him, Rosa greeted him joyfully. Lord Kettle, you're back a bit early today. Kettle replied cheerfully, just a few things to take care of. No sooner had he finished than Rosa asked him, what sort of things? He answered in a measured tone. It's about the orb I showed you yesterday. His answer made Rosa uncomfortable. She replied hesitantly, oh, come on, you're joking, right? Kettle responded briefly and firmly, I'm not joking. Hearing that, Rosa inwardly marveled there are only 5 liches like that in the whole world, and one appears out here in the middle of nowhere. Then Kettle suddenly set the ancient urn down in front of Rosa, startling her. He continued in a very serious tone. I brought back an urn that looks like a Lick's soul vessel. Could you examine it? Seeing it, Rosa's face showed clear surprise. She immediately looked at him with utter disbelief and said in astonishment, are you for real? Rosa couldn't hide her shock. What the hell is going on? While Kettle calmly warned her. Oh, and there were a few people inside it. He went on about the people in the urn. I was going to release them, but their minds were completely gone, so I left them best to have the guild send someone to inspect. Before Kettle finished, Rosa interrupted. Excuse me. She then thought to herself with a worried tone. Thinking it over, there have been several disappearances in the territory recently with no trace of the missing. What if a lick is responsible? Then Rosa suddenly shouted, wait, I'll call someone right away. A moment later, a guard abruptly rushed into the room and barked. What on earth happened? A lick, what did you say? At the sight of him, Kettle waved in greeting, which made the guard pause. Oh, hello. Then he told the guard that everything had been handled, nothing to worry about. It wasn't a big deal. Upon hearing this, the guard turned it around and asked, wait, what do you mean? After Kettle recounted the whole story, the guard shouted, Kurdos Brantlas Kesses. And Kettle calmly replied, I think that's his name. As soon as he finished speaking, Kettle wondered, you knew? The guard answered him at once, of course I did. Kurdos Brantlas Kesses, a wizard who overthrew the world more than a century ago. The creator of magic that manipulates emotions, sowing endless chaos. He drove kings mad and pushed 5 kingdoms to ruin. Yet that man has appeared here in the form of a lick. The guard asked him skeptically, is this for real? Kettle immediately replied, yes, but he's nothing impressive, just skulking around doing twisted tricks until he self-destructed. Hearing this, the guard asked awkwardly, what the hell are you talking about? The guard mulled it over. Impossible. A mage like Kurdos would self-destruct. Then he requested of Kettle, I want a clearer explanation. Kettle answered him coolly, even if I told you, I have nothing more to add. Hearing that, the guard felt somewhat helpless. Saying that, he turned and left. Before leaving the room, he instructed the two to wait here a while. I'll go inform the Lord. Upon receiving the grim news, Lord Luke Barkin exclaimed in alarm, what the hell is this? A lick right next to my domain. He asked the guard with suspicion, are you sure it's a lick? What if it's some other monster? The guard replied respectfully and earnestly, based on the survivors' accounts, it seems correct, sir. We also have clear evidence. After hearing the whole story, Lord Luke said to the guard, You mean the soul relic. The Lord thought silently, worried, a lick of that caliber hiding near our lands without anyone knowing inspectors from the Empire could arrive at any time. And right now Lord Kane is absent. Then he lowered his head slightly and frowned, showing irritation. What a nuisance. Finally, Lord Luke ordered the guard, prepare to send a letter to the capital. The guard respectfully obeyed, yes, my lord. Then the Lord added calmly, nevertheless, we might be lucky. He replied to the Lord, yes, if that barbarian doesn't find it, then we may well be the first victims. Lord Luke continued, Cardos is probably in the process of preparing to be reborn as a lick, so that's highly likely. The guard added, things are no longer normal, and hearing that the Lord immediately agreed, that's very likely. Lord Luke said decisively, but even so, this is a commendable achievement. We must reward them appropriately. He looked out the window and said softly, as long as it's within the domain's means. The next morning at the manor, bright sunlight streamed through the windows. A servant's call suddenly echoed through the house, my lord, my lord. Hearing the call, Lord Luke immediately rose from bed and went toward the voice. He slowly put on his coat and told the servant, I'm up, show them in. No sooner had he finished speaking than the large door was flung open. At that moment the servant hurriedly informed the Lord, my lord, the Inquisitor of the Sun, Lord Aquez, has arrived at the domain. Hearing this, the Lord's face registered surprise. What? In the waiting room, the Inquisitor was idly gazing at the morning scene outside the window. Seeing her appear in his domain with his own eyes, the Lord couldn't help but be astonished. What's going on? Why is she here? A young woman with white hair, neatly dressed and composed and bearing the Inquisitor of the Sun. In the domain's parlor, the two sat opposite each other in silence for a long moment. Lord Luke spoke first, bowing respectfully, an honor to meet you. I am Luke Varkin, Lord of the Varkin domain. Thank you for visiting despite the suddenness. The Inquisitor across from him introduced herself politely. I am Aquez, Inquisitor of the Sun, the one who judges heresy in his name, Aquez, Inquisitor of the Sun. She was the youngest ever appointed, the one who had beheaded 7 mages who had made pacts with demons, and who single-handedly broke a massive summoning ritual. She was now the most powerful Inquisitor of the Sun on the continent, so influential that even the Empire respected the Sun Church. Her authority far exceeded that of a provincial lord. Lord Luke wondered to himself why someone like her would. The Inquisitor replied calmly, this domain has been rather unsettled lately. The Lord hesitated and answered, there was a minor issue in the dungeon recently, now resolved, so it's not about a lick then. Then he hesitated and asked Aquez the Inquisitor, may I ask the reason for this visit? Aquez answered evenly, I have come to discuss a divine decree with you. Noting the Lord's puzzled expression, Aquez continued, however. The Inquisitor then pressed Lord Luke, before I state it, I want to hear more clearly what has happened here recently in this domain. Hearing this, the Lord's voice faltered, and he avoided meeting her eyes this matter. After hearing the whole account, Inquisitor Aquez asked him, do you mean the barbarian is the one who destroyed the lick? Lord Luke replied cautiously, yes, and it might be Cardos Breniel as Kess's. At that, Aquez's face showed clear surprise. What, he was here? She asked, seeking confirmation. As soon as she finished speaking, Lord Luke placed an ancient vial on the tea table and added, here the sole relic of Cardos. At the sight of the vial, Quaz's expression drained. She stammered, this is. She clutched the sun-emblazoned pendant at her chest and asked, what on earth has happened? A gloom settled over the room. Aquez said cautiously to the Lord before her, that barbarian. She lowered her voice and asked the Lord, he's still here within this domain, right? Luke Barkin answered with a grave expression, he's still within the domain. The noblewoman across from him probed, that barbarian defeated Cardos, can that really be true? Luke Barkin confirmed, and the woman's face registered shock, it's true. Even Lord Kane was defeated by him. Each time she answered, she added a follow-up question as if hunting for clues. A new power has appeared. What tribe does that barbarian belong to? Luke Barkin replied tensely, he claims to be from the Frost Wastes. She pictured Kettle's muscular form and asked in puzzlement, the Frost Wastes. You mean he's a barbarian from that blasted region? How could a being from the demon realm appear out here? A flash of thought crossed her eyes. She hesitated and said, could it be? The woman uttered skeptically, perhaps he is the reason I was sent here. Luke Barkin, not hearing clearly, asked again, what? The girl hesitated, then her gaze hardened with resolve. That barbarian, may I meet him in person? The trees should be placed on the circular frame hung by chains from the ceiling. Under the table sat a ceramic vase and cup. A large blue gem rested between his 3 fingers. Kettle wondered, how is this thing actually used? Kettle lay on the bed, holding the stone in front of him, imagining it set in a crescent-shaped tray. He told himself it looked like a magic-supporting artifact. Fine, I'll ask a mage later. Suddenly his eyes lit as if he'd noticed something. Hey. He sat up, turned to the window, and remembered, looks like it's time. The captain arrived and announced that the Inquisitor of the Sun had requested to see you. The meeting place is the cathedral. He looked at Kettle's appearance sternly and warned, when you meet her, show proper respect. Kettle replied cheerfully, don't worry. The captain's gaze fell on the glove Kettle wore on his wrist. The captain murmured, you're here. He was a bit tense and stammered as he spoke. Kettle shrugged into his sheepskin coat and stood before him, relaxed. The captain continued, let's go. A long-haired woman stood in the shadow, cloaked in black and mysterious. She opened her palm to show an object glowing purple. In this world, gods truly exist. They grant power directly and can even descend. Their servants gather here. The interior scene was solemn. The cathedral, what makes the cathedrals of this world different. Kettle followed the captain, still dazed when the captain whispered, we're here. He saw a sunflower emblem on the front of the building and thought, This is the place. He stared at the towering building before him, eyes bright and mouth agape. The Cathedral of the Sun. The captain led him to the great door and advised that someone inside would guide him. Kettle replied cheerfully, "I'm very grateful." One foot was on the stone threshold, the other still on the ground outside. He stepped forward full of wonder and let out an exclamation. A statue of a goddess stood solemnly, and behind it hung a radiant circle. Bright sunlight streamed through the crevice in the door. 3 hooded figures stepped out and bowed solemnly. "Welcome, Lord Kettle." A woman approached and announced, "Inquisitor Aquaz is awaiting you." She turned to Kettle and said, "Please follow me." He nervously replied, "All right." Inquisitor Aquaz greeted him. "It's an honor to meet you." She sat on a carved wooden chair shaped like a flower, branches, and blooms around it. The Inquisitor introduced herself. "I am Aquaz, Inquisitor of the Sun." Kettle sat with his arms crossed and replied, "Pleased to meet you, I am the barbarian Kettle." He thought, she's the Inquisitor, so young. He chuckled as he considered it. She must be very capable. The Inquisitor opposite him shifted uneasily. Wondering, he's smiling, what does that mean? Kettle asked, "So what did you want to see me about?" The Inquisitor replied softly, "Ah." She lowered her head and looked down, then said, "That matter." The man in the black cloak standing beside the Inquisitor raised his hand and summoned a flash of blue lightning. His face was hidden in shadow, but his eyes flashed menace, while she remained calm, her eyelids lowered in sorrow. She explained about the recent dungeon incident. Cardos, the one you said was defeated, had committed unspeakable atrocities across the world. Noonday light slanted through the window, stretching across the floor and the wooden table. He watched her intently, and the space between them was silent. She finished, saying he turned into a lick and only heroes could stand against him. A skeleton draped in a purple cloak stood within a vortex of black-purple air. Cold light glinted off the skull mask, making it seem as if he laughed aloud. Kettle replied, "I've heard of him, but the Cardos I saw was just a lick thrashing alone. Then he perished on his own." Leaning back in his chair, eyes narrowed, his expression serious yet composed, he said helplessly, "It seems you don't trust me, but I can only tell you what I witnessed." In the sunlit room, the two sat opposite each other across the long wooden table. The white-haired woman tilted slightly and held out a hand as if explaining, "So, do you allow my god to directly witness this conversation?" Kettle folded his arms and asked for confirmation. "Witness." The Inquisitor tilted her head and looked over. Her gaze was calm but grave. "Yes, if you lie before him, the god will react." Kettle suspected some kind of interrogation by divine power. Her eyes shone red with seriousness yet flickered with hesitation. A bead of sweat ran down her cheek as if she struggled to keep her face composed while explaining. "Even if he's not a typical barbarian, he's still a barbarian. There's no way he'd agree to this. Of course, if you feel uncomfortable, you may refuse." The Inquisitor wondered, why would I refuse? Kettle, eager and playful, saw it as a perfect chance to experience divine power firsthand. "Are you sure?" "Of course, then begin at once." The Inquisitor was taken aback by Kettle's reaction. "What?" He even seemed excited. The Inquisitor asked, "Doesn't this unsettle you?" Kettle replied, "What do you mean?" Kettle answered enthusiastically, "With a god watching over you, why should I worry? I have nothing to hide." He added with a defensive laugh that he'd never told a lie. And the Inquisitor softly answered, "Ah." She closed her eyes and said, "I understand then, let's begin." She pressed her hands together and intoned a supplication. "Oh my god, you who watch from the highest realm." The circular emblem with 4 wings immediately shone. Streams of colored light appeared around it as she opened her mouth to read. "You, the sovereign ruler of the sun, please with your gaze." 2 sharp beams of light shot toward each other. "Reveal every falsehood in this place." A great shaft of light poured down from the sky onto the castle roof, and an enormous roar burst out around them. The noise and magic struck Kettle's head. He wondered what was happening. "I can feel it now." A golden circle radiated light outward, a presence beyond mere illumination. The Inquisitor transformed into a bronze divine image with a white patterned halo behind her majestic, an existence beyond human words. Kettle stood there dazed, his emotions unreadable. He looked up as the light streaks met and sculpted ornate patterns, bewildered. The two of them simply sat opposite each other, the Inquisitor still with hands clasped in supplication, while Kettle bowed his head to sense it. After a long while, the Inquisitor opened her eyes and silently gave thanks. Thank the heavens, there was no response. She placed a hand over her heart and said, "Then let's begin." Kettle's expression grew tense. "From now on, within this pillar of light, no lie will be permitted to exist." He gave a slight smile and replied, "Understood." The questioning began under the gaze of the sun god. He recounted the dungeon conquest process, just as he had described before, and there was no adverse reaction. In other words, everything he said was entirely truthful. Perhaps Cardos was severely weakened while preparing to be resurrected. If Cardos could still wield magic, this barbarian wouldn't be here. A thought flashed. He's truly lucky. Those wandering thoughts were interrupted by the question, "Have you cleared all doubts?" The remark snapped Aquaz back. She blinked in surprise for a moment. After a moment, she recovered and respectfully bowed. "Yes, thank you. Forgive my rudeness." The man opposite politely replied, "It's all right. I found it exciting too." Aquaz lifted her face slowly and said, "Then may I ask you a personal question?" The man's voice was indifferent, of course, yet she still seemed a bit anxious, her mouth fumbling and unable to form the words. After a long pause, she finally spoke, startling Kettle. "You really come from the frozen expanse?" He answered tersely, "Yes." Those 2 simple words made Aquaz even more curious. "You actually from there?" She thought to herself, The netherworld, could he be the gray barbarian of imperial legend? Kettle didn't answer Aquaz directly, but raised another question that surprised her. Then let me ask you one thing. He folded his arms and demanded solemnly, why did you come to this land? A simple question, but it left her flustered. Aquaz lowered her eyes and tried to explain. I have personal business to attend to here. Kettle pressed on without relent. That personal business is it to confirm whether I'm tainted. She grew uneasy and dodged the topic. I don't understand what you're saying. A flash crossed his mind of himself standing under the sun, and he blurted out, the divine eye. He propped his chin with his hand and voiced his thought. I'm not sure, but a god personally looking down, that's not common. It's too much just to detect lies. Aquaz couldn't find the words and closed her eyes, thinking she wanted to say it's not like that. But under the divine eye, all deceit is forbidden. She didn't voice that, but softly said, you're right. His answer made him even more puzzled. Oh, so from the start you targeted me. Audaz startled and immediately objected. It's not like that there was a prophecy. She slowly recounted bit by bit. When I came here, I thought you might be the one mentioned in the prophecy, but the result, as you see, was different. Finally, Aquaz placed her hand on her chest again and said slowly, I'm sorry I hid my true intent. Kettle shrugged apathetically and said it's fine. I found it interesting in its own way. So let me ask one more thing. He stared at her with wide eyes, barraging her. What did the prophecy say? Aquaz hesitated, thinking normally she shouldn't reveal it to someone she doesn't trust, but then she spoke. The prophecy said. Her face was solemn as she fixed her gaze on him and spoke matter-of-factly about certain events that would occur in the future. Aquaz's words acted like a clamp, causing Kettle's eyes and mouth to widen more and more. After a while, the scene returned to calm, leaving only Aquaz standing in the sunlight streaming through the window. A few footsteps outside the door clattered, shattering the stillness. She glanced back and quietly observed what was happening. She looked surprised and called to Luke Barkin, my lord. He gave her a long look and gently asked with concern, you seem troubled. Aquaz fixed her gaze on the floor and said softly, yes, I met him, but it only mudded my thoughts further. Luke Barkin, curious, asked who exactly he was. She stared out the window and asserted firmly, he is definitely a barbarian from the frozen expanse. The statement brought a new shock to Luke Barkin. Really? Indeed. Aquaz nodded honestly. We have no reports from within the frozen expanse, but this has been confirmed. There were things she kept to herself. She had hoped the rumors were false, but in the end, the truth couldn't be denied. He also assessed gravely that if this spreads, the whole world will be shaken. Aquaz didn't utter a word, musing. Many seek to explore the frozen expanse, especially the Emperor. A few gruesome images of blood flashed through her mind if the Emperor personally intervened. Imagine the chaos. Yet Aquaz calmly reassured Luke Barkin aloud that he needn't worry. She stated with firm certainty that they'd handle Cardos themselves and conceal that barbarian's existence from the public. Luke Barkin breathed a sigh of relief. How fortunate. Still, a question nagged him. Are all barbarians from the frozen expanse like him? He recalled 3 silhouettes and said gently, certainly not if they were all like him. They would have left the expanse and conquered the world long ago. Aquaz thought to herself, true, even if not him, there are many barbarians in this world. They're very strong, but also foolish. That's the natural limit of barbarians. She continued to brood. But what if those physically superior creatures also possessed intelligence? Luke Barkin cut into Aquaz's thoughts again. Now that I think about it, I heard this barbarian king is different, said to possess both strength and intellect. She lowered her face and assessed calmly. The king of all barbarians, you mean him? I met him only once, but indeed, he's entirely unlike ordinary barbarians. He replied in a slightly worried whisper, is that so? If those two ever met, it would be fascinating. Aquaz almost immediately dismissed the idea. I don't think so. Her denial again left Luke Barkin puzzled, his eyes widening in surprise. He regarded the woman before him with a measure of judgment. Relations between barbarians and those who serve the gods have never been good, so their growing strength is no laughing matter. After a moment, Luke Barkin asked, so then, what exactly did the prophecy say that made you request a private meeting? Aquaz showed no ripple of emotion and said, I needed to confirm one thing, vague words that further troubled him. Confirm? In what sense? She looked out seriously and explained, to determine whether he is truly human or something merely posing as one. Luke Barkin exclaimed in confusion, my heavens, what exactly did the prophecy state? Aquaz straightened and spoke slowly, as if delivering something weighty. The prophecy said, and then the prophecy was told to another person, though that person was not the intended reader. Luke Barkin's reaction was much like Kettle's. How could that be? The scene quickly shifted to the tea table where he looked a bit anxious and asked, are you well? Kettle answered with mild surprise. Thanks to you, I'm living very well in the domain, so why did you call me here again? Luke Barkin spoke in a gentle tone. As Lord, I have matters I wish to discuss. Kettle seemed to understand and cut in. I'm not particularly concerned. But he continued. Not an apology, but I've prepared a reward for saving the domain. Luke Barkin's hand tapped the table slowly with the idle air of a gentleman at leisure. The words and the promised gift made Kettle's eyes open in incredulity. A servant brought forward a sack with an announcement. We will present the Lord's reward beast hide. He looked at the bag on the table and couldn't help but wonder. A sack of hide. Luke Barkin, reading Kettle's curiosity, said, it's not an ordinary hide bag, check it yourself. Kettle stared at the small bag fitting in his hand. Don't tell me, a different voice urged him to open it. Check for yourself. Kettle then opened it and widened his eyes in astonishment. It was a magic treasure in the form of a bag. Luke Barkin continued to explain. You can store as many items as there's space inside the bag. The interior is roughly the size of a room. He was still astounded as he peered into that vast internal space. Kettle thought to himself, a magic treasure, an object created by magic. This is the first time I've seen such a treasure in real life. Just then the Lord spoke again. Even items larger than the bag's mouth can be put inside. Store as much as you like. Hearing that, he responded with a soft affirmative. Kettle reached out and took his weapon. In that case, try putting an item in. He slowly brought it toward the bag's opening. From the outside, it looked like it wouldn't fit, but the next instant the axe seemed pulled in by something and slipped right inside. Whoa, want to pull something out? Just reach in and imagine the item. Kettle's eyes sparkled as he held the weapon aloft. Whoa, this is amazing. Barkin said, this is a gift from me in return for saving the domain. I hope you'll like it. He replied quickly, excited, like it. I love it, I'll make good use of it. The Lord only smiled and thought to himself that seeing him happy made him happy too. But Barkin's mind instantly turned elsewhere. Well, I suppose this matter is settled. The rest is, he muttered, the prophecy, isn't it? What on earth is happening in that distant land? Barkin's thoughts briefly returned to his conversation with Cain. Aberrant species from the netherworld are spilling into the world. Apparently, something is unfolding across the globe. He lowered his eyes and guessed. Perhaps it is connected to that prophecy. At the same time, elsewhere, a girl with long white hair stood by a window. The prophecy had said that a demon would descend. A great demon that would come and spread throughout the world. The Varkan domain was a network linking countless villages, so the villages kept regular contact. On the streets, many merchants called for customers. In the dim space, a stall suddenly closed, and one day contact with one of the villages was abruptly cut off. At first, no one thought much of it. A middle-aged man and a young man took their luggage to check things out. But when days passed with no news, a nearby village sent people to investigate, and they never returned. A group of soldiers stood lined up somewhere. Upon hearing, the Lord dispatched guards, but they too never came back. Luke Barkin's face went pale and darkened. Only then did the Lord realize that something was really happening. Someone suddenly asked, do we have any requests today? Rosa quickly answered, there's an urgent request today. Kettle, interested, asked what it was about. She replied that it was to go confirm the situation of a village that had lost contact. Rosa sat up straight and continued seriously. A few days ago, one village stopped responding, so just go see. It's a simple departure mission, but the pay is generous. Oh, he put a hand under his chin and smiled. I like tasks like that, I'll take the job. She heard that and silently breathed a sigh of relief, just as she predicted. Not long after, at the gathering place of various mercenaries, Priest Hayes stood in a corner, head slightly bowed and arms folded. When she wasn't paying attention, someone's feet were slowly approaching her. Then a familiar voice sounded at her ear. Hayes. Hayes looked up at the speaker and exclaimed in surprise, Kettle. Kettle across from her suddenly grinned. He now appeared in clothes, no longer overtly barbaric, his own attire. Kettle raised a hand and replied casually. Oh, I just had a new set made. The old one I wore was worn and torn. Hayes admired it and commented the design looks rather unique. He proudly said he commissioned it himself, and she immediately exclaimed, impressive. Hayes suddenly remembered and asked, oh, speaking of which, are you taking this task too, Kettle? Kettle answered with a proud expression, yes, I couldn't miss an interesting mission like this. Seeing that look, she thought to herself, as I thought, he really is exceptional. Hayes suddenly wondered, but why are you going alone? Aren't your teammates coming? Kettle remembered his two comrades and grew thoughtful. Alexandro and Kassab aren't joining. She offered reassurance. They must have received the mission details already. Perhaps they declined to participate, right? He replied calmly, I understand. Kettle turned his head and scanned the surroundings. 3 other mercenaries stiffened under his gaze. Fewer people than I expected. Kettle put his hand under his chin and pondered. The mission is simple and the pay is high. I thought many would sign up. Yet in total, there aren't even 10. It truly is a dangerous mission, he wondered, but still the task itself seems simple. Hayes explained it sounds simple, but the pay is unusually high. She lowered her eyes, recalling rumors that the guards went and never returned. So in the end, this isn't such a simple assignment after all. Kettle looked up a bit incredulous. Even so, the number of participants is too small. I thought at least 10 would show. Hayes grew awkward and began, actually. She looked away and continued in a low voice. Another rumor is spreading. What rumor? Hayes waved her hand with a nervous laugh, ha-ha. And he glanced in the direction she pointed. The small lips of the girl with long white hair came into view. Aquez had her eyes closed, hands neatly folded over her skirt. Aquez, the armored silhouette of a girl, appeared the heresy inspector of the sun god. She would also take part in this mission. Hayes covertly glanced elsewhere and thought that not many mercenaries would dare cooperate with the sun god's heresy inspector. And she worried aloud. She won't split my head in two, will she? Kettle immediately smiled reassuringly. No, she wouldn't. She's a very kind person. Hayes was startled. Wait, you know Miss Aquez. He looked toward Aquez and confidently asserted, of course she's my friend. Hearing that, she was shocked. The heresy inspector and a barbarian are friends. Hayes called awkwardly as Kettle moved forward. Master Kettle. He stepped up and stood a short distance from Aquez, greeting her. Very glad to see you again. She immediately replied with a denial. I don't remember us being friends. Kettle suddenly laughed. Oh, you heard that. Then fine, starting now we can be friends. Aquez glanced elsewhere and said, now that you mention it, your teammate also serves a different god, right? She closed her eyes and added, I mean Lady Kalosha. He heard that and blinked in realization. Oh, so she's like her. But Aquez looked puzzled. Yes, but wait, you said she's a priestess serving Kalosha? Kettle asked, is there a problem? She recalled the woman with long black hair and answered no. It's just that, as far as I know, Lady Kalosha's devotees are currently in a period of seclusion. Only those of high rank can act now, don't tell me. Aquez sighed, sounding tired. She finished the thought. No, never mind. Kettle unconsciously followed Aquez's gaze. She hesitated and added, I can't know the details of every cult, so maybe I'm mistaken. Just then a pair of feet stomped on the grass. He's here. He quickly noticed and turned his head to look. On seeing the person, Kettle instinctively called out, Captain of the Guard. He greeted cheerfully, we meet again here. Hayes stood off at a distance, anxiously watching their conversation. At that moment the captain cleared his throat and spoke. I welcome everyone who accepted this request. This is the captain of the kingdom of Jehint's Guard. Once everyone is present, we depart. 2 pairs of feet walked one after the other across the lush green grass. Aquez glanced away, seemingly avoiding the person ahead. Kettle thought to himself that gathering like this felt like they were about to tackle a dungeon. Then he sighed inwardly. Kettle then asked a question that surprised Aquez slightly. Acting now, does that mean the time has come? She lifted her face and looked at the man standing silently. Aquez lowered her gaze again. I can't be sure about that. She guessed that the god hadn't revealed an exact time. Maybe it's as simple as we lost contact with a village. Kettle, who'd been silent, said lightly that it still left the possibility open. Aquez asked in astonishment. The god prophesied that evil would descend the arrival of a great demon. Kettle smiled, confidence showing on his face. A great demon, huh? Kettle and Priest Hayes were stunned by the scene before them. After a moment, everyone stopped, and an announcement rang out. We're here. They stood before orderly, ancient architecture, and a curious voice asked. This is. The captain of the Barkan Region Guard quickly explained. The entrance to the village. He turned to check with Aquez. How does it feel? But only received the answer, I sense no presence. The Barkan Guard captain guessed they may have fled, and then ordered everyone to spread out and look for clues. The soldiers immediately obeyed. Yes, sir. Kettle was among them. Understood. The captain estimated the village could hold about 100 people. But even so, there's no way everyone would vanish without a trace. He was sure there must be some clue and issued the command. Begin the search. At that moment inside a house, the dining table still steamed and had been neatly set. It made the soldier involuntarily shout in surprise. What is this? He immediately turned to report to his commander. Captain, there's food here. The captain brushed it off. Maybe they left it behind while fleeing. The soldier protested, no, that's not what I mean. He shouted, emphasizing that it was freshly cooked, the food was still warm. Even the Barkan Guard captain was astonished. What? Staring into the steaming bowl of soup. He wondered what on earth was happening here. He began to piece together a few events. We lost contact with this village several days ago, and since then many have been sent here. Soldiers formed ranks and set out, but none returned. He asked again for signs, and a soldier honestly answered there were no indications they left the village or hid elsewhere. The Barkan Guard captain dropped his eyes and fell silent in thought. After a while he announced, for now keep searching. The soldiers complied, understood. The question now was this. There were many traces of daily life, but not a single person. How could that be? Then the Barkan Guard captain stepped up behind a searching soldier and asked, how about over there? The other person suddenly turned around. Ah, he scratched his head and replied sheepishly, same here. Reporting with suspicion. Clearly people lived here, but there's no footprints either. The Barkan Guard captain asked someone else, do you know anything, Aquez? But Aquez just shook her head in defeat. I don't know either. The captain then asked Kettle, do you know anything? Still there was no satisfactory answer. I haven't found any significant clues, and I sense no presence. The captain worried and could only lower his head and complain, this is driving me mad. Kettle suggested, why not ask someone who might know? Hearing that, the Barkan Guard captain widened his eyes and asked again, what? Kettle looked to one side and said casually, isn't there still a sensation? There's someone else here. The captain suddenly replied, wait, what did you say? He wondered, someone else. The Barkan Guard captain pieced things together. In other words, someone who wasn't here when we arrived at the village. Now thinking back. Who is that woman, and how long has she been here? The woman was exposed and snorted. Interesting, she exclaimed. I disguised myself perfectly, and you still found me. Kettle replied calmly. A stranger appeared suddenly. Of course we'd pay attention. She began to explain, no, that's not what I mean. Normally others wouldn't notice. Then she looked at Aquez with a hint of mockery. Even the Sun God's heresy inspector didn't detect me. Then contempt for Kettle followed. It seems you haven't awakened any special ability either. A sinister smile appeared on her lips. Who are you? This was an unexpected windfall. Kettle was still puzzled at the question. The Barkan Guard captain now sensed something was wrong. He immediately shouted, everyone fall back. The others obeyed at once. Yes, understood. But he was astonished when he looked toward Aquez and cried out, Aquez. She stood frozen, her face drained. Ah, I sense nothing, there is no presence at all. The Barkan Guard captain was utterly shocked to witness this, and Priest Hayes's mood was little different from the captain's. Even the heresy inspector of the highest order couldn't detect her presence. If so, there are only 2 possibilities. Either she's not a demon, or she's such a high-ranking demon she can't be detected. The woman propped her chin and mocked. Too bad I wanted to watch you a while longer before sending him into the abyss. Her facial skin began to melt away, a grotesque smile at her lips. I've decided that interesting barbarian. Her hand had become grotesquely deformed and looked horrifying. A black, ominous horn had grown from her head. Her form transformed completely. And in a bewitching voice she said, you will become my slave, come down to hell with me. After revealing her true form, Ashishire snapped her fingers. Immediately, a black hole circle, the symbol of darkness, appeared. She floated in the air with dark clouds swirling around her. Such a small action left them utterly astonished. Sensing danger, the captain of the guards shouted, "Everyone run! Hurry, hurry!" But it was too late. They had been trapped within the sealing circle Ashishire had created. The guards panicked and screamed, "No, open it, open it." The sight pleased her. "This entire village is my domain. No one can escape." Not only that, she taunted them, "For you are all my prey." Murmurs rose everywhere. A demon. Impossible. How could a demon be here? Kettle wondered aloud. A demon. Priest Hayes confirmed. Yes, it's a named demon. Beside him, she prayed, "Lord Kalosha, please save me." He patted her head and said, "Hayes, calm down." He also reassured her, "I'm right here with you." Hearing Kettle's comfort, Priest Hayes was deeply moved. However, she immediately collapsed again when he asked, "But what does it mean to be a named demon?" Priest Hayes hesitated. The thing is, as far as she knew, not everything called a demon in this world is powerful. They're often labeled demon for convenience, but in reality most are merely fragments of malicious intent and magic. However, there are entities that can be called true demons, born of darkness, not birthed by any mother, naming themselves by their own will. In short, they are genuine demons. Even the weakest among them can shake an entire kingdom. He guessed then that one must be one of them. Priest Hayes agreed. Yes, that's right. She also speculated that, judging by those horns, it's an Ashishire, a demon that appeared hundreds of years ago. Why would such a thing show up in such a remote land? Kettle hesitated. "So we can't break this." To Priest Hayes' astonishment, he reached out to touch the sealing circle. She asserted, "No, this place has become demon territory. Unless the demon is destroyed, there's no way to break this seal." After touching it, Kettle said indifferently, "Is that so?" Something beyond the seal caught his eye, and he suddenly grinned wickedly. He even swallowed hard with a loud gulp. Priest Hayes, puzzled to see Kettle hop about while thinking, "Maybe I'll just watch a bit longer," asked, "Kettle, what are you doing there?" He denied it. "Nothing." Priest Hayes resigned herself. "I understand." Meanwhile, Aquaz was furious. "Is this the demon's joke?" Ashishire mocked. "Is that so? Isn't it fascinating? Doesn't it make you want to investigate further?" She was indignant. A village vanished, yet there were signs someone had been living here. Just the demon's trick. Aquaz inwardly realized it probably viewed the villagers as toys and said in disgust, "What a sick game." Meanwhile, she still wore a mocking smile. He, on the other hand, was eagerly watching for more. They found it strange. A named demon. Summoning such a demon would require a huge sacrifice. A village's population wouldn't be enough. And for an entire territory to be altered without anyone noticing. That should have been impossible. This raised suspicion. Then how did it descend into this world? Ashishire sneered. "Do you really think I'd tell you?" She spat in hatred. "Filth, polluting this land." Hearing the insult, she mocked. "Filth, impure." Even taunting. "Hey, you dogs of the gods. Do you think your gods will save you?" Predictably, this remark only enraged Aquaz further. Ashishire then warned, "Listen carefully. Cracks are appearing in this world. It no longer belongs to you alone." She recounted that long, long ago, gods and humans fought the demons. And as everyone knows, the gods and humanity prevailed. The demons were defeated and banished from this world. Because of that, Ashishire carried resentment. "From hellish torment, I have waited for this day for a long time." She officially announced, "I am Ashishire, the demon of gravity. I swear I will cleanse the old shame and drown this world in malice." She angrily cursed, "Repulsive creature, this world belongs only to the gods and us." Aquaz demanded, "So go back to where you came from, demon." She began to summon the god's power. Immediately, a beam of light surrounded Aquaz. A scepter symbolizing divine power appeared in her hand. Kettle watched with glee. "Just as I thought, the demon won't attack while she's transforming." Aquaz's transformation gradually completed. From her weapon to her battle boots, even her armor was ready for battle. Ashishire chuckled with interest. "Interesting." And she began to engage. "Good." Ashishire taunted, "Then come here, dog of the gods." Aquaz countered, arrogantly. Their gazes sharpened like never before, as the opposing powers of demon and god collided. It produced a huge explosion that rocked the sky. Priest Hayes screamed in terror, while the two remained evenly matched. Ashishire frenziedly twirled the blade in her hands, not forgetting to sneer. "A battle should have dignity, don't your godhounds know that?" Continuously provoked, Aquaz flew into a rage. "Are you done?" A giant golden greave slammed into the ground, creating a shock that cracked the earth violently. The woman in golden armor delivered a blazing strike with lightning speed. Ashishire stood calmly opposite, surrounded by a dark aura. She moved so fast she left behind a faint, shadowy afterimage. Aquaz stood stunned at the sight, her pupils flashing with disbelief. Ashishire suddenly appeared behind her and spoke teasingly. "You're here." She wore a sly smile, sharp teeth bared. Ashishire dove down from the air, striking powerfully. Aquaz raised her weapon to defend and countered, her voice ringing out, "Crush it." They charged at each other. The air collided violently, producing powerful shockwaves that affected the surroundings. The golden-armored woman's feet were gradually pushed back, creating long cracks across the ground. They held their positions, unleashing their powers against one another with neither yielding. A purple hand appeared above Aquar's head, breaking through her defense. She spoke Scripture chapter 2 verse 12. A pair of bright eyes appeared within the surrounding darkness, and a voice proclaimed, "The light of glory shall never be defiled." Light surged from her and shot into the sky, driving Ashishire far away. The bat-winged woman was knocked back, landing and bracing herself to avoid being thrown further, intently watching the scene before her. Aqua radiated a powerful aura. Radiant gold lights surrounded her body. Ashishire rose slightly and taunted her. Can you read scripture at that age? She wiped the mark on her face and exclaimed, "Impressive." The golden-armored woman's lips murmured another line. Carmenune, chapter 5, verse 59. She raised her weapon high. Thunder rolled across the sky. Akwar's voice rang out through the air. "That light!" A blazing aura erupted, shining through the dark night, and a voice thundered, "Incinerate all evil." As soon as the words ended, she lunged forward, raising her shield and weapon, leaving a trail of aura behind. Asheshire's eyes flashed red as she watched her opponent warily. Akwar spun, swinging her weapon from behind. Her hair streamed with the motion. The strike she swung left a long, gleaming slash that struck the surrounding dark aura. Asheshire laughed with delight and quickly stepped back to avoid the direct blow. She pulled her weapon down and struck at Akwar, but the golden-armored woman immediately blocked the attack. She redirected the force, slamming the weapon sideways and pushing Akwar backward. Her face sweaty, she glared at Asheshire in anger and gritted her teeth. Asheshire laughed triumphantly, eyes gleaming with malice. Both charged up again, rushing straight at each other. The sky shifted color and fine dust filled the air around them. Their weapons collided, sending shockwaves that blasted everything away and causing a powerful burst of energy. Two extremely strong auras met head-on, producing a horrifying explosion that violently shook the space. The clashing powers ripped the earth apart. Rocks shattered and the pressure spread, destroying everything. Priest Hayes was struck by that terrible force. She shut her eyes and screamed. Nearby villagers were terrified by the scene. Some ran, others collapsed, begging, "Please, please save me." The opposing auras clashed as both poured their full strength into the fight, their gazes fierce with no sign of yielding. Their battle caused small explosions. The ground crumbled and shockwaves blew everything away. Kettle stood proudly as a spectator, watching with a wry smile, impressed. She stepped closer to him and called loudly to get Kettle's attention. "Kettle, Kettle, can't you help Akwaz?" He replied calmly, "Maybe." Hearing that, Priest Hayes was slightly startled and began, "Well then," before Kettle cut in, "why should I help?" Those words left Priest Hayes stunned. She looked at him in bewilderment. Kettle looked at her and repeated his earlier question. "Why should I interfere and ruin the fight?" She stammered. "What?" He glanced at the two of them and said softly, "Of course, I also want to one day fight a demon." Kettle smiled oddly. "But right now, I just want to watch this battle." Priest Hayes was completely stunned, her face unreadable. She thought to herself, "This is not what I expected." Across the way, both sides struck simultaneously, their colliding auras producing shockwaves that swept away all obstacles. The two auras collided violently, generating such a powerful jolt that both were thrown backward. Asheshire was pushed back, forcing herself down to the ground to avoid being flung away. The woman opposite her did the same. She muttered in annoyance, "Gods hunting dogs." But inwardly she thought that in raw strength she still had the advantage. Before she could steady herself, Akwar appeared directly in front of her, startling Asheshire. Asheshire, on the back foot, blocked the golden-armored woman's strike, thinking privately that the mismatch between them was dire. Magical entities in this world could not stand against divine power. She swung her weapon in a sharp, purple-tinged arc, calculating that if this continued, the battle would drag on. Asheshire broke into a sinister grin. Finishing that thought, she surged forward at high speed, the space around her warping. Akwar flinched at the direction of her movement, frowning sharply. Asheshire wore a triumphant smile and advanced without hesitation. The golden-armored woman watched her actions, thinking, "Huh, that way." Seeing her head toward the civilians, she panicked. Danger. A sudden explosion flared moments later, shattering the surrounding ground. Akwar appeared to block her path, and the two resumed their clash. The terrified villagers sat on the ground, mouths agape, motionless as they watched them. Those who hadn't evacuated were in a panic behind them. They sat still, screaming and staring ahead. Akwar swung her shield to the left, knocking Asheshire away. She frowned angrily and glared at her, snarling, "Filthy scum." Hearing the insult, Asheshire covered her mouth with her sharp hand and burst into laughter. She swooped down and taunted, "Do you really think a demon will play fair?" Akwar cried out angrily, Scripture, chapter 1, verse 1. "Let the sacred golden realm be revealed." As soon as her words ended, a huge golden magic circle appeared before them. She turned and shouted to everyone, "Get in here quickly." Seeing that, the soldiers rushed into the protective circle. The blonde man at the back laughed with relief. The young swordsman hurried in, exclaiming, "Thank you, Lady Akwaz." Across from them, Asheshire gave an insinuating smile. "Heh heh," she said, "are you going to waste the sacred scripture like that?" At her taunt, veins bulged on Akwaz's face. She shouted angrily, "Shut up." As soon as she finished speaking, Akwaz charged at her opponent and attacked again. Opposite her, Asheshire smiled confidently and said, "Yes, that's the reaction I wanted." Then they lunged at each other like two moths to a flame, hands gripping their spear hafts tightly. Akwaz swung her spear in a direct strike at Asheshire, but Asheshire easily parried the attack. Immediately after, she flipped once in midair to Akwaz's astonished gaze. Asheshire lectured, "Death is still just death. No one will care about your noble sacrifice." She aimed to wear down Akwaz's will, but Akwaz remained clear-headed and launched successive counterattacks. However, those strikes failed to injure Asheshire. Asheshire continued, "If this keeps up, you'll lose and disgrace your god. But if you defeat me and return alive, your fame and your god's influence will rise. It's simple. Just destroy the holy shield protecting them. What do you think?" Faced with this rosy proposal, Akwaz stayed wary and retorted sarcastically, "Are you trying to trick me?" Seeing Akwaz wouldn't fall for it, Asheshire covered her mouth and smiled. "Do you really want to die here?" Akwaz, still gripping her weapon, said, "There's nothing left to hear." Across from her, Asheshire smiled and nodded. "Fine, then die like a martyr." As soon as she finished speaking, She shot high into the sky and unleashed a devastating strike down upon the village, shattering the ground around it into fragments. Within the assault, Aquaz braced herself against the overwhelming force of the blow. From above, Ashishire poured even more power into her attack. Aquaz's eyes suddenly widened. She sensed a danger right before her. The moment she realized it, Ashishire had already closed in on her with incredible speed. Startled, Aquaz cried out, "What?" No sooner had she spoken than a massive explosion erupted as the two collided. Fortunately, Aquaz quickly retreated to evade the direct blow. Her body skidded along the ground for a stretch before coming to a halt. She looked forward again with a stunned expression. At that moment, Ashishire launched another assault, giving her no time to rest. She unleashed countless shafts of black energy that surged forward, surrounding Aquaz like a net. Trapped inside, Aquaz rolled her eyes around in shock and exclaimed, "Let the radiant holy realm repel the darkness." Before she could finish, Ashishire attacked again. In an instant she lunged up, grabbed Aquaz's head with one hand, and shouted, "Enough, I don't want to hear another scripture." As soon as she spoke, she slammed Aquaz's body into the ground, making her cry out in pain as the earth beneath her back crumbled into pieces. Aquaz struggled to break free from the hold, but it wasn't that easy. With her other hand, Ashishire summoned a dark spear, preparing to deliver the finishing blow. Sensing the danger, Aquaz tried to move her shield-bearing arm. As the spear lunged in, Aquaz quickly raised her shield arm to block the killing strike. The impact made the surrounding space tremble violently, and the air grew tenser than ever. Under Ashishire's immense power, Aquaz barely managed to withstand the blow. Cracks had begun to spread across her shield. Witnessing this, Ashishire smiled with sarcasm and excitement. Then she poured more power in, shattering the shield in Aquaz's hand into pieces. Aquaz was hurled backward, crying out in pain. On the other side, Ashishire snapped her fingers once more, creating several writhing strands of black energy around her body. That shot straight to Aquaz's position, wrapping her tightly inside. As the dark power gained the upper hand, the protective shield developed cracks that rapidly spread, leaving everyone outside stunned. A few seconds later, the protective shield shattered completely. Seeing this, the blonde youth stepped forward and shouted, "No way! If this continues, we'll all die." Ashishire gave a mocking smile and said, "I will enjoy you all as a dessert, but first I want to taste what the gods' hunting dog smells like." She stuck out her tongue and bared her sharp teeth against Aquaz's pale neck. Just as she opened her mouth to savor the meal, a hand grabbed her shoulder from behind and ordered, "Stop!" The sudden action froze Ashishire for several seconds. The one who intervened was none other than Kettle. He added, "That's enough." At his casual words, Aquaz's eyes widened and she blurted, "What?" Looking at him, she thought to herself, "When did he get here? Why couldn't I sense his presence?" No sooner had she realized anything than Kettle had thrown her up like a lump of earth. After gaining enough height, her head aimed straight at the ground as she plunged down, shattering the earth around her into fragments. Handling everything with ease, Kettle walked to Aquaz and reached out, asking, "Are you okay?" Having witnessed the scene, Aquaz was astonished. She looked at him and thought, "That's right. He's the one who defeated Sword Saint Can, a superhuman warrior." But suddenly, a few angry growls came from the side. It turned out Ashishire had recovered her composure after the previous blow. She angrily yelled, "You arrogant! How dare you interfere with my meal?" Kettle crossed his arms and replied indifferently, "She's my friend, so I can't let her die." This made Ashishire even angrier. She ground her teeth and said, "At first I planned to keep you as a toy." She was about to continue when Kettle cut in. "But I'm not interested in being your plaything." This blunt refusal only amused Ashishire more. She added, "Oh, really?" She reached out to summon a sharp weapon and said, "Then today you must die." As the two exchanged tense words, Aquaz spoke up, "Stand back." She struggled to her feet, looked straight ahead, and said, "You cannot defeat a demon." But Kettle interrupted, "You know I'm pretty strong." Aquaz shook her head and affirmed, "No, this isn't about strength. Only divinity can expel demons from this world. No other power can do that. This law has existed since gods and demons first coexisted. Besides, this place is the demon's domain. There's no room for luck. So only a god can face a demon." This cryptic explanation made Kettle stroke his chin, think for a few seconds, then speak. Still, he glanced at Aquaz and remarked, "You don't look fit to fight." Her whole body was trembling now, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She replied, "I must do it. I serve the god and I will oppose the demon." At her resolute words, Kettle thought to himself, "Is this the will of one who serves a deity?" Then he stepped forward, ruffled her hair, and praised, "Impressive, but this time let me handle it." With that, he strode straight forward. To Aquaz's astonished gaze, he looked at Ashishire and said, "I've always wanted to fight a true demon." At his stubbornness, Ashishire sneered, "Do you really not understand? I told you you can't beat me." Kettle smiled confidently and offered, "Want to give it a try?" This unexpected offer delighted Ashishire. She licked her lips and said, "Ha ha, I want to see your face twist in agony." No sooner had she spoken than she vanished from her spot and shot out from a spatial ring right before Kettle, startling him. She rushed in with a confident look on her face. Outside, Aquaz's eyes widened as she helplessly screamed, "No." Ashishire smiled with confidence. While Kettle's hand clenched slightly, Ashishire quietly relished the prospect of defeating him in a single blow, filling her with excitement. But Kettle's punch aimed straight at her face snapped her out of that dream. A light yet effortless blow shattered Ashishire's skull into fragments. Outside, witnessing the scene, Aquaz froze stiff as stone. She thought to herself, "Smash a demon's head with one punch. Does he think he's One Punch Man? A demon's head crushed barehanded. How could that be possible?" Even Kettle was surprised by his own strength. He looked at his small hands and muttered, "Not bad, huh?" On the other side, Asheshire's body fell to the ground with a dry cry. But immediately after, something happened that made Kettle's eyes widen in astonishment. A fierce radiance suddenly burst from that body, emitting an immense surge of energy. In just a few seconds, her head was fully regenerated, as good as new. This thrilled Kettle, who exclaimed, "Ho ho, even if it's smashed to pieces, it can regenerate." Asheshire now looked at him with utter fear and asked, "Who on earth are you?" Faced with that question, he stammered, I'm just an ordinary man, Dai." Seeing his bewildered face made Asheshire even angrier. She ground her teeth and said, "Don't be ridiculous. What is this strange sensation? I can't sense any divinity at all, no aura, no magic. If that's the case then." As she thought this, a murderous glint flashed in her eyes, and immediately a spatial ring appeared behind Kettle, drawing his attention. She continued thinking, "The only way is to verify it myself." She lunged through the spatial ring, closing in on him, swinging her scythe hard. "Die, you bastard!" Though her human form was a bit off-putting, she had to make do. Facing her attack, Kettle remained calm as if nothing had happened. As soon as she got close, he threw a punch that pierced her chest, making her cry out in pain. Her eyes filled with astonishment, a bewildered smile on her face. Then he pulled his hand back, flinging her forcefully away, so she slammed hard into a nearby house. She let out a wailing cry of pain and spat a mouthful of blood, then fell to her knees on the ground, lost in her thoughts. Impossible, utterly impossible. Just a plain punch not enhanced by aura or magic. Was it only a pure punch? He, still showing amusement on his face, said, "Regenerates immediately." Their eyes met, sparking with intensity. Suddenly he asked, "So what's the principle behind it?" After saying that, he stomped hard on the ground, breaking the earth into pieces, and shot forward with arrow-like speed, making Asheshire across from him turn pale with fear. With no other option, she summoned another weapon. But before she could use it to block, Kettle was already upon her with his fist clenched. Just as she realized he had appeared, she glanced to the side, and immediately took a punch to the cheek, shattering her jaw and knocking out teeth. The powerful downward blow slammed her head hard into the ground once more. She died yet again, but then countless streaks of demonic energy appeared, wrapping around her body, leaving Kettle utterly astonished. Within seconds, her body was regenerated once more, which excited Kettle further. He said, "So if the head is smashed to pieces, a brand new head will appear." Right, a demon should have that kind of resilience. So is your core weakness located on your head. After saying that, Asheshire trembled with fury, and a murderous glint flashed in her eyes as she thought, "Ridiculous. You intend to face me with sheer physical strength? Or are you saying you don't plan to use your full power against me?" After pondering, she shouted, "Listen clearly. I am Asheshire, the demon of gravity. How dare you think you can continue to face me with mere raw strength?" These words fell on Kettle like water off a duck's back. He didn't understand a damn thing, but he casually replied, So, you don't look particularly special." His words hit her like a cold splash, leaving Asheshire frozen rigid. She snapped angrily, "What? A demon's pride has been shattered into pieces." She shouted in fury, do you want to die?" No sooner had she spoken than she lunged forward to attack again. This time she summoned a warhammer, aiming it straight at him, ready to strike. She swung the hammer from behind and brought it down toward his face. The force was so immense Kettle's hair billowed in the wind, but he casually reached out and easily blocked the attack. This made Asheshire's expression harden once more. He praised, "Not bad, you've got some skill, but this won't cut it." The hammer trembled under his strength. He squeezed it, and it instantly crumbled to pieces. Then once again his loving fist shot toward her face, landing another affectionate punch on her cheek. The result was the same as before. Her head shattered into fragments. She thought to herself, "This is absurd." This time her regeneration was faster than before. She fumed inwardly. "I am the demon of gravity. At full power I can concentrate the weight of an entire wall into this hammer. And yet you not only blocked it barehanded, but also shattered it. A mere man Dai, who hasn't even grasped mystic power." Her whole body trembled with rage again. This was absolutely impossible. She unleashed a massive burst of power, causing the surrounding space to quake violently. She bellowed, "Die, you man, die." Countless streams of dark demonic energy surged straight toward his position. Meanwhile, he remained as calm as ever, his hands clenched. Then he launched another punch, easily shattering that attack. The tremendously powerful blow continued to batter the energy behind it, and then it flew straight toward where Asheshire stood. The collision produced a massive explosion, sending smoke and dust billowing. From afar, watching this brutal spectacle, Aquez thought to herself, "What on earth am I witnessing?" Asheshire, an immensely powerful demon who supposedly single-handedly destroyed a kingdom centuries ago, of such caliber, is being beaten senseless by plain punches. This is absolutely insane. Her body was once again completely regenerated. He stepped forward and planted a foot on her face, saying, "So she really won't die? Meaning you can't kill this demon with mere physical strength." Despite taking a beating, Asheshire wore a triumphant smile. "This is the first time I've felt such pressure. He's strong, overwhelmingly strong." She suddenly laughed loudly. "Ha ha, what kind of freak are you?" He again answered the old line. "I'm just an ordinary man, Dai." She angrily retorted, "Don't talk nonsense." Still, she felt a bit relieved now, but wanted to test something. As soon as she finished speaking, countless streaks of dark energy erupted from the ground, rushed past his body, then shot straight up into the sky, converging at a single point. Seeing this, both he and Aquez looked up in utter astonishment. The ground was riddled with countless cracks. Rocks and earth were flung into the air by an enormous pull. In the sky above, a gigantic magical orb began spinning. At the center of the orb was Asheshire's body, wings outstretched, radiating immense pressure. She immediately summoned dozens of spears around her and glared down at him, shouting, "You man, die! I will unleash all my power." The spears seemed sentient, They moved in a fixed trajectory, spinning in the sky. Then all dove straight toward him below. To counter the attack, he drew his axe from pocket space, slung it over his shoulder, and smiled. The full power of a demon, huh? Watching from outside, Aquez broke out in a cold sweat and thought to herself, this is too dangerous. Pure physical strength can't handle a demon. Ashishire now wore a confident smile and declared, Holy Lance, pierce and destroy. At her command, all the spears in the sky shot toward him like arrows. He kept his face calm as always, showing no reaction. But when the spears were only a few centimeters from his body, he continuously swung his axe and sent them all flying. He easily deflected them as if on a casual stroll, without the slightest difficulty. This left Ashishire across from him gaping, exclaiming, Wah! What is this? Before she could finish speaking, he had already darted forward to close in on her once more. She was drenched in sweat from fear. From the outside, Aquez shouted, Canon chapter 3, line 58, light that burns all evil. As soon as she spoke, his black axe became enveloped in a layer of light, turning it golden. Looking at it, he muttered, What is this? Is this divine power? Aquez shouted up from below, I've gathered enough divine power. Go finish that demon. His expression suddenly changed. Coldly, he said, I wanted to observe a bit longer, but it seems that's not possible. You're in for it too, demon. With that, he swung the axe forward with great force. The strike was so fast Ashishire couldn't dodge and took the blow, staring in astonishment. What is that? With a single axe stroke, he easily cleaved the demon in two. She screamed in despair, Have I truly lost? Then she let out a pitiful, helpless wail. After her final breath, her body dissolved into the air, disappearing from this world. He stepped forward, sat down, and comforted. Thank you, that was an entertaining fight. Although defeated, Ashishire forced a smile. Ha ha, it's a pity to be summoned back to hell like this, but not entirely useless. I have confirmed that someone like you exists on this land. Then she asked, What is your name? He replied, I am Kettle. Beside them, before she could stop him, he had already spoken his name, making Aquez startle and shout, Don't say it. But he'd already blurted it out. What could be done? Realizing he'd fallen into a trap, Ashishire's smile turned even more manic. Ha ha ha, all denizens of hell. Carve the name Man Die Kettle into your minds. Sensing the danger, Aquez trembled violently, at a loss for words. At her call, countless demons received the command. They wore excited expressions. I continue, swallow my memories and feel them, the one known as Kettle. A multitude of demons appeared before him, causing Kettle to be momentarily stunned for a few seconds. They surged into his body like a torrent. This only excited Ashishire further. Ha ha ha, you man die, now you belong to us. Countless demons had now infiltrated his body. He was transported into a mental space, facing countless beguiling eyes staring at him, but he seemed immune to these enchantments. The demons couldn't penetrate his mind. He immediately reached out to grab them, terrifying them greatly. They wanted to turn and flee at once. Kettle gradually came to, his eyes slowly opening. After that, nothing else happened. He turned to Ashishire and asked, What the hell was that? It felt like something just pierced into my body. This angered Ashishire inwardly. What do you mean? Surely the darkness ran from him into my body. Before she could say another word, he brought his foot down hard, sending her back to hell once more. This decisive, effortless action left Aquez gaping in astonishment. She stood open-mouthed, snapping a photo of the scene. He reached up and softly hummed a few lines of song after the exhausting battle. The darkness gradually lifted, restoring the clear sky. Feeling the fresh air return, Kettle smiled contentedly. Is the mission complete? Time flowed on, and the scene shifted to the kingdom of Jehante, specifically the Barca domain. At that moment, news of the battle with Ashishire had spread everywhere. Breaking news, breaking news. A boy shouted as he tossed newspapers in all directions, and people quickly updated themselves on the news. Of course, as the lord of the domain, Lord Barca had received the information early. After reading the article, he angrily slammed the table and shouted, A demon! With Lick Ashishire's appearance, what on earth is happening? Why would such a calamity befall this small land? Saying that, he sank back into his chair in a daze, his mind in turmoil. He wanted a monster whose name would be recorded even in ancient tomes. Across from him, the soldier also reminded the Lord. Rumors are spreading like wildfire throughout the domain. Upon hearing this, Barca's face involuntarily broke into a drop of sweat from worry. He thought to himself, the only fortunate thing in this disaster is that the Sun God's Inquisitor drove it away successfully. With that thought, he spoke in a low voice. We must carefully consider what to do next. In another scene, Kettle was also inside Aquez's resting chamber. The whole domain seems unsettled, he said casually. Meanwhile, Aquez could only pity Lord Barca. Of course, this is no small matter. The Lord must have a headache over this. Having said that, she rose to her feet as if to go somewhere. This made our protagonist curious, and he warned, Don't tell me you're leaving already. Won't you rest a bit before going? The white-haired girl shook her head slightly in refusal. No, I must not delay. I need to report this to the sanctuary as soon as possible. Hearing that, the burly fellow didn't bother to stop her. If that's what you want, I won't prevent you. Before leaving, Aquez hesitated a little and offered thanks. Hey, Kettle, thank you for saving my life. If not for you, I would have been that demon's plaything. Aquez spoke with full gratitude. The male lead paid it little mind and waved his hand. No need to thank me. I was just saving a friend. Oh right, we're friends now, aren't we? He scratched his cheek and gave a goofy smile. Aquez's companion felt awkward at the idea of a barbarian and a servant of the gods being friends. After a few seconds of silence to collect herself, she asked, Sun God's Inquisitor, you still want to be friends with me despite that. Kettle replied bluntly, is there any reason I shouldn't? His unexpected answer made Aqua's eyes widen with surprise, and she blankly replied, no, but. Before she could finish, Kettle cut in and continued, then that's not a problem, is it? Aqua's was momentarily silent, but then she offered a small smile, and nodded, you're right. Putting that aside, the protagonist seemed to think of something and asked, by the way, I want to ask another thing. Is it true you mustn't let demons know your name? At that mention, the white-haired girl's expression turned more serious, and she carefully warned, that's because demonic marks use a name to inscribe a dark seal onto a human soul, and use that mark to summon evil spirits. Those who bear the mark become like a scent, emitting an aroma that lures wicked entities. Tradition holds that those marked must undergo a baptismal rite to be saved. Otherwise, the dark forces will hunt and destroy them. Opposite them, the burly guy's face went blank. He pointed to himself and asked, so I'm marked too. Fortunately for him, Aquas immediately denied it. No, it's not like that. You aren't marked, Kettle. However, your name may now be known to entities in the underworld. But even so, there's no need to worry too much. Without a mark, they can't locate you. They can only know the identity. There's no way for them to find you unless they meet you in person. The rest shouldn't be a problem. To the protagonist, although he feared those tiny demons, he was quite surprised by their power. So that's how it is. Truly miraculous. I didn't expect to handle them with just physical strength. To explain, Aquas began to share what she knew. Because they are the very essence of demons. In ancient times, the supreme gods created humankind. Humans are foolish, weak, acting only on instinct, and the gods did not intervene in the human world. Therefore, external entities took an interest in the human world. They crossed dimensions and slaughtered humans brutally. In the end, the gods could no longer tolerate it, so they descended into the human world, sided with humanity, called those entities demons, and drove them away. From then on, humans built temples to honor the gods who saved them, and continued to flourish under divine guidance. But over time, for reasons unknown, demons gradually reappeared and interfered in the human world. Thus the gods chose the faithful, bestowed power upon them, and continued the fight against the demons. Demons are creatures that can only be destroyed by divine power. At that, Kettle's simple, muscular mind gradually understood. So that's it. They don't belong to this world, so they can't be defeated by ordinary means. Aquas nodded in agreement and added, exactly. From the start, they were not creatures of this world. Opposite them, Kettle frowned and remarked, I see. If those things appear frequently, it would truly be a nightmare. Hearing this, the white-haired girl shook her head slightly. Named demons don't appear easily. It seems the demon realm, which should have been sealed, is influencing this world. The cycle that births hells is becoming abnormal, and more dark entities are revealing themselves in the human world. It all started a year ago. She spoke in a grave tone, and the news struck Kettle like a bolt from the blue. He thought to himself, a year ago. If it was a year ago, wasn't I on a mission in the frozen lands then? Kane was striding down a sunlit corridor. He let out a long, weary sigh. Kane complained tiredly that meeting his majesty always left him exhausted. Suddenly he narrowed his eyes at a voice, clearly not having an easy day. Kane jumped and turned sharply to probe behind him. Right behind him stood a man cloaked in black. Kane looked bewildered, not understanding what was happening. He unconsciously pondered. The Archmage of the Tower of Magic, the gathering place of all mages and scholars in this world, the Tower's mighty master. Kane immediately asked, so what brings you here? The cloaked man replied casually, you know, just routine contact. What about you? Why are you here? Kane turned his face to one side. I'm just here to report the mission's results. The cloaked man stroked his chin and probed. A reconnaissance mission into the demon realm, right? The silent forest where everything lies in silence. He answered yes, and the man continued to ask, how was it? Kane worriedly broke into a sweat and hung his head. It's beyond our understanding of this world, a truly horrific place. He envisioned the gloomy scene before him. True to its name, the silent forest had no sound at all, even mystical perception spells worked unreliably. And even if I shouted, there wasn't a single tremor. Kane recalled being left alone in that forest and recounted how, by the time we realized it, the soldiers had vanished one by one, a place eerily silent. Finally, he emphasized, it was an extremely unpleasant place. Then Kane worriedly asked what His Majesty ultimately wants to gain by conquering the demon realm. The cloaked man speculated maybe to dominate the whole world. Who knows what mad thoughts a man craving power might have? He smiled faintly, but admitted the demon realm was indeed an intriguing place. The cloaked man folded his arms and pondered, saying he felt a bit interested as well. Kane remained serious. I don't want anything to do with that place. I prefer a normal life. The cloaked man snapped his fingers lightly. Immediately, an image appeared before him of Kane, standing in the middle of a green circle. Suddenly, the two of them stood facing each other, on a gigantic green circle. Kane watched his surroundings warily. Teleportation magic. What is this? How did this happen? The cloaked man laughed merrily. No need for such formality. Then he strode forward. The cloaked man asked, you encountered a very special person, didn't you? Hearing that, Kane jolted. Impossible. But the cloaked man seemed utterly unconcerned, and smiled casually. Kane squeezed his eyes shut and scolded, damn it, the observing eye. When did you place that on me? The cloaked man grinned with narrowed eyes. Since our last meeting, one of the few remaining amusements for this old man. Kane angrily shouted, go to hell. He bowed his head and said, if you've already seen everything, why ask more? Yet he still wanted an answer from Kane. I want to hear your thoughts. The cloaked man suddenly took on a dangerous air, as he spoke of someone thought to exist only in ancient legend. The barbarian from that snow-white land. Kane kept his head bowed, worried. I'm still not certain, the cloaked man said coldly. Think carefully. The cloaked man folded his arms and explained. A barbarian capable of defeating a sword saint and wiping out Liccardos as if swatting flies, appearing from the edge of some snowy region. Doesn't that already sound suspicious? Suddenly Kane looked up and asked, wait, did you say he defeated Cardos? The cloaked man was surprised. What, you don't know? Then the cloaked man stroked his chin. Well, it makes sense. That matter hasn't been made public. He recalled and recounted, saying rumors had already started circulating within the Tower of Magic. The cloaked man continued. Cardos, the mage who shook the continent. I've heard he tried to be resurrected on the outskirts but failed, so I went there to pay my respects. His face grew ominous. Of the few, a friend of mine had passed away. It's a bit sad. Kane replied bluntly, I didn't expect you to feel sadness too. The cloaked man confessed, of course. Friends are essential for someone who has lived as long as I have, however. At this, the handsome face from earlier had completely vanished, replaced by a skull. It seemed no relics were found in Cardos's cave. Kane asked solemnly, weren't all relics collected when Cardos died? The cloaked man answered mostly yes, but he implied the most valuable treasure was not among them. Who knows where it is now? But then he brushed it off and said, let's leave that matter aside for now. The cloaked man cut to the chase. I want to hear your opinion. He probed, do you truly believe that barbarian defeated Cardos? Kane thought carefully. If it's that barbarian, then... After a moment he answered, I think it's possible. The cloaked man then asked, reminding him, you still haven't informed the Emperor, have you? Kane asked calmly in return, why should I do that? The old man immediately gave his reason. His Majesty is casting valuable manpower into the demon realm like trash, if that Emperor learns of the barbarian's existence. Kane emphasized that there would surely be a clash, then suddenly paused and pondered. A barbarian acting on his own will and an Emperor wanting the whole world in his hand. If that happens, the kingdom will be dragged in. The cloaked man was excited. Really? Sounds intriguing. He strode forward again. The cloaked man asked again, are you implying that the barbarian could single-handedly stand against the Empire? Kane hesitated. I'm not sure, but he looked more serious than ever. I felt a sensation very similar to the first time I saw him. Hearing this, the cloaked man jumped. He quickly asked, don't tell me, hero rank. Kane worriedly broke into a sweat. I'm not qualified to judge. The cloaked man stroked his chin. But he's very valuable. He emphasized, even more than that. Kane turned pale. Don't tell me you intend to. A beautiful morning in the Barkan territory, kingdom of Jehent. A gentle-looking blonde girl glanced around. Suddenly she tripped over a rock lying in the road. The blonde girl went pale and stumbled forward, but a hand quickly reached out and caught her. A handsome young man smiled. Oh my, you should be more careful. It was Kettle. He gently asked, are you all right? The blonde girl stared, but did not answer Kettle. Suddenly he jumped and turned pale. Kettle thought she would run away in fear, but she politely bowed and said, thank you. Then the blonde girl turned and walked away, and Kettle watched her go in surprise. He stared after the blonde's retreating figure in bewilderment. Kettle was utterly confused. What is this? What is this strange feeling? Immediately, another beautiful girl appeared right in front of him. It seemed these events left Kettle so stunned that he stood frozen there for quite a while. Then he was shocked and wondered, why does no one avoid me? Aaron slightly bowed his head, stroked his chin and murmured, need something to verify identity. Then he placed a silver badge on the table. Use this. Rosa glanced down and thought to herself this is. She was surprised to pick up the badge. The Mercenary Guild's emblem, not something easily obtained. Rosa understood this and immediately raised her guard. Indeed, the identity was not ordinary. Then she set the badge back on the table and said, verification complete. Rosa calmly continued under Aaron's intent gaze. Then I'll proceed to collect the commission fee. He quickly slipped his hand into his sleeve to search for something. After a few seconds, Aaron placed a gold coin on the table. I'll pay with this. The small gold coin lay in the tray, gleaming pure gold, such a sum. Rosa tilted her head, counted briefly, and replied, we can provide one person. Aaron was startled and exclaimed, what? He gaped in disbelief and asked again, only one person. Amid Aaron's extreme confusion, Rosa explained matter-of-factly that it was, after all, an escort request. She rubbed her chin and added that he would have the mercenaries accompany him for the entire journey, which is very risky. And besides, the kingdom of Denian is quite far away. Rosa paused a moment, then held out a hand and added that depending on circumstances it could take nearly a month. So of course the fee would be higher than a normal job. Aaron awkwardly replied, well, that's true, but... He panicked, his face blanching, and asked flustered, is there no other way? At least 2 people are needed. Rosa quickly answered, that could be possible, but in that case the mercenaries would be of lower rank. Would you accept that? She kindly advised that if he wanted a reliable escort, it's best to choose mercenaries of rank D or higher. Aaron hesitantly uttered, very well then. He spoke firmly and made his request. Please choose one person with that skill. Rosa replied that in that case, this sum would only cover one person. Aaron hesitated and said, even so, is there no other way? Rosa frowned inwardly, thinking really, why the despair? She closed her eyes in compromise. Honestly, in such a remote area, it's already hard to find someone willing to take an escort job. I'll try, but finding 2 people will be very difficult. He finally sighed, I see, understood, I'll leave it to you. The small gold coin drew nearer from afar. Rosa held it in her hand, pondering, small but very pure gold, though its surface was heavily worn. She swallowed uneasily, as if to deliberately conceal its origin. This could be troublesome. Not long after, when night had fallen, at some small house, A pair of brown shoes suddenly stopped in front of a room's door. A mysterious figure in a light cloak gently raised a hand and knocked a few times. Inside the room, the blonde-haired girl timidly called out, "Is someone there?" Aaron, standing outside, slowly removed his hood and replied, "I am your loyal servant." When the girl heard that, she reached out and opened the door. She stood in the doorway and softly called his name, Aaron. "This beautiful blonde was Aline," she said. "Come in." Aaron stepped into the room. Aline looked at him with concern and asked, "How is it?" He quickly answered, "They have accepted the request for now." Hearing this, Aline breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Thank God. How many people can they provide?" At that question, Aaron couldn't help but hesitate. Well, His answer surprised her. Only one person. But Aaron remorsefully said, "Sorry, we don't have enough money." Aline lowered her head and eyes, saying, "No, you can't be blamed." He murmured despondently, "If only I hadn't been foolish enough to be deceived." Aline quickly soothed him. "No, that couldn't have been avoided. Even I probably wouldn't have fared differently." At those words, both of them welled up with tears. Aaron and Aline fell to their knees and cried loudly without stopping. But the two had to stop when they heard an angry shout from the next room. Silence. They could only look at each other with tearful, bitter eyes in silence. After a while, Aline suddenly asked, "By the way, Aaron, how long do you think it will take?" Aaron answered bleakly, "I don't know. We're trying to find someone trustworthy, so it may take time." Aline lowered her worried eyes. "I see. Then we can only wait." Then she forced a smile and said, "It's late. Rest a bit." "You've done well, Aaron." Aaron bowed his head slightly and replied, "Yes." After a long, black silence, Aline said sadly, "Can't be done again." Aaron twisted his mouth in self-reproach. "I am truly ashamed." He bowed his head deeper and continued, "It seems very difficult to find someone truly trustworthy." Aline couldn't help but sigh. What a nuisance. She suddenly turned and said, "Supplies are also starting to run low. There's no choice. We'll have to endure hunger for a while." Aaron flinched. "It's all because of my incompetence." Aline awkwardly comforted him. "No, it's not your fault, Aaron." He darkened and said, "Still, for the sake of safety, we should tell the Lord here about our situation." She suddenly cut in loudly, "We cannot do that." Aaron looked up in surprise at Aline. She was gripping her hands so tightly they trembled. Aline said firmly, "We can't trust anyone. Even hiring a bodyguard is very risky. We can't take any more risks." She stared at him with sharp eyes and said, "Aaron, remember why we had to abandon the kingdom and run? We don't even know who is friend or foe." Aline continued calmly, "Even though we've been in hiding for a while, there's been no news from there, even though both of us escaped." Aaron closed his eyes and said remorsefully, "I'm sorry. I have become too weak." Then Aline anxiously asked, "By the way, are you sure the kingdom of Denayan is really safe?" Aaron did not hesitate to assert, "Yes. There they will protect you. The king of Denayan swore when the princess was born." He went on bluntly that they might even help us get revenge. Aline backlit listened to every word Aaron said. "So you must live, Aline Mavrachi, our princess. If even you are lost, our kingdom will truly perish." She suddenly spoke up, "But the mercenaries, can we really trust them?" Aaron stepped forward and took Aline's hand to reassure her. "Don't worry, we paid in gold specifically for trust. They'll surely recommend someone reliable, I hope." Aline widened her eyes and wondered inwardly, "Who will escort me after all?" She blushed, imagining a handsome face in a beautiful flower garden. A mercenary. I hope he's handsome and knightly. Meanwhile, back at Kettle's place, he lay on the bed staring blankly with nothing to do. He suddenly remembered something and exclaimed, "That reminds me." He recalled his friends in the Mandi Ashen tribe and thought, "I wonder how those idiots are doing now. They were the only ones who didn't shun me." But Kettle imagined their unkempt faces. Surely they're still living their foolish lives as always. He suddenly blankly wondered, all right, the quest is over. The image of facing the giant bear rushed back. Since waking in the snowy region, that quest window has always been with him. Then the scenes of Kettle struggling to survive appeared. At first he thought he was only dreaming, but the bone-cutting cold and the monsters made him realize everything was very real. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly, indeed. The first mission was just to survive for a week. Not long after, when Kettle arrived at the guild, he suddenly asked an escort request. Rosa sat at the reception desk and smiled brightly like a flower while holding the papers. Kettle sat coolly with his muscular arms folded on his chest and calmly asked, "What's the mission?" Rosa slowly pushed a pinned board with the paper in front of him. As the name suggests, escort the client to their destination. Seeing only that single sheet clipped there, Kettle kept asking curiously, "Is that all?" She replied gently, "Yes, but it will take at least several days to travel, and preparing for the trip is entirely the mercenary's responsibility." He closed his eyes with a composed air and said, "It seems this will require a lot of effort." Rosa replied softly, "In return the pay is very generous." However, at that she suddenly hesitated. Seeing that, Kettle's eyes opened slightly, unable to hide his curiosity as he asked, however. Rosa's face suddenly changed. She grew serious and her eyes flashed oddly. "It smells like something. Honestly, this is a very rotten-smelling job, so sir, you may refuse." Suddenly his voice sounded as light as a feather, startling the guild receptionist. She knew nothing about it, Rosa. A nonchalant smile briefly appeared on Kettle's calm face. "That's exactly better." Hearing this, Rosa asked uncertainly, "Yes." At that moment his gaze glanced down, paying attention to the paper she had just handed over after all. The mission was written clearly on the paper. Escort mission. Subjects, a woman and an elderly person. Destination, the capital of the Kingdom of Denayan. Mission rank, D. Reading this, Kettle felt a strange deja vu. Kingdom of Denayan, he thought. It feels like I've heard that name somewhere before. The image of flowing hair, and the gentle, sunlit smile of Milena flickered through his mind. Kettle's eyes went blank as if he had discovered an astonishing truth. Milena of the Akasha clan. A stream of memories about that girl suddenly surfaced. The merchant clan woman he met on the snowy plateau. He recalled that she had held a sparkling ring in her hands, and said she would welcome him if he ever passed by. Without hesitation, he smiled and replied coldly, "What a coincidence. I'll accept the mission." Suddenly, a faint shadow of the system began to appear directly before his eyes. At the sight of the faint shadow, Kettle's eyes suddenly brightened, showing clear astonishment. In the blink of an eye, he sprang up, knocking the chair behind him over with a loud crash. Light from the system board flared unexpectedly, shining straight into his eyes and leaving him stunned. Words slowly appeared on the system interface. Mission number 785, escort the target and travel to the Kingdom of Denian. Kettle's face showed a momentary speechless shock. No, why is this appearing here? He felt gloomy seeing the mission notice, while Rosa, unaware of what he was up to, called out Lord Kettle. At that moment, the sound of hurried footsteps rapidly approaching rang out. Someone pounded on the door loudly, leaving Aline inside puzzled. The door cracked open, and the foot stepped slowly onto the floor, entering the room. Erin's exhausted appearance and rapid breathing made her start and cry out, "Oh, Erin." Aline immediately became cautious at his condition and asked, "What's wrong? Please tell me it's not the pursuers." Erin's voice rang out as sweat fell. She couldn't help exclaiming. His eyes suddenly shone, and he replied strongly, "In this territory, the only rank C mercenary has accepted our mission." She couldn't help exclaiming in surprise. His eyes flared, and he answered forcefully that in this territory, the sole rank C mercenary has accepted our mission. Hearing that, Aline couldn't hide her joy and said, "Rank C, a mercenary? That's true." Seeing her so happy, Erin replied softly, "Yes. We arranged to meet tomorrow, so miss, please rest comfortably tonight." Aline exclaimed excitedly, "Yes, yes." Just then Kettle's face froze. His gaze went dead and he couldn't speak. He remained motionless, staring at the system notice that had appeared. Mission number 785, escort the target and travel to the Kingdom of Denian. Kettle propped his chin and tilted his head, puzzled. Why is it appearing now after such a long silence? After studying it for a long moment, he frowned slightly, musing over the words that had just appeared. Suddenly Kettle froze. His eyes flared as if he'd realized something. His gaze fixed on the line of text. He frowned in confusion. Could it be that it's not a beast-only quest meant for the snowy plateau? His face shifted color as if wary of something. Or could there be some other issue? No sooner had that thought passed than rain began to pour down violently, thunder roaring angrily and tearing the sky. No sooner had that thought passed than rain began to pour down violently, thunder roaring angrily and tearing the sky. Inside the house, a slender hand slammed the corner of the stack of papers down on the table. Aline bowed her head and fell silent, speechless. Before her and Erin was the quiet space with the guild receptionist, Rosa. Aline kept thinking about who had commissioned the task. What kind of person would that be? A string of daydreams appeared. Since they're mercenaries, they'll have a sharp edge or be covered in scars. No matter, they'd look very cool. Amid the downpour, a firm foot stepped out, splashing water everywhere. A bell tinkled as the door swung open. Hearing the noise, Rosa spoke, snapping Aline out of her reverie. "You have arrived." A flash of white hair slipped mysteriously behind the door. Seeing Kettle's silhouette, she anxiously turned to look, finally at last. A massive, muscular figure emerged through the rain, eyes glowing like two fireflies and sending chills through the room. All of Aline's fantasies vanished in an instant. Her face went deathly pale when she saw him. The moment Kettle appeared, the air felt crushed. Both she and Erin froze, their bodies rigid. Each step he took closer made Aline startle in alarm. Her face immediately turned ashen with fear. "No, could it be?" Kettle said coldly, "Very pleased to meet you." Her eyes showed the whites in terror, nearly wetting herself. "My lord, a mercenary." In panic, she fainted at once into Erin's shocked arms. Seeing Kettle still standing there, he cried out in fear, "Wait, aren't you Miss Aline? Who exactly are you?" He looked at them with a calm, icy gaze that sent shivers down their spines. "Indeed, it's been a long time since anyone treated me with such caution in this territory," Kettle thought. "After defeating the demon, the locals no longer avoided me." He then turned to ask the receptionist, "Rosa, are these people my employers?" Rosa immediately answered yes. She kept her composure and spoke slowly. "Let me introduce them." Under his cold stare, Rosa said, "This is the person who will be responsible for escorting you, Lord Kettle, a man of the wilds." Hearing that, Erin showed a stunned look and stammered, "WH what?" He froze and then shouted, "A man of the wilds? What kind of nonsense is that?" "Immediately, I demand a different mercenary." Suddenly, Rosa's tone became more serious than ever. "So you mean to say that now your intention is?" She glanced coldly at them and replied without emotion, "Are you questioning the decision of our mercenary guild?" Erin panicked and stammered, "Ah, no, I didn't mean..." Rosa cut him off immediately. "If you doubt the mercenary guild's verdict." Her eyes flashed with anger and she said in a low voice, "Then this deal will be as if it never happened. We will refund the deposit." He trembled and protested, "That's not what I meant." Kettle's face went blank at the indescribable scene, feeling as if he had just become a ticking bomb. A sudden voice rang out, startling him, "I will accept." Aline calmly adjusted her outfit, and then leisurely rose after fainting for a moment. Seeing her solemn demeanor, Erin nervously parted his lips and hurriedly said, "Miss Aline." But Kettle showed a flash of surprise at Aline's resolute posture. Her delicate, pale hand reached forward slightly as she spoke, asking for assistance. She maintained an air of haughtiness yet cautiousness as she introduced herself. "My name is Aline."
Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more awesome content.